Hey everyone, hope you're having a wonderful day. Welcome to Canada Votes. You're watching Borderline Banter, and very crazy sized Dustin is here. Dustin, how's it going?
You know, the technical decisions are all made by Mike. Welcome to the
Let's
show,
just go to this
everyone.
one right here because that's just
Mike is
sitting in.
still not very good at the technical side, so we're going to do it live.
It's been a
You can
while.
see me moving.
Welcome in everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day. We're gonna be watching some election results tonight. Uh, as I'm sure most of you guys are aware, I am cheering for the Conservatives. I voted Conservative.
Whoa, you're
Um,
not supposed to say who you voted for, Mike.
I'm allowed to say what I want to say. That's
Jeez. Didn't any Americans tell you how to do this? And also, spoiler, before the show started, I asked if he got a sticker. All you Americans out there can point and laugh. He does not have a sticker for
yeah.
voting.
Well,
hmm
it is what
It's
it
kind of
is.
funny. We
Um,
have freedom down here. I'm just saying.
okay.
Uh,
So
Atrium of
But
right
anyways, yeah,
now,
we're watching the start of this.
let's get off the bat right here too. So it says 67 winning right now for the Liberals, but like for instance, this poll right here, this says count as a Conservative win. He's up by 44 votes. They've only counted one out of 220 polls. 220 polls, sorry, my bad. So it's still got a long ways to go. Um,
steamed
So I am
7 is what you're
noticing the
seeing at the
screen is
bottom of
kind
your
of cutting
screen
it
there,
off and just
but
saying
we only have one
what the Conservatives have and not what the
elected at this
Liberal
stage,
has.
so we're
yeah,
standing
because
by
we
for
don't want
more
to see what they
results, and
have.
that's what he has
Yeah.
for us right
I'm
now.
kidding.
We've been really eager
So
There
to
it's
we
wait
seven
to
go.
to
find out what's going
something.
to happen in Miramichi
There
Grand
we
Lake.
go.
So
My
let's
bad.
Probably
Okay.
just
look
need to
at the
cut
first
off that.
results
We don't
from
care what
there.
else is on YouTube.
Nothing very
Okay.
conclusive
Cool.
at this point. Not a lot of votes counted, but
But
So
yeah,
yeah,
like
we
for
can see
one
instance,
this
thing I
is
should point
very
out to you,
very
as
early.
we
but
do
this is
get
a big
hopefully
change
soon
for the Conservatives.
more
This is all
results from
Atlantic Canada
Miramichi
so
Grand
far.
Lake, both
They got
Mike
7
Dawson
seats.
and Lisa
I don't
Harris
think that's
point
what it
out
was before.
that the riding is really different depending on which polls you're looking at. They're conservative areas,
Correct, yeah.
they're liberal areas, and so we really have to be cautious about reading too much, even in the early results. And of course, we would read nothing in this really early result, but this is
Canada, what
a
am I looking
riding that
for
the
here?
Conservatives won
Canada
last time around, and they're leading
seat
right now.
Okay,
simulator.
but the results are coming, and that is encouraging. As we wait for more
Oh,
results, we're
so we
going to
can
take a
kind of pull
short
up
break. This will probably be
what the
the
seats
only
look
one
like in
tonight because
Canada.
we're very
Yes, I
busy.
spelled
Canada
simulator
Votes
wrong. But
2025 will continue right after
there's
this.
one I like. I can't. Let me see if I can find it. Like, okay. Too close to call. That's not it.
The top issue for me is
This
affordability.
is live here, everybody.
So
But
whether
yeah,
it's housing, gas,
Yeah,
groceries,
so
student
apologies for the
loans,
ads. We can probably
affordability
mute
this
it
really
isn't an
is my
ad. I
top
think this is
election issue,
actually
which I'll be voting on for the first
somebody's
time.
Your
talking.
Oh,
parents are
is
both
this
in the
part of it?
automotive
Yeah,
industry.
this is
So talk to
voters
me
in
about
Canada.
how the tariffs will impact your vote.
I live in Ontario where auto is the main industry, and both my parents work in that industry. My dad was laid off last year, and my mom is still working in auto. So for my
Where
dad to be
is that
rehired
I
and
was
for my
looking
mom's
for
job
here?
to keep
I'm
going,
gonna.
auto is really important. And I'm starting university,
I don't know
so
what
that's an
you're
added
looking for. Is it
expense
the one you were doing
that will
last
really
night?
suffer
Yeah, you
if
know that one.
the job stability does not exist on the auto industry anymore.
What are you looking for in, a
Yeah, so I'm
new
surprised
leader?
that you guys don't
Well,
have it
obviously, if
as
the
crazy
tariffs
as
go
we
into
do. When
effect, there'll
America's
be
doing elections, there's like
a
100
decrease in
sites where
job
you can go
stability.
do whatever you
And so I
want and
think it
pick
really is the
who
federal
wins
government's
what, and
responsibility to make
it
sure
can even be
that
filled in as
lower
it
and
looks
middle
so
class families
far,
can
or
still
as people are
afford,
predicting it, or polls are predicting
housing,
it.
Yeah, here. Okay,
groceries,
let's go here.
gas, kind of like as the
All
minimum.
right, so
So
let's see
like
here.
I live in
Maybe okay,
Brampton,
maybe
which
I'm
has
wrong,
really high house
but
pricing,
like this is actually yeah. So
either
they
mortgages or rent. It's really
so far.
unaffordable. So
I
yes,
wish I had
build
a
the
better
homes,
seat,
but
but
make
so
sure that
far
those homes are
last time
affordable
they
for
only
the lower
had
and middle
one, two.
classes.
Actually, that's not it
And
either.
then in
They had
addition,
one seat
groceries
last
is
time.
really
One
important.
seat, and I just turned it blue by
Maybe a
mistake.
tax break or something else that can make sure
One
that
seat. They're now at
at
7
least the
seats.
bare
So
minimum
that's
of
pretty.
affordability is there.
And it's not over
And
yet. That's
then
still early
also
count,
there's
so we
gas,
can't
which
can't
the
count
prices for
anything.
gas recently went
But
down with the
like
removal of the carbon tax.
that's a
And
positive
so like
sign for
that's
the
one of the
conservatives.
things that I'm looking at
Now
when
I
I'm
So
think it's
from an
time
deciding
to
who
vote.
American's
to vote.
perspective,
Definitely
this
the
map is
responses that we've seen already
confusing
from
and
all
dumb
of the
looking.
different parties,
Well, yeah.
Prime
So
Minister
What
Mark Carney,
where is
and all of
what
that
has
he's
come in
doing
so
with
far?
this isn't map
negotiations with
yet.
the
So this
US.
isn't a current
That's
map.
really important.
We are
But
responding
where are
with
the
purpose
places that have
and with force.
Currently,
Obviously,
I
19
have
or
to
there's a very
find
whatever?
out.
Like
One
where are we
optimistic
second.
even at?
attitude still because it is an election. I'm
Also,
hoping
a
that
little preamble for
maybe
anybody
something
who's
could still
watching
be
and has
done
no idea about
about
Canadian elections,
some
which is
of the
likely
tariffs that are going
everybody.
on for auto.
Their
And
election
if
is
something can be done,
trying to get,
that's
what is it,
definitely going to win my
172
vote.
seats
My
to
parents,
win the
they worked
majority,
really hard for the last
as opposed
2 years.
to down here in
They had
America,
me and
we
my
always have our
brother. They
270 to
have
win
two
thing
cars
that we're
and a
counting
nice home
towards.
in Brampton. It really
Uh,
was living the
But there's
immigrant dream
also,
for the last
just like
few
in America,
years.
there's the
It's
popular
only
vote behind
recently
this.
that affordability has
Looking at the
become
most
such
up
an
to date, the
issue
Liberals
that
have finally
that
passed
dream
the
is kind of
Conservatives.
slipping away.
Okay.
Even though they have twice as many seats, they are neck and neck on the popular vote.
So right there. Right there. Close. I don't care. So here's a live map right here.
Okay, so this is a good image because we just saw that whole filled in thing.
So this is it right here. This is what it was before. Now there's
That's
now
what we
like
have so far.
so it looks like that was actually that was all red, and now there's a lot more blue. So that's still early though. It is still
Yep.
early. But St. John's, yeah. But let's see what happens.
Now, one of my critiques is if you're going to have colors for parties, why would you give the third party the same color as the second party? There's two different blues. We have a
That's-
lot more
Welcome
colors
back.
than
Elections
that's the block.
Canada's
So
website
they're
is
Quebec,
down
so it
for
doesn't matter.
some
That's
parts of
Right,
the
right.
country. So
Right,
if you
right,
are
but there's
looking
lots of
for
colors.
But there's
where
green
to vote,
parties,
you
you
would
can't
normally
use
put your
green.
postal
See, there's
code
green
in there
party.
and head to your
Okay.
polling station.
Purple.
Here's some
Purple's
other ways you can do
PPC.
it if you are encountering that
Okay,
problem.
there's lots of
First of all, the
colors.
voter
Yeah,
You know
we'll
what I'm
keep
saying?
going.
card,
Yeah,
which
like-
you
Don't-
perhaps
don't-
got
don't
in the
use
mail, will
blue.
tell you where to
Yellow.
go. If you are encountering that
I'm
problem,
sure
and
that's the
again,
Communist
it's not
Party.
everyone. You can go to
No, it's NDP, isn't it? I see yellow on the screen.
cdca/results. Let me give you a little bit more
Is
information about
NDP
how
yellow?
votes are counted in this country.
Oh, Collins
Unlike
are up at
some
10. Look at
provinces,
that.
the federal election
Again,
is done
still early. That means
manually.
nothing.
That means you write it
You can
down
go
with
here
your X on a piece of paper.
and actually
It gets
see.
counted manually. It takes about 15 minutes for those polling station doors
See,
to
this
Oh,
one
close,
kind of sucks.
for the people to start
I'm
counting,
gonna
and
move it
of
over a
course
little
for
bit.
scrutineers, members usually of
This
parties
actually
to
shows how many
watch
seats
over
there are.
that count.
So
It
the
is all
Liberals
to
now
make
got the
sure that
popular
this
vote.
is a
It's
trusted
still early though.
process and that
But-
everything
Yeah, it's still
happens,
extremely close though.
the
Look,
way
I mean,
it
it's like
should.
within
so that is
2000
why it
and
So
sometimes
one
takes a little
conservative
it's
has
longer
different, so it
because
doesn't
been
really
elected.
show
it's
that
all
same
being
thing.
done by
One
human
conservative
beings.
has
Let's
officially
go
been
back to David
elected.
Cochran now, who's at the map to give us a bit
Oh,
of
hey,
a sense
that is nice how
again
this
of
shows
what we should be
the
watching
the
for
ones that
in
are actually counted enough
Okay,
to be
so
done.
we'll go back to
Let me go
Newfoundland and
back here.
Labrador, where we have the most results, and that is a very relative statement at this hour of the night. But we have at least results
Oh, here they're showing the
from
map
all
now
7
as well.
ridings and one projected elected right up here in Labrador. You see more blue than you would normally see in Newfoundland and
So
Labrador.
the projected
This is what it
elected is
looked like
the
last
big
time,
chunk there.
where you had just the one conservative seat. You now have 3 when we bring it back to real time based on the results that we have so far. None of them projected elected yet, but this is the sort of change the Liberals were afraid of and that the Conservatives were
Yeah,
desperate
looks like
to
they
see
could have,
because
you know,
they only
a
ever
little-
got to
little
11
block
seats
there.
in Atlantic Canada when Stephen Harper won his majority in 2011. So the path to 11, where they are now and higher, that is, it starts here on the rural part of the island of Newfoundland. We do have another elected,
And the thing
though,
is, as soon as it
in
gets to
Newfoundland and
Ontario,
Labrador,
I'm pretty sure
and this
we
is
can
in
call it
Cape
for
Spear, I believe.
whatever
Okay,
party's
I'm
there.
going to just make sure my fingers can get to the right one. Here we go. Cape Spear.
You don't
Tom
want to call the
Osborne
election too early,
comes
Mike.
from a very
But okay, so this
long-time
guy's up
political
by
family.
Remember when
2000
America
His
did
mother,
that?
his uncle, all members of the
Significant.
provincial legislature at one time.
Remember
He now
when
has
America did
just
that
under
and
a
we never got to
2,000 vote
see
lead over Corey
what happened
Curtis,
with the
who's an
Jeb Bush
executive with Oceanex
presidency?
in St. John's. Tom Osborne's been a
Or no, it wasn't
provincial
Jeb Bush.
Conservative
Al
cabinet
Gore
minister,
presidency.
a Speaker of the House of Assembly, and a provincial Liberal cabinet minister. He can add Member of Parliament to
Sorry,
a
I was just
fairly
remembering the guy
extensive,
who
political resume.
helped
As
stop
Tom
the count.
Osborne has been the second Liberal tonight elected, joining Philip Earle up in Labrador. So
Okay,
good
so
starts
did
for Tom
they
Osborne
call
and
it?
Philip Earle,
Okay.
but a good start for
So
the
this guy
Conservatives.
Okay, now
called
we're
it. They did,
14.
look at
They're
that.
doing that right now.
They updated it
in
right
rural
there.
Watch
too,
it
Newfoundland
so-
and
too.
Labrador. And look, there's a lot of
But
blue
also
right here,
Conservatives
up
added
to
one
12
more to the
seats.
leading
Remember,
column.
when we did that path to victory, path to majority segment right off the top of the show,
And there's lots of
Liberals
little
needed to be at
pieces down
25.
there.
Look at they're even.
the Conservatives 12 would have been a very good
Yeah, I mean, this
result
is
for them in
very, very
Atlantic Canada.
close,
That's where they're
14,
sitting
12.
at right now. You're
Of
even
course, we're
seeing
trying to
one
get
on
to
Prince Edward
170,
Island,
so
where normally the
neither,
red soil
no one's even
delivers
10% of the
a
way
lot
there
of
yet.
red seats, but there is one blue leading right now. Ridings like
Yeah,
Miramichi
this is
in
still
New
way
Brunswick,
on
which the
the
Liberals had
East
targeted, are
Coast.
holding right now. You see moving up into Central
And this is
Milton,
also
where
very
Sean
similar
Fraser
to in
came out of
America, where
retirement.
at the very beginning it's
Retired
trickling
when
in
the
a few
Liberals were down
places, and then
25.
there's
He
a
was
big
talked
dump
into
truck at like
unretiring
7
when they
p.m.,
were
8
not down
p.m., and 9
25,
p.m.
But at least in the early
And then you have
results,
to
he
wait
was
till like
trailing there. So,
midnight
Rosie,
or
in
2 in
terms
the
of
morning for Alaska and
path to
Hawaii.
the majority.
Yep.
The Liberals are 10, 11 seats off their mark at this stage of the
I don't
counting.
know if Canada
Conservatives
has
are pretty
anything.
much
You
right
have to
where
wait till
they need
crazy
to
in
be
the
at
morning
this
for it, is
stage
there?
of the
Well,
counting.
there's
So
a
we'll see
few
if any of that
ridings,
flips
but
when the
they're
advance
pretty good
polls
at
come
calling
in,
it.
when
Like
more
there's
numbers
some,
come in.
like for
But at
instance,
this
Pierre,
stage
this is
of
gonna
the
take a
night,
bit because I
it looks
saw
like
the
a pretty
phone book.
promising start for
91
Pierre
names are on the
Poilievre's
ballot.
Conservatives on the East
91
Coast.
goddamn
I I'm
names
looking
because
again
there's
to
a coup
see,
going on
how
there.
quickly the polls are coming
By the
in.
way,
It's
did
only
we talk
129
about that?
for Sean
We
Fraser.
should go
Exactly.
into that
Yeah.
tonight.
So again, we
how
are
there's
not sure
91
how
people
this is
on
all going
Pierre's
to shake out.
ballot.
And Rosie, just to go back to what I was
85
told by
have the
both
same
conservative
agent.
and liberal
Yeah.
campaigns,
So
the liberals banked a lot
that's
of
kind
vote
of
very
something
heavily in the advanced polls.
weird,
and those come
but
in at
whatever,
inconsistent
you know.
times. Day of tends to
Just
come first.
normal
And
days, I
that's
guess.
seeing,
And-
the trends we're seeing early.
And we're
Is it illegal?
reminding you all of that,
No,
of course, because
but
here,
it seems very
13
suspicious.
to 13
Oh,
is
13,
Should it be
13, look at
significant,
that.
and it's moving around.
How
a
do they
lot, and
take
that's
one
why.
away?
It's because the votes are
Because
being
the
counted.
votes are
We are
counting
going
still.
now to
This
Adrian.
isn't
Yeah, you bet, Rosie.
the verdict.
No, they
because I think we
stole.
wanna actually
Stop the
talk
steal.
about
They're stealing
another province
votes.
that we'll
I
be
want,
waiting
oh,
for soon,
speaking of
and
stop
that's
the
Ontario.
steal, you want to
because
talk
the
about stop the
pressure
steal?
certainly will be
How
on
the
Ontario
Liberals
for the
won and
Liberals.
planted stop the
Maybe
steal
some of the pressure
buttons
is
at
eased off for the
conservative
Conservatives.
rallies,
We'll see.
trying
It
to
is
play
the
a
key
Donald
prize.
Trump card
The Liberals in
and got
particular
caught
looking
doing
to
it.
pick up seats that they
Wait, what? They
won
put
in their
buttons?
2015 majority,
Oh, like
but
thin
then lost
buttons
in
you put in
subsequent
I was thinking like a button you
elections.
push.
A lot of those seats are along the 401, that the
Okay, here, Liberal
biggest
officers plan
highway in
stop
Canada.
plan.
And
Okay,
because
here we go, right
David
here.
Cummins' job is
Let
to
me
get up
fix
very
this for
early in the
everybody.
morning, and he'll come in at 4 a.m. We thought we'd send him out because it's going to be a
Okay.
late night. I mean, why not? So
I'm gonna
David,
mute this
you are
just for now, so we can read that. So Liberal operatives plant stop the steal buttons at Conservative conference. Liberals parties say campaigners regrettably got carried away with use of buttons. So they planted these buttons, trying to say they were left by the Conservatives, saying the Conservatives are pulling a Donald Trump stop the steal, right? Trying to say we're going the same route as Trump. But yeah, they weren't candidates or anything. They were just staffers, but 2 Liberal staffers attended last week's Canada Strong and Free Networking conference where they planted buttons that used Trump-style language and highlighted division within the Conservative Party. That was really hard for me to say that. Wow. But yeah,
So what do they mean by that division within the Conservative Party?
I don't know. Let's see. The conference often referred to by the former name, the Manny Conference, is an operating for conservative-leaning Canadians to talk about policy proposal and networking. Okay, so I don't know. There's just some things. Let's see what this is, though. One said stop the steal. Okay, I don't really care. We already know what they say. Buttons planted 2 staffers. Yeah, I don't know why it would put division. Because maybe some conservatives are like, they're not. It's maybe like the Republican Party there. Like just because they're Republican doesn't mean they're full conservative, right? I don't know. I can answer the question. Sorry. I'm just speaking.
I feel like the answer was literally in that first paragraph
Was it?
itself.
Where?
Yeah, it sounds like the Conservative Party has some people who like Trump-style language,
Okay, there it is.
and
Yeah.
it has some people who don't.
Yeah. Okay, there it is, right there. Yeah.
So you've got some pro-Trumper conservatives, and you've got some never-Trumper conservatives.
Yeah.
This is very familiar. We have this down here.
So then these liberals came in and planted this to probably divide
Now-
the party more.
Now, if somebody were to not vote conservative, do they think that they would get them to go for something like that CPP thing, or do they literally think they
PPC
could
for the
actually get
record.
them to go to liberal?
PPC for the record.
Because this is obviously a wedge thing. They're doing what you're saying. They're driving a wedge, but the wedge is between different
Levels,
how do you say
branches,
it?
branches.
no, not really factions, but it's like
Branches,
different
I don't know.
people who hold different stances on a particular topic. Because the thing is, those people
Oh,
might not
well,
hold
we left for
the
too long.
divided
Person
on
has
other
already
topics.
won
Look at that.
writing
We're never
before.
too late.
You
We
give
can
them a
always
little
catch back
star,
up with
a
whoever
little,
they are.
gold star. Just keep that in mind.
Look,
'cause
they
as we
just
were
changed it
talking
as you
about earlier,
unpaused it.
incumbency can be a
I know.
factor here, but that means that
Justin
The
Trudeau's
Conservatives
first
went back down
year,
to 12
2015, and Jean Chrétien's first
for
year
whatever
in
reason.
1993. But no
um,
surprise to see
how many of them are
Rob
actually
Moore
locked
in
in,
the
though?
lead there. Not a huge lead. And
Still 2 to 1
early
as far as
in
I can
Funds
see over
Oil.
here.
Tobic Mactaquac also a riding that the Conservatives have done
And
well
of course,
in.
the popular vote is
Richard
still
Bragdon
staying
has
very
Look at
won the
that,
low.
last two times,
PPC, but
and
look
as
at the
you can see,
Conservatives
he's
still
in
winning.
the
That's the
lead
one I
at
mean,
this point.
PPC.
Right?
And this will
So-
certainly come
Yeah.
as no surprise from the largest
So, yeah.
city in New Brunswick.
But see, every time we
Moncton,
see NDP,
and this
that's
riding
splitting the
also
votes
includes
with the
Dieppe,
Liberals.
Not Riverview any longer, though.
Right?
It used to, but Riverview, through redistribution, is no longer part of this riding. Jeanette
No,
Taylor
I mean, if
has
people are
been
voting
the
PPC,
MP
isn't that
here
taking away
since
from Conservative?
2015. She is the president of the
PPC, yes.
Treasury
Hey,
Board,
playing
one
off
of
of
a
what's
handful
going on.
of cabinet
And-
posts.
Let's
And
see,
you
voted
could
for
also
Jake
argue the
Mitt.
same
Comfortable lead for
He
her.
go
with the
Jake,
NDP.
Thank you so
playing
much
off
for
a vote
that,
for
Ian.
Jake Mitt.
I'm going to go back to
Jake
the
Mitt is
panel
saying.
because I'm going to put you guys
You'll
on
get
early time
everybody-
rendering at issue in because I am
I'm
getting
not
emails
saying that.
demanding.
We
Sean
literally
Connery
haven't even
here,
said much
so
about JagMeet,
we
and
have
neither
to
have they.
respect
that.
He
But
hasn't
I wanted
made
to
it
go
to the
back to
screen
something
yet.
Jake
that
Meat
you
We'll
said,
talk
Cousin
about
Kenny,
him if he makes it to the screen. I
Playing off
guess.
what you wasted your vote, okay?
So right now,
You,
the Liberals are
you
leading
just threw your
off
vote
with the
away.
vote.
You might as
But
well
it
wrote
is-
Donald
I
J.
wanted to
Trump
dwell on
you
it
know?
for a
But
minute
is
because
that
it is
true that he's giving
interesting that
everyone a car?
Conservatives frequently win.
He will say
Also, isn't
that.
that-
He'll
is
say
an
that.
Italian
It
car?
doesn't translate into
Is that not even a
forming
Canadian
government.
car?
And I gather that's all again
That's
about voter
Jamie's plan.
efficiency and where the seats
Non-Canadian.
Shouldn't we find
So each of the last
There's
two
got to be a
elections, the
Canadian
Conservative
car brand,
Party,
right?
No,
obtained
I don't
more
really think
popular
so.
vote than they were
Ford?
33-34% versus 31-32. for the
Several
Liberals.
car brands are manufactured or
I
have
think
significant
it's
presence in
entirely
Canada. That's not
possible
really.
tonight that we'll see.
I guess you manufacture them, so it
conservative
counts.
vote if they get out
Honda,
that
Chevy,
vote, which I
Ford,
think is more
Chrysler, Toyota,
intense, more
Lexus.
motivated, north of 40%.
Okay,
It could
so
be the
that's
first
2 to 1.
conservative.
I guess those aren't
campaign since
your
Brown Mulroney in
homegrown
1988,
companies. They
37
all came
years
from
ago to do
America,
that.
but they are
Very good
manufactured up
chance
there.
of
So.
exceeding Stephen Harper's high water mark of 39%.
But the Maserati,
and yet
I didn't
you
hear a
could still see
Maserati.
the scenario.
Now
being
this
made
guy
there.
did turn his back on
but,
Albertans, so
falls short on seats. But what we're seeing early here.
Yeah, but how
is
do you
I
go through
think,
life without
it
turning your
is
back on
early, and
somebody
I
at some
do
Yeah,
think
point?
that
that's
smaller
and I
population
can't even
rural
blame him that
polling
much. Like
stations
I'm not.
tend to report
I
through
get it.
later 'cause
I
it
hate
is
it,
quicker to
but
count.
he did do it.
But this is a
not
fairly
as bad as
what
others
the
did.
public, what the media polling was suggesting. So I think most conservatives right now would be
And a
taking
lot of
at
times
least
you get
some faint
presented two
hope
shitty
in
choices.
that. Their basic premise going into today is
I'm familiar with getting
people
two
really
shitty
do
choices.
want
Douche
change.
sandwich and
And a lot
no,
of those
douche
shy
and a shit
conservative
sandwich, right?
voters
A
perhaps
giant
felt
douche and a
intimidated
turd
into saying
sandwich.
they were going to
Turd
vote
sandwich, yeah.
conservative, and perhaps
Yep.
weren't entirely forthcoming. So we'll see. But that's happened in previous elections where conservatives outperformed the polls.
So we're still
so
waiting to
far.
see if he ever
Very
makes it
early
to the board.
indications in
I don't
Atlantic
know.
Canada,
I don't know.
something
We're
like
gonna
that may
wait.
be happening.
I don't
We're
know
still
a
waiting to
lot of
see
shy
how long it takes him to make it to
conservatives.
the
That's not a
board.
thing that I am familiar with. I'm not doubting that it
NDP,
can
I
happen.
don't think
Most
NDP is gonna get in
conservatives
there.
are
Like,
quite
let's
out
look
there
at the
and
old
proud about
map.
it. Arif Ronnie,
Okay,
talk
there's the
about
old
that.
map.
the
I
that
really
issue,
think
that
NDP
poll
is going to
popular
lose
vote
everything. They might get a
versus,
seat in
voter
BC here,
efficiency and whether we should
but I'm pretty
read
sure
anything into things so
NDP is
far.
going
And
to
again,
lose
the
there,
Liberals
there,
have
there,
taken
there.
the lead in the popular vote, but previous
There,
elections
they
that
might
has been
keep
the
the
trend.
Alberta
Well, I
one
think
right
we
there.
have to understand the functioning of the electoral system as it is.
Well, then
right?
that'll
We have
be a
first past the
seat,
post
so they'll be
system,
on
we
the
have
screen.
I
ridings
don't know.
distributed.
They
Some
might.
ridings are much
Anyways,
smaller in terms of
what
their
I
I'm
was
gonna call
saying
that,
is,
but
population
sorry.
size. Some are much larger.
you're calling stuff that
But
hasn't even gotten
I
a
think-
blip in.
No, I'm
You
just
calling
calling
showed
that
map
that
and what we
NDP is
have
going to
is
lose.
nothing.
I don't know who's going to win it.
By
The Liberals are
90%.
probably going to win it,
Too
but
early
the
to
shape
call.
part.
in
Sure.
terms of your vote
Too early to
efficiency.
call it. You
And I
can't
think
call it
as
too
we've
early.
seen so many times, we're sitting in the Toronto studio. We've talked about the 416. We've talked about the
Also,
905.
you now
These are
heard
key
from one
battlegrounds,
chatter.
and this is
That means
going to be
100%
determinative
of our
in this
chatters
kind of
voted for
election.
Jagmeet.
I think it's also
Yeah.
telling what you and David were talking about earlier.
So,
that
Like,
I
I'm
mean, we
pretty
have
sure
a
the guy who
full
said he
IC
voted for
audience.
Jagmeet is full
at
of shit.
record-setting
so.
levels, those have
If
yet
we
to be
extrapolate
counted.
the polling
We're
from
also
our
looking at more
audience,
rural,
when we
sites
actually
reporting
find that,
than
let me
urban
check the
sites,
numbers
and that's
here.
going to affect
The NDP will win
the results that we're seeing.
with
So I think we need to be
172
patient in terms of what we're
seats.
seeing, but I think it's also important that
Well,
we're not
there you
taking anything
go.
for granted as to
You
whether
know, there you
our
go.
Based
volunteers are
on
out
a
there.
poll
I was
using
with
the
Well,
Border
I
and Banter
voted,
chat
but I
audience.
didn't vote
this morning in
Jagmeet,
Toronto,
so.
and they are motivated.
Well,
They're
you haven't
not
typed in
taking
chat.
anything for granted. They're working extremely
And I
hard,
didn't vote
which is, I
Pierre
think,
either.
what needs to be
so.
done to earn
I typed in
people's
chat, but I didn't vote.
GOTV
I didn't
get
vote
out the vote
for
for people
any
that are not
buddies
as
on the
nerdy as
leaderboard
we
right
are. I will say too, with
Can
the
I send a
redistribution,
mail-in
one of the
write-in
things that
to
happened
Canada?
was Alberta picked up
You're
3
too late,
seats
but you could've
as
tried.
part of the rebalancing
Would it
of
work?
the population.
Maybe.
So there is an attempt to sort of
You guys got
course correct
security?
a little bit for
No.
what Jason Kenny's talking about.
Hmm.
Last word
They-
to you there,
Well,
Randall
I walked
Garrison,
in
on
They
that.
today.
keep
They didn't even
kicking
look
out
at me. I
Canada
walked in.
Report.
It's a
political
school.
scientists. What
And
this
they didn't even-
demonstrates is we have
they
an
just like, oh,
archaic
come on
electoral
in.
system. And most world democracies, most advanced
They keep taking
democracies
seats
have
away
moved
from the
proportional
conservative number.
representation,
Yeah, it's
where
going to be
every vote
back and forth
actually
for a bit
counts
here.
toward
Or
getting
maybe not. Or maybe the
representation,
Liberals are just going
in
to take
the
off and
national
it's over.
parliament. And so if we
And
had
Canada's
changed
gonna
to that,
burn.
which the Liberals promised to do,
But
and then
we'll
reneged
find
on the
out.
promise, we
Tonight
wouldn't
on
be having these
Borderline
arcane discussions about
Banter.
voter efficiency and other things.
But yeah.
We'd be talking about what people actually wanted being reflected in Parliament.
We'll
Yeah,
see what
that was not a
happens. Like, there's still
conversation
a long way
at
to
all
go.
during this
Not at
election,
all.
electoral reform. Okay, gentlemen, thank
Green
you very much
Party's
for
up to
that. I'm going to
600
go now
votes.
to David Cochran.
Yeah, Rosie, this is how it is filling in across Atlantic Canada. We're still waiting on results from one riding that appears to be Charlottetown in Prince Edward Island. We do have the first Conservative elect of the night, as Clifford Small has been elected by the CBC Decision Desk, winning his second term term in the House of Commons in the riding of Central Newfoundland. You can see there a lead that has just kept growing throughout the night, more than 3,000 votes ahead of Lynette Powell, the Liberal candidate, a doctor and former head of the Newfoundland and Labrador Medical Association. This was the big target in Newfoundland and Labrador by the Liberals, who are now behind their performance of 6 seats in that province in the last election. And Heather Gillis with CBC Newfoundland and Labrador.
Does it give us the
standing by
percent
with
of votes
Clifford
in?
Small, I believe. Heather.
Well,
Or is that the 120 at 233
Yeah,
thing
hi,
at the
David.
top?
I'm here with Clifford Small, and we have a lot of happy and exuberant
there's how many
conservatives here.
seats are still coming. Polls are,
Because Clifford Small has a commanding lead here. Thank you so much for joining us and being with us, Clifford. How do you feel about
Clifford
your
won,
win
Taylor
here
Swift
tonight?
Well, I feel great. I feel very happy for the people of the riding of Central Central Newfoundland and for the people behind me who made this possible. It's their victory. It's a victory for Central Newfoundland riding and a victory for Newfoundland Labrador.
What were you hearing from people at the doors? What were the big issues for people who came out and voted for you today?
See, that one's
At
still
the
very
doors,
close, 300
cost
votes.
of living was number one.
That one's
Crime,
50 votes.
it
You know,
really, at the doors, things haven't
What one?
changed since
Central
the way they
Nova?
were in December. So
another
it's
50
no
votes,
surprise
54
to me.
votes.
We soldiered on. We worked hard. We
that
knew
one's
the
got a few
support was
hundred on
there.
the
The
beginning,
people
that's
have
probably
spoken,
Liberal.
and I thank them very, very much.
Yeah, I'm not
for the
sure what you're
support
looking
that
at
they've
because
given
we're
me
still just
Right
seeing
here
the
in the riding
live
in
feed.
Central
Halifax
Newfoundland.
right here,
And it's
see?
from all over the riding. It's not concentrated in any one area. It's from
There's the
everywhere.
numbers in
So
the corner, right beside
my
the
heart
cons.
is
Oh,
bursting.
that thing down there that I'm not really paying attention to.
My heart's bursting.
His heart's bursting. Somebody get him medical.
Yeah.
Why are they cheering?
It's a very
Get
humbling
him medical.
victory, and I'd like to thank the people again. I can't thank them enough, and my volunteers.
And what are you looking forward to about your second term in Ottawa?
I'm looking forward to being a part of a Conservative government. I'm expecting that we're going to double our seat count in Atlantic Canada. That was my prediction right from the beginning of this election. I predicted 3 or 4 here in this province. I'm predicting 16 to 18 in Atlantic Canada.
We
the
need
blue
that.
wave has started, I think.
All right, well, we'll keep an eye on the polls. Congratulations,
Thank
sir.
you.
Okay, David, so Clifford Small there, the MP for Central Newfoundland yet again.
All right, Heather, thank you so much. That's a happy crowd there in Central Newfoundland as Clifford Small is on his way back to Ottawa. You can see on either side of him, these were the 2 Liberal-held seats that the Liberals were most worried about just because of the loss of incumbency, weak ground game they believed in this particular riding. Clifford Small elected, and one more Liberal in Newfoundland and Labrador to tell you about who's been elected, and that is Paul Connors, who holds the riding of Avalon. He now has a 2,100 vote lead over Steve
It is
Kent,
kind of crazy how
the
they call it
former
so early.
Deputy Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador.
Yeah, because look, that's
And one of
95
those
out of
ridings where
200.
there was a
Yeah.
nomination
So it's less than
controversy
half
with
of
the
his done.
party
He's leading by
nominated Steve
2,100.
Kent,
That's not an
displacing
insane
people
lead.
who had been
Now they're probably
gearing
right,
up for
'cause
months,
it's-
if not more
but
than a
they
year, to
don't know
seek
for
the
sure,
nomination for the
you know?
party there. But Central
Different
Party
part of the
headquarters
area, different
came
part of
in
the
and made
city.
Steve Kent the candidate there
Yeah.
at the last minute. And Rosie, there's some other controversies.
Well, not to mention the
Mr.
NDP
Kent,
has
an old
800
selfie of
there,
him
so it's not like it's
wearing
just
a Make America
non-presence.
Great
It's
Again hat. You
taking
don't know how any
some.
of those things play out, but when
Oh.
when you upset some of the grassroots and
You
you're
wear
running
Make
in
America
a
Great hat
Liberal-held
again.
seat where you have no typical roots,
What?
this is often the kind of result you end up with.
Okay, that was a nice moment with Clifford Small,
know.
and that's a good
You can't wear that.
reminder to everyone that
that's
these,
why mine's not
these are
Make
people
America
who are working
Great.
really hard to
It's
serve
Maple.
you and
Make
get
America
your
go
confidence
away.
and get your vote, and they are delighted when they get it, as you saw from Clifford Small. Okay, I do want to show you
that keeping your elbows
one
up?
board, one
No,
graphic
it's
that might give you a
elbows up
sense of
want
where we are
Americans to
right
come
now.
here.
In the evening. Okay,
Is
this is
it?
something called
Yep.
vote change, just to give you
They
a
just
sense
want
of
us to
know
come?
who
They just
is,
don't know it,
doing
okay.
well and who is not
I'm on my
doing
way.
as well. So you can see that
I
very
didn't know you guys
clearly
wanted
in
us to
those
come.
top 2 lines there. Liberals, an increase of 6.3%, but the Conservatives double that. And that is the kind of performance that they would want to see coming out of Atlantic Canada. This is the beginning, at least, of a very good night for the Conservatives. If they can make that kind of gain in Atlantic Canada, and if they can continue that, of course, then through the rest of the country. Let me show you what that looks like
I'm
in
just
terms of
gonna
seat
try
change.
something
So
here,
there you see it.
everybody. So
Up 1 for the Conservatives, down 1 for Liberals. Yes, it's just 2 seats, but it's just one flip, but it does make a difference when obviously every riding counts. And as we start to track what government
not look
Canadians
good,
have
but
chosen
let's
here
see.
tonight, that is the beginning of a picture that we're going to try to paint for you and explain to you as the evening continues. Jason, Kenny, what do you make of that?
Yeah, as I was just saying, it is very
Yeah,
early,
this
but
isn't gonna
still
work.
a
What?
positive sign. There does seem to be a swing, and there's something in that I've been wanting to watch for tonight.
Sure.
We've talked a lot about this NDP switch
You know what, we'll
to the
just
Liberal
go
Party in the
that,
polls, and
that.
notionally that's long-time New Democrats wanting to not to waste their
There.
vote when it comes to standing up to Donald Trump.
how's
But
that look?
one of
At
the
least
things
it's
Mr.
something, okay.
Poilievre has done very effectively is to reach out to traditional private sector unions and union members, working people. I mean, if you look at the kinds of events, he's done hundreds over the past 3 years. Very
See, this
typically
doesn't happen in your
working
life when you have no
people
one to do
in
it for you.
small manufacturing,
okay,
food
'cause
processing,
I
where people
will
make stuff. And he has received far
figure it out here,
more
don't you
endorsements
worry.
from
Boom,
unions
there
than
it is.
any conservative campaign at the federal level I can
Just
recall.
like that, it's done.
And so, and you also see this where
Okay, so the
significant
cons are down
polling
to 9
advantage
now.
for conservatives amongst people
crazy.
who don't have university degrees, typically in
What's
blue-collar
done?
occupations. So I
Done
think we
down
may
to
be
9.
beginning to see
You know?
a
Right,
shift
but before
of
that,
some
you said
traditional
something about being
working
done.
Democrat voters to the conservative
Oh,
column. That appears to be the case so
screen.
far.
With something
in
you
Canada.
never showed or
maybe.
talked
I mean,
about.
that is something that
Dude,
Border's
on
done
the
very
screen, you
successfully
weren't
in Ontario
watching?
for sure. Randall, do you want to weigh in there?
I
Well, I think
was, and it was
it's been
just
a
the
strong
live feed.
strategy. The
And then you said, and
moving,
now
and I
it's
was
done.
getting
And I'm
the,
like,
I was getting the
what's
numbers
done?
here. That was
match
moving
when
all
it comes
over.
to working people.
Our viewer
They've
probably
been,
saw it.
as governments prone to order workers back to work.
Should I be
in strike
watching the feed and have a
situations.
delay, or watch
They've
the
voted
actual
against any
share
of
thing?
the
I
improvements to
I don't
can't
know,
watch
man.
everything, Mike.
So
I can't do
look
it.
at the
it's
next
actually in the
polls are
pudding.
coming in.
You can appeal to people, but you have to actually deliver.
So I
those
just have no
promises.
idea what
And
you're
I think
doing.
that's where this will fall short.
I'm
Okay, I'm
guessing
going to
those
let you
numbers
all
on our
take a little
screen.
break
Yeah.
and bring in
So
an
look,
issue, but we
now,
will see you
right
through the
below
course of
you,
the evening. Thank you
I have
for starting
something there
things
that
off with
shows
us.
the
Appreciate
current
it
number.
very much.
you
We
know?
are now just 39 seconds away from one poll closing,
One
and that's
poll.
in Les Îles de la Madeleine, just off the coast of
Les Îles de la
Quebec
Madeleine.
there, a beautiful place if you've never been. And that will bring us one more poll closing before we get, again, to the big dump of polls closing that happens at 9:30
Yeah, it's going to get coming
Eastern.
crazy. Because
That's
like,
when 266
There you
more
go.
polls close, and we start to get a much
Well, yeah,
better
30
sense
second
of
in
how
two
this night is going to
provinces,
unfold.
there's
But you can already see there on
266
your
of the
screen,
polls.
21 for the Liberals, leading or elected, 10 for the Conservatives. And while the Liberals are off to a good start, it is really the fact that the Conservatives seem to be doing well coming out of Atlantic Canada that would be giving them a little bit of encouraging signs as we head into the next bit of the polls closing. I believe it's Ian now who has some results.
Yeah, and let's start with one that's really interesting, and I think it'll be surprising to a lot of political watchers in New Brunswick, or at least political watchers outside of Madawaska, Restigouche. This is a riding the Liberals have won 3 straight times with about 50% of the vote there. But as you can see, it's the Conservatives that are in
of
the
the
lead.
vote.
That may not look like a big lead, but when you look at the percentage right now, the Conservative candidate has 50% of the vote, and 2,200 votes have been counted so far for him. So last time around, the Conservatives had just under 28%. So that is a big pickup. And as of right now, that pickup is at the expense of the Liberals, the NDP, and the PPC. So that is one
Yay.
that's
Screw the
worth watching.
PPC.
It could be a switch in New Brunswick. Here's another one that could be a flip in New
Yeah, I
Brunswick,
mean,
but
look
another
how
one
close that
that's very
is.
close, as
It's
we
close,
expected
close.
last time around.
Yeah,
The
but like that
Conservatives
90
won
is
here.
really the
This
difference
time around,
potentially
the Liberals
for this
are
one.
in the lead. And by the way, the incumbency factor not in
Obviously,
play
it's
in
way
those
far
last
away.
two
But
25
that's
rounds.
honestly
seconds.
why
The
every vote
incumbent
matters. People are
MPs
like,
not
don't matter.
running
Like, it
again.
does.
And in Fredericton, pretty big lead for David Miles, the Juno winning
I mean, when you look at the
musician
end and
who's
see
trying his
like the
hand at
numbers and start
politics.
to see
I'll
which
have more to
ones
say
like
about
it
that
literally
as the evening
counted
progresses,
and would have
but,
swayed.
not a lot, 7 of
It won't
175
shock some
polls,
people, but-
Rosemary, but fair-sized lead for the
Look, there's
Liberals.
some green people.
Yeah, I should tell people, though, that all 32
We get that down
polls
here,
in
too.
the Maritime,
We got a whole
in
green
the
people
Atlantic
party.
provinces are
Yeah, they got
reporting now. So we do have
got
results
green
coming
candidates,
in from
green
all of those
people.
ridings, which will make everyone really
green laws
happy
they want
here
to do.
because they're all concentrated on their results and the ridings that they are looking at. Look there at the bottom of your screen. That is the beginning of the story of this election. The Liberals leading or elected in 21 as we come out of Atlantic Canada, and the Conservatives leading or elected in 11. Those numbers have changed. They've shifted, and they'll continue to do that as more polls close. We've had one additional poll close in Les Îles de la Madeleine, Gaspésie, and we'll have another big dump of them
I'm
at
so glad I don't
9:30.
get to say
Of
that.
course, Britain's gonna
Gibberish.
be some results, Adrian.
Well, very relieved to see that Charlottetown is okay.
Good.
We're getting first results from Charlottetown. Let's have a look at that.
One
The
of
incumbent
77
Sean
here.
Casey has a lead there. Just one poll reporting, lead of 53 over Natalie Jameson, popular.
That's a pretty big lead, but
MLA
it's one
at
poll.
one point there. He's been campaigning hard.
Yeah.
Just a note here, only 10% of the polls across the whole island are reporting. So obviously these are still early. But why don't we flip to the ones we have some more information? Bobby
little bit
Morrissey,
better,
the incumbent, a lead
20%.
of 69 over Logan McClellan. Again, someone who is well known there. This is a matchup from 2019, just 20 of 99 polls reporting. The third riding here, Malpeque, Heath McDonald.
Okay.
Slightly bigger lead of 250 over Jamie Foxx.
So the
16
person in my
months
right
Jamie
is Stephanie
Foxx has been
Cousy.
on the
You
hustings
won't
there.
see her for a bit.
And the last one to have a look-see, Kent
that's a
McDonald.
good
That
one.
is a
Like,
big
he's
lead
got-
for
he's
Kent
got a big lead,
McDonald over James Aylward. Kent McDonald, the only Liberal candidate that isn't the incumbent on PEI. Liberals are holding so far, but again, just 10% of the polls reporting so far in PEI.
Okay, thank you for that, Adrian. Glad that Charlottetown's doing fine.
Me too.
Yeah, we like it there. Okay, David, I hear you have a pickup of some
Yeah,
kind.
and can I just say, because of the slow count in Charlottetown, someone working on the campaign there took pictures of the results the scrutineers have and sent it to me. Said, here, because you're not getting them, they have a bunch more results. So we should
I don't know if they're allowed to do that, so don't
No, the
reveal any
scrutineers
names.
call it in, the campaigns have it.
Yeah, I don't know if they're allowed to do that.
Look, we got one more elect in Newfoundland.
Yeah, that guy
This
was
is a
just...
gain. For
Another
the
one!
Caroline C.
Woo!
has done it in Long Range Mountains. She
That's
came
over
very
half the
close
polling
second,
in with
in 2021.
pretty good lead
to
there,
Goody Hutchins,
3,000
the
lead.
former cabinet minister who decided not to seek re-election right now. But with 135 of 253 polls reporting, the lead is big enough over former NTV broadcaster Don Bradshaw,
my bad.
who was used to getting the views from people in Newfoundland and Labrador,
You
but
move
he
one
did not
direction,
get the votes
and
of the
then it
people
goes
of
the
Long
other
Range
direction.
Mountains in the mass that he needed to defeat Caroline C. tonight. So, you know, going back to that path to victory we talked about, Rosie, the Liberals are at 24, the Conservatives are at 8. You see where the
But I mean, it
standings
matters
are now.
more when the
Liberals
check
are
marks are
down 2.
happening.
When the numbers are up
And
to
the
10,
actual,
11,
like,
12, I had some Liberals text
ones
me
they're
and said,
considering
this
close
is
enough
very
to
tight.
call them.
This is uncomfortable. This
Which
is
obviously
lose the
those even
election
could
type
still
numbers.
change.
So if you do see the Conservatives get into the teens and stay into the teens, you can expect some really anxious moments at Liberal headquarters.
Well, it puts the pressure then on the
They need to
Liberal Party
overperform in Quebec,
everywhere
Ontario,
else.
and the West.
Yeah,
for sure.
and it would be a reassuring sight, as you heard there from Jason Kenney, for the Conservatives to come out with a couple of flips like that. Do you have some results?
Yeah, let's take a look at Halifax. We've been talking about that riding quite a bit tonight,
they're
Rosie.
so
Again,
small
they
still.
haven't
That's
had
the
an
thing,
MP
they
since September. And what is so interesting about the results in the riding of Halifax,
polls are still
the
open
Liberals
here
are
in
in the
front of the
lead, and that is
house.
not necessarily a surprise. Shannon Miedema. But look where the NDP is, in third place. Now, with redistribution, last time around, the results would have amounted to the Liberals beating the NDP by almost 1,000 votes. This time you have the NDP in third. So I do think that's something, you talk about how people are feeling in headquarters, the NDP federally not going to be very happy to see that. And we want to check in on Dartmouth, Cole Harbour, where the incumbent Darren Fisher is in the lead.
Okay, thank you for that, Catherine Cullen. And because so many people have been emailing me demanding that they appear, they have now appeared. At Issue is here with us tonight. Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, Althea Raj. Thank you all for being here in person. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you.
Isn't it nice to know you have a large fan base that gets angry when you haven't appeared yet? Okay, I'm gonna start to get your take so far. As David has been rightly pointing out, this is not exactly the way the Liberals wanted to see Atlantic Canada. It is not. There are ways to make up the seats, but they need to. They would need. It just makes it much harder. Chantal.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's again why the numbers are deceiving, because the expectations from each place are different. The expectations here weren't like for the Conservatives to have 30 or 40. Them simply having 9 or 10 could be enough to be a problem numerically going forward.
I think they need to get 26.
I don't know.
It may not be a blue wall, but it may be enough cracks in the red wall. What happened? Block got one? Now we have to talk about them. I'm pulling up my French translator. Hold on. Je suis...
Jean Chrétien walked away with a significant majority.
Je m'appelle
But I'm not even saying...
Dustin.
I'm not even calling Atlantic Canada because those results are too...
Tu s'appelle Mike.
Too small, but there are ridings that I think the Liberals thought they would do better in.
That's all the French we've got tonight, folks.
And that is important.
You can now say this was a bilingual show.
Up on your screen. We'll get Catherine Cullen to talk about that in a minute.
Do you have any French, Mike?
Andrew, what is your first take of this?
Well,
Je ne sais
so
quoi?
the difference with 1997 and now, if this were of any significance, is that 97 there were specific reasons why Atlantic Canada would be particularly ticked with the Liberals, which weren't necessarily indicative of a national trend.
Right.
Don't see as much
I
of
don't know
that
any
this
French,
time
though.
around.
Like,
Is it bad that South Park taught French to
say,
children
I
in America?
have no
at
French,
this point,
but it's just one of
Liberals
those things
underperforming,
I
and
never was
you're
taught.
more inclined to see national
But here in
trends.
Alberta,
I learned it a little
We
bit.
don't know how much of this
Why
is
would
I took 2 years in high
how
school.
much of this is advanced polls versus
Well, you never know who
Zero
else might
reason
be
for you to
voting.
know French in
And so
Alberta.
one has to be really, really
What do
careful.
you mean? You might run into
Yeah, I
somebody
would
else who
also
knows it,
say
and then
in
you could
this
have
part
secret
of the
dialogue
country
between
so
you
far,
and
we
them
are
and with
not
somebody who you know
seeing-
doesn't know it.
No.
That's not
The
zero.
NDP
That's
isn't really
one.
a
That's one
factor
reason
yet,
right there. I
and
can
that
come up
could
with a
also
second one if
be
you want.
part of the story.
Have you met French
It might
people?
be.
Actually,
Same
never
for the
mind.
bloc.
Have you ever gotten weird ads? And you think those ads are because your phone's listening to you? Start talking in French around your phone, see what happens.
You can.
I've gotten French ads before. Don't worry.
This is not what the Liberals
Yeah, I mean, but
wanted
won't
to see.
that?
We're
I mean,
hoping to see. This is a
then you
lot
can
tighter.
confirm your phone is listening
I
easily
think we're all
because
getting
you.
messages that,
There's no
"Ooh,
reason
this
for
is
something to turn to
uncomfortably
French just
tight. What could it
other
mean?"
than you switching
Especially
French
in
to French.
Ontario.
So that's
Sometimes
two.
they screw up the
Then
region.
comes with the third
No,
one.
sometimes they
So
just
the
screw up the
breather
region,
that they were
especially in
hoping
Canada.
to have is not there.
Look, your
The
third one is so you could do
signs
jokes
of
in
a
French while we're
potential
live
red
on Borderline
sweep
Banter.
that they were hoping to see.
Yeah, that's right.
Is
The
not
block
there.
quote
I think that
would be
yes, Chantal is absolutely
a
right.
huge
We don't
audience
actually
we
have
could
that many
pull.
polls reporting.
You know, if we could
That
just do
an
one
early
French joke.
indication, even this pickup in Newfoundland, that the Liberals did not want to see.
But I can't even do
I think
one
the
French
other
joke.
conversation we may
I don't
end
know
up
enough.
having is the
Je
importance of
suis malade.
incumbency.
Yes.
So many Liberals decided not to run again. What will that mean if that
Though,
pattern
though it is the same, it's almost the same number. It's 109 to 107 for the Conservatives.
Tell me
so
a joke.
I don't know whether that.
In
but
French.
yeah, you're right. It's something to keep an eye on. Okay, thank you all. Everyone's glad that you're here.
Here,
we'll come
we're
back
not,
to you, of course, but Catherine Cullen
what
has
is
some
it?
early results.
Yeah, from Gaspésie, les îles de la Madeleine,
we're not pandering.
Is the world losing faith?
Early results there, and this is an.
Wrong one again. Okay, wait. Pourquoi?
Bien sûr. Voici une blague en français. Pourquoi les plongeurs plongent-ils toujours en arrière et jamais en avant? Parce que sinon, ils tombent dans le bateau. Tu veux une autre blague dans un style différent?
Okay, but you have to say it, Mike.
That
way
was...
the clip is you knowing French.
I don't know French.
And this is an interesting.
You see the letters, just say them.
Competition, Rosemary.
I can barely speak English.
This changed dramatically under redistribution.
God
so
damn
Diane
it.
Leboutillier was the incumbent,
look
but
at
the boundaries shifted a lot. It gave the Bloc a real advantage, and we see right now something of a star candidate for the Bloc, Alexis Deschênes.
It's not an
is in the lead.
insurmountable lead. That's 2 out of 337
well
polls.
known in the area, and this is definitely going to be a riding we want to keep our eye on tonight.
Okay, thank you for that. I think I'm going to go back
That's
to
less than
Rapids
1%.
Canyon in Montreal.
We are the
what
1%.
was the Bloc
Oh, wait,
talking
we
about
are
when
the
it was talking about
99%.
that riding
Forgot
in La
about that.
Madeleine, Gaspésie, Listigouche?
I was gonna say, I'm not a billionaire, are you?
Rosie, they were very aggressive about that riding. They said they could take it. Yves-François Blanchet visited the riding twice. That may not seem like a big number, but keep in mind it's a little difficult to get to, especially for a party leader who does not have his own plane, unlike all the others. So he would have had to charter a plane, go there, come back. He went to see
I don't have a plane.
As Catherine said,
He's a
is
French
a
guy.
known
He doesn't need a
quantity
plane.
in that area. On top
Yeah,
of
like
being
all of it's in
candidate for the
Quebec.
Bloc,
Why do you
he's
need to
also run
leave?
for the provincial Parti
Because of this
Québécois
guy.
a couple
I think
of
it's in New
times now,
Brunswick.
but never in his home riding, never where he lives. And
Actually, I don't know
they're
where it is.
hoping
Maybe
that'll
upper
make the
Quebec.
difference for them this time around. That being said, they might have also been hopeful that Diane Leboutillier would not run again. She used to be cabinet minister, was shuffled out by Mark Carney, but she decided to run again. And the Liberals
Did the
seem to
Conservatives
be
intentionally
aware
run a
that there
French-sounding
could be a
name?
challenge for them there. They actually flew
maybe.
Dominic
Or maybe
LeBlanc
like this
over
is their
for
best hope.
his
Jean-Pierre.
campaigning in New Brunswick
I mean,
to reinforce.
If you're trying to get those Quebecois
Now, if the
people,
Bloc
you kind of
ends
need to
up
have somebody who
winning
seems like it
this
might be one
riding,
of
that
them,
would
right?
be an
And that's
early
the thing,
sign
Mark
of
Carney kinda
enthusiasm
sucks at
and
speaking
Bowie
French.
supporters who have been
Now,
hearing
is Diane's
People
last name a
Quebec-
French
people
thing? I
Quebec
can't
get
even
pretty,
pronounce that.
some seats
People in
held, but
Quebec get pretty upset when French people mean you can't speak French, especially if you're in Quebec.
Yeah.
So Mark Carney.
Looking at that last
struggling,
name,
kind of what? Sorry?
I think they both did it. Look at her last name, Le
Yeah.
Boutillier. That is a French last name, right? And then
Right now, at
Jean-Pierre
this hour,
Pigeon.
polls are still open in large parts
Jean-Pierre's a
of the country,
French name,
but
so
many
they
of them will
both
be
did it.
voting in new ridings
It's
in
not
this
working.
election, and here's the reason why.
Oh yeah.
When Parliament
At least not
dissolved,
yet.
there were 338 seats
Look at that,
in the House
NDP's
of Commons.
trying.
This election, Canadians will be electing
Not close.
Look at that.
343
And more
MPs.
people.
5 more ridings are being added, 1 in Ontario, 1 in BC, and 3 in Alberta. That's all thanks to redistribution. It's a process that happens every 10 years. Independent, nonpartisan commissions were
okay.
tasked with
Funny
redrawing
you
the
say that.
electoral map
Nonpartisan.
as populations change based on
Look, as long as
census
it's
data.
scheduled every 10
The
years and
idea,
it's not
each
done
riding should
willy-nilly,
have
like,
roughly
hey,
the
let's
same
do this
number
one
of people,
today,
while
then
taking
it's
into
better than what
account
we do,
factors
which
like
is they
community
redistrict as much as they
identity
want
and
whenever they
geographic
want.
size. And the
And they can
brand
make
new
it so that it
ridings
draws
aren't
the
only
weirdest,
changes.
dumbest
A
line
number
to just
have been
include like people who are
renamed,
liberal
and
or
some
just
have
include people
had
who are conservative.
significant
And then right next to it,
boundary
just
changes. In
the
fact,
biggest circle in the
90%
world.
of ridings across the
Because they're like,
country
well, we
have
can win this little
changed
piece.
in some way. The redrawn map also means a new threshold for a party to win a majority government.
Or sometimes it's like
Yeah,
a
that
huge
is-
amount of
that is
land and
bigger.
no people.
Okay, so that's why you might be voting in a riding that looks different or has a different name. That's why in Alberta there are 3 more ridings to adjust for that kind of population growth, and why now the number is 343, and the number that everyone will be watching for tonight, 172. That is what would bring you a majority. We'll see whether we're on track for that tonight. Adrian Arsenault has some results.
I guess the last time there was a Canadian election, it would have been like 169 to win or 170 to win.
So let's look at a vote change on PEI here.
168.
What you will see there, the Liberals up 11.2
it was a different number,
points,
but
Conservatives up
America, we
5.8,
don't really
but
change
look at
that number
who is
very
down.
often because
the
that's
Greens. The Greens have been such a huge
that's not the
force
level
in
where we're
provincial
redrawing
politics
lines.
on PEI, but look, they're down 7.3
That's where
percentage
the
points,
Canadian
NDP down
politics is a
7.2
little bit
percentage
different.
points. That is a big deal, but good old PEI, they have already got a projected elect. So let's look at Cardigan, because this is a big deal. This is a huge lead. Kent McDonald is going to Ottawa. That majority is bigger than the one earned by Lawrence McCall.
It's about a 2x
That is a
lead.
big deal for Kent
but he's
McDonald.
15 out of 97.
Yeah.
Completely different story.
You always got to look at how low that percent
Let's
is.
look at Egmont.
I mean, just because this is the current thing doesn't mean that it extrapolates out to
everything. Reporting.
13.
That's like neck and neck. And what's that Greek guy doing smiling about it? Look at how happy Ranald is.
And Logan came back. He was down by a few hundred.
Also,
it has been bouncing a little bit.
Ranald? Did they like typo his birth certificate?
Not over yet in Egmont.
Okay.
Or is that just like a common Canadian
name?
name?
Let's go down to Ian now, who's also got some results.
Ronald with an A.
Let's start, Rosemary, with the change in the vote in New Brunswick from 2025 compared to 2021. And you can see both the Liberals and the Conservatives up considerably, and to an extent at the expense of the NDP as well as the other parties.
Yeah, apparently the NDP really shot
votes are
themselves
kind of
in the
like
foot
shots
with,
on goal in terms of the actual
Yeah,
votes
Jake
and
means
the
screwed
seats
him up
that
pretty
some
bad.
parties
Trudeau?
are
Yeah,
leading or
I mean,
elected.
he went from
Well,
kissing
nothing right
Trudeau
now
to
is
unkissing
changing
Trudeau
in
to
New
kissing
Brunswick.
him
Let's
to
take a look at
unkissing him. To the
Madawaska
point where
West
everybody's
News.
like,
Last
dude,
time we looked
what
here,
are you?
The Conservatives were in the
Like, they
lead.
legit were like,
That's
Jagmeet,
changed. And what happened
the
is
fuck,
there was a
man?
huge
Don't you have your own
swing
like personality?
in
This one's pretty close
Madawaska
as well.
rest
His
of
personality
the
became
like 7 or
hinged
8
with
percentage
justice.
points
It's just like,
just in a matter of minutes. This
I
is
think this
more
election is
of
going to be
what we would
reflective of
expect
that
in that
being the
riding.
case.
3 times in a row, the Liberals have won there with Renee Arsenault and new candidate, but
see.
Old story in terms
He's
of a
still
lead.
not on the board.
Miramichi Grand Lake, this
Like
one has been
52
going
votes, yeah. Like,
back
they're all
and
still
forth,
pretty close,
and right now a
right?
52 vote
So they
lead
still got a long
for
way
the
to go.
Liberal. This would be a flip. And so this just happened a moment ago, but it's been going back and forth exactly as we expected. Not that we could predict who would
back
win.
and forth,
Neither
too,
could the
like that.
candidates when I talked to them, but they did predict it would be close, and indeed it is close at this point. There are 1, 2, 3, 4
They're giving it to Liam.
MPs
Okay.
projected,
100.
elected in New Brunswick,
Yeah,
and no
44 out of
surprise that Dominic
221.
LeBlanc is one of them.
Maybe
Not
they know
only
things
has
about
he been the
extrapolation that I
MP
don't.
for Beausejour since the year 2000, but it's one of the 3 ridings across the country, Rosemary, that I'll be covering. One is in Manitoba, another one is in British Columbia, where there's kind of a father-son dynasty. And Romeo LeBlanc, of course, a loyal lieutenant to Pierre Trudeau, won in what was
a
Westmount
dynasty is
Kent
a nice way of saying
4
nepotism.
times, and now Dominic LeBlanc has won many times. I know this riding well because
And
the
the
town I grew
presumption
up
that
in, Sackville, New
genetics,
Brunswick, is right in, it's not in the center,
like
but it's certainly
a
part of
foundation
this
for
riding.
Dominic LeBlanc is such
whether
an interesting
someone will
story
be good
through
or
the past
successful is
6 months
eugenics.
of turbulence
That's
in
the
Canadian
word for that.
politics.
But they-
Stepping in
but
to
it
become
happens all the
finance
time.
minister
Go on, Canada.
for
Go
Justin
on.
Look
Trudeau,
at the
Chrystia
Bushes.
Freeland,
Look at the Trudeaus.
quit,
Look at
and then
the
stepping up to help
Clintons.
Yeah,
Mark
nepotism
Carney with
is
some of the
extremely
negotiations
common.
with the United
And the
States,
thing is,
and dealing with
they're not
the
actually
issue of trade.
better
Okay,
suited for the
we
job
are
just
going
because
back
they're
to David
like,
Cochran.
related
But they
to
got
somebody
the name.
else.
and
why we
People
call
don't
Dom
care
LeBlanc the
about
Minister
Again,
of
look at
Janitorial
Bush.
Affairs on
Again,
my
they
show,
don't
'cause
care.
whenever there's a
They
problem,
just
they
see
just
his
shuffle him
name.
into there, and he tries to
I
put
call
it
him the
in.
minister
Like Bush
of everything.
Jr.
Yours
pretty
is
much
more
definitely got the
colorful.
job because of Bush Sr.
I'm on cable.
But Bush Jr.
Look,
did the
we're
worst
still
job
waiting on
he could
2,
possibly do. He invaded a
final
country for
results
no
in
good
Newfoundland
reason.
and Labrador. One of them is
Like,
Terra Nova.
he
the
made a
Peninsulas, where
horrible
Jonathan
mistake,
Rowe
and it
has a
took forever for that
570
mistake to be
vote lead
undone.
over
And he
former
was
CBC
painting pictures
broadcaster
when it was
Anthony
finally undone
Germain.
instead
There are
of being in a jail
165
cell. So that's a fail son right there, if I've ever seen one.
I don't think anybody can hear
Did he
you.
just get quiet?
Yeah, because we can't hear over this, so all I can hear is this and you in the background. So I muted it. But okay.
We're halfway
So this
through,
whole
he's
time
down by
that's why you haven't been listening to me?
570. And here in St.
I think so.
I can hear you
the,
just fine
cabinet
over that.
minister
Over
and the
that.
incumbent, as you see
Maybe
by
I don't
that
know.
star
Maybe
next
I
to her
just
name.
me then on my
She
end.
has a
That's a possibility.
1,360 vote lead over
You're probably
David
invited me on Discord again.
Fewer than 1/3 of the polls are reporting there's 60 of 197
that all the time. And also, you can accelerate it. You could put it above 100% if you need me to be louder than the show, which would be nice since we are the show. We're not just stealing CBC's broadcast.
Want to be in the area where they want to be to have the kind of growth. The Liberals are down. If they
we are just stealing a broadcast, so I can go
Canada in double digits.
Well, that's what you're arguing right now. I said we're not, and then you're like, yeah, we are.
Reports early because of the block.
Is this our one argument of the night?
That's a really bad night.
One of many.
I did want to go back to something you said about advanced polls because I'm getting lots of questions about that.
See,
so
you're always like this. You don't want to count the arguments I want to count.
Can
and now,
decide
what,
when
this
they
one doesn't
count
count
the
either?
advanced votes. So you can choose to count them 2
You're just
hours
listening to the
ahead
show
of the
now.
poll closing if you want, or you can wait till the very end. So some of the things that you're talking about may or may not be reflected here.
Right, and so here's the thing. I'll give you an example, all right? So obviously I am paying attention and texting with people who are in Newfoundland and Labrador. This has been lost by the Liberals. We have projected that Don Bradshaw has been defeated in Long Range Mountains. Terra Nova, the peninsulas, which we just showed, that is not called yet. I'll just bring
they've got their own
to show the
touchscreen up
numbers.
here.
Look, you can see
They
this
stole
is
this
about
idea
a
from
600 vote
America.
lead, 170 of 270 polls reporting.
There's no picture of Liam Ryan. How can you get this far in a campaign and not have a photo?
Who, when the votes are counted there, they call the headquarters and tell them.
I question his reality, his veracity. I question everything about Liam Ryan.
91 people on Pierre's 91 people on Pierre's
Information
ballot.
flows at different times. There have been times in provincial by-elections when we knew a candidate had won just on what you were able to get from the different campaigns well before elections in LA was able to call it, just because the scrutineers called it in so fast, they write it on the wall.
Yeah, but I have a feeling if you're voting
that's
Pierre,
how you know what's going on. So
finding who you're voting for.
it is going slow. There is definitely some anxiety in the Liberal camp. There is some excitement in the Conservative camp. There is a lot of blue on the board right now.
Oh, there's that light blue part.
It's gone back down to 10.
Yeah.
Right. So just to show you one last thing, because we got time. As you can see, this is the change, right? Right now, South Shore St. Margaret's.
Yeah, how they're flipping back
Perkins
and
won
forth
that
like
in
that.
2021.
That's
Right now,
nice.
it's red. You know, so there is some lead changes bouncing back and forth. And what's interesting is more polls have come in, Rosie. When you look at the vote share, it was like 48, 44. It's starting to move up. The Liberals are at about 50% now overall. The question will be, is that NDP vote that lets them run up the score in safe Liberal seats that they were going to win? And so vote inefficiency comes into play. And also some of the Atlantic NDP voters, more of that trade unionist thing than urban progressives, right? The sort of people who might switch to the Conservatives because they could be union members who live in Clarenville and commute to the oil patch of Fort McMurray to work.
That's going to be a pretty big chunk, right? How many seats is
something to watch
Ontario?
for sure. Okay, let's go over back to Ian now.
It is a very good night for Wayne
Long.
Long.
That's going to really significantly up the numbers.
Quebec is like
St.
180.
John Canada cases. He has increased his share of the vote.
I mean, because we're seeing 30
look at
on the screen right now.
out of 159.
Adding 90 to that.
Provincial Affairs reporter in New Brunswick, Jacques Poitras, and he is with Wayne Long.
They're putting a
in St.
check mark on
John.
it. That's I saw the same thing that happened down here.
Yeah, hi,
The,
Ian. I'm
most
here
of the check marks ended
at
up being
Wayne Long's
right, but not all of them.
headquarters
Some of
with
them
the
ended up
candidate, Wayne
changing at some point.
Wayne, tell us.
I just never got it because sometimes it would
you
say
were the
things
first
like
MP
less
to
than
call
1%,
for Justin
and they
Trudeau
put the
to
check mark on
resign
it.
last year. I was.
And they, of course, it's because
How
they're
did
looking
his
at the last
resignation change the
election
election
cycle
campaign?
and extrapolating based on it and based on the results so far. And
Sadly,
so it would have to be a very weird change at this point, basically. I know there's math behind it, but like.
You're the same party, though, guys.
Are they?
Canadians looked
85%
for
of them,
leadership.
yes.
Canadians knew the threat we were under with respect to Donald Trump.
Fuck off
and
with
Mark
that.
Carney was a difference maker. I heard it door after door.
You don't think Donald Trump is a threat?
issue itself.
Not to Canada. Canada's been fucked way before he put his tariffs in.
For the riding.
I mean, I don't think it's any secret that St. John is the most impacted city in
So
the country.
you don't think Trump is a
You know, whether
threat?
it's Moosehead Breweries
No,
or Cook
I do not.
Aquaculture or the Irving Conglomerate or Crosby
Why'd you bring up
Molasses,
the tariff?
every business that employs
Because that's
thousands
what they
of
say is
people
the
in this
biggest deal in
riding
Canada
were
right now.
impacted.
When
So
we've been
they were
screwed
looking
over
for
for the last
leadership.
9
They
years.
looked to Mark Carney. I think
Are
Mark
they
was
saying it's
somewhat
the
of a
biggest deal?
blood pressure lower
Mark
for the
Carney
country
was
when he
like,
spoke.
we
People
got to
listened.
defeat
People
Donald
wanted to
Trump.
hear what he had to
Donald
say.
Trump.
And
Donald
again,
Trump.
I heard it
Look,
door
I
after
didn't even
door.
say
It's
it's
a
the
great
biggest
night
threat in
so
my
far.
question. I
Lots
just
of
asked,
votes to be
is he a
counted yet,
threat?
though. So
And then
And
he
you're saying
lied.
no, and I'm sitting here as an American going,
Yeah,
wow.
well, the CBC says you're elected.
Yeah, well,
So we're going to
I'll
just punish
take
you
that.
harder.
We're still waiting.
We really are.
The Liberals get in, will be part of Canada. I mean,
You
American.
can
will be
ignore it if
part.
you like,
Thank you
but
very
like
much,
my
and
president
Rosemary,
is going to
maybe
do
just
what I'm
remind
saying.
people that when our decision desk projects a winner, that is a
He is isn't stopping. He's losing the trade war with China and continuing the trade war with China.
If he wants, maybe he's
losing
not
or
quite
winning,
ready to celebrate
he doesn't
yet.
care.
Catherine Pellet.
The Wayne Long decision
He
desk.
put on the tariffs,
Not
took
ready
off
to
the
make
tariffs,
that
put them
decision yet,
back
but
on.
the CBC decision desk has
There's
made
no
some
like
decisions
logic
in
behind
Nova
it.
Scotia. I've got a
The
few
90-day
ridings projected
pause.
elected to tell you about, and then also some interesting races to
If you don't
watch.
see that as a threat,
Halifax,
then
there we
you're
go.
really
The
not
Liberal
like
Shannon
concerned.
Miedema projected elected in that riding. And again, I would just draw your attention to the NDP number. The NDP in third when they, in the past, have been in second place in this riding. It's been a pretty unhealthy competition, so not a great sign for the NDP in this particular riding. We're going to look at a couple more projected elected. The incumbent, Darren Fisher, projected re-elected in Dartmouth Cole Harbour. Let's move on to Sackville, Bedford, Preston, where Braden Clark is projected elected in that riding.
I just received some additional polling.
Riding to watch.
That's why my
Central
microphone
Nova,
there. I
Sean
was getting
Fraser
some
and
polling
Bryson Jenkins have
information.
been duking it out
It
all
turns
night,
out all
and
the
right
check marks
now,
need to be taken
the
back.
former
We need to take them
cabinet
back.
minister is in second place in that riding.
Nothing is
Finally,
certain.
we're going to talk
The
about
future's not
Acadie
set.
Annapolis, where Chris
Oh
Dontremont,
wait, this is the
deputy
plotline
speaker of the House of
determinator.
Commons,
Never mind.
is in the lead. That is also where the TBC's Taryn Grant is tonight at Chris Dontremont's headquarters.
Why do I see so many
Taryn,
LeBlanc?
we got you
Like
with us?
last name
The
LeBlanc.
French name. I don't know.
Yes, there she is.
I
So,
see it too much.
how are things
Too
going?
many of them. Are they all related?
Well, we're calling it leading. Chris Dontremont has already made his victory speech. He walked
Jessica
in here a few minutes
Fancy
ago and
Landry.
spoke to his supporters. So he's obviously feeling confident enough that he already thinks that he's won. He spoke in his victory speech about how the fisheries were an important issue in this riding, which we talked about earlier at the top of the show. He was also talking about how
James
now
Brown,
he's
the
waiting to see how
musician?
the rest of the results shake down in Nova
Good middle
Scotia.
one, Dominic
And
LeBlanc.
as you and your colleagues were mentioning earlier,
LeBlanc,
things
yeah.
are flipping back and forth in some Nova Scotia
How many
ridings.
LeBlancs
So
are running for
the
seats
polls
in
are coming in
Canada?
really fast, and we'll
I'm
probably
Googling it,
know
hold
some
on.
more just in the next few minutes here. But as it stands, it's not clear if and how many Conservatives from Nova Scotia might be heading back to Ottawa. Catherine.
Okay, the CBC's Taryn Grant in Acadie Annapolis. The Chris Dontremont decision desk moves with much more certainty than the Wayne Long decision.
Apparently Dominic
We have
LeBlanc
not
is the
called
main one
that
the news
one
cares
at
about.
this stage, but Wayne Long can
Dominic
relax.
LeBlanc?
Chris
That's an
Dontremont, not
actor,
quite
isn't it?
yet.
Yeah.
But things are looking good. But
No,
we're
he's
going to stick with
Canadian.
our own decision.
He's the Minister of
decision desk,
International Trade and
if that's okay. A couple numbers
Intergovernmental
just to keep in
Affairs.
mind here as you look at the bottom of your screen with the Liberals leading or elected in 22.
And President of the
Conservatives,
King's Privy
10,
Council
and Le
for
Bloc Québécois on the
Canada?
board, of course, just
Y'all
because
got
of
some
that
weird
one
stuff, you
Quebec
know that?
riding that has closed. All right, I'm going to bring in at issue again, even though they're all busy away, like talking to people, messaging people, writing columns,
on
all the
Global
things
News,
that they
they've
do
got
most of the
5
time.
elected for Liberal
Althea,
2
you
elected for Conservative.
traveled a little bit and you talked to lots of people.
Oh, is it yeah, okay,
Is
just
there
changed.
anything
Yep,
that stands
5
out
and 3 of the
to
actual
you,
like check
in
marks.
terms of what we're seeing here?
So that
Which is
means
very different from the
Conservatives are already up
22 and
is
10.
third in every single
Yeah, so that 22 and 10
we
is
have
just
looked at the
leading
data
numbers.
for. And
They're
one
not
of the
showing
things
those
we heard
check mark
both from the Conservatives
totals.
and the Liberals was that
Kind of wish they would
actually
like put in
have
like
a model
parentheses
that
what
can
they have
predict an
check mark.
election like this, because we haven't had a two-party race in a very, very, very long time. And so while
For America this
they
time.
think that they're doing well, or they think that they are hoping that they would be doing better, they're not sure how things might break down. There was also questions about, not so much in Atlantic Canada, but in Ontario and British Columbia, how three-way splits might work. Because the Progressives have been galvanized by the Liberals to vote for Mark Carney. But in some ridings where there are NDP incumbents, or where the NDP has done typically better than the Liberal candidate, the Progressives are not sure who to vote for. And so there's the potential that the Conservatives are elected in those ridings. So there's a lot of different things happening.
I'll be back.
The parties have been doing IVRs in addition to their modeling, trying to figure out what the support might look like. But it's clear, I think, that this is not what any camp actually, if this plays out the way that it is, this is not what they expected.
But that speaks to really the story that we've been trying to talk about through the election, that if it's a two-party race and the NDP doesn't perform, and we'll see whether that continues, that becomes very difficult for us to know where that support's going to go and how that's going to shake down, because there are blue-orange races just as there are orange-red races.
But just to echo Althea's point about the difficulty in modeling this, we may emerge from tonight with both the Liberals and the Conservatives over 40% of the vote.
Yep.
You know the last time that happened?
Hit me.
1930.
Okay.
Okay, so this is...
None of us were alive then.
Exactly, so I hasten to add. So that makes these things, I think, very difficult to model. There's the usual difficulties in even just polling, let alone modeling, which we may find are greater than we thought. I think it's also bedeviled by the fact that I think there was really two elections that went on this thing. There was the election of the first half of the campaign, which was it's all about Donald Trump. NDP voters stampeding to the Liberals, stop Trump, et cetera. It's all about leadership.
Yeah, Trump did.
Mark Carney having decided advantage of
quite a bit.
But as the Trump thing seemed to recede, only because he wasn't fueling it every day with the same intensity or frequency.
He's definitely made himself a part of this election.
You could see
but I'm going to be right back
greater focus on time to get rid of this bunch, time for a change.
Cost of living.
Been in too long, cost of living. And you could see it. I mean, I was a skeptic at first about the closing of the polls. I'm not a skeptic anymore. There was a lot of closing, and there may have been more closing in the last weekend than was apparent even to the pollsters. And that's one of the things we're going to test to the degree that we're reading anything into Atlantic Canada. But that will be one of the things is how much of that ground was made up, how much of, if they're not shy Tories, then at least unpredictable Tories, people who don't usually vote. So that's the potential for a surprise here.
I have about 2 minutes before I need to reset. Chantal, the other factor, though, is that the issue of the leader's favorability, right, as we're looking at the modeling here. And Pierre Poilievre never overcame that issue in terms of favorability and likability.
6 months ago, those Liberal numbers in Atlantic Canada would have looked miraculous.
Yes.
And the share of the vote, which at this point stands over 50%. So clearly we're into a two-party battle, as we've seen from the beginning. But it is breaking somewhat in the Liberals' favor. Now, I'm not saying that what we're seeing here we can replicate and apply to Quebec, Ontario. It's much too early for that. But it's really interesting to see those numbers. They're really high. I mean, both main parties have increased their vote share significantly. And I do believe that this two-way battle, we will see more of it as we move west across the country. And like my colleagues, I do not have a template for this kind of polarization between two parties.
Just to give people an idea of what we're talking about here, Liberals right now at just over 51%, Conservatives at just over 48%, and you have to go the NDP is at 4.5%. So that gives you a sense of, that does reflect sort of what we saw in the polls, that this is a two-party race and that the other parties are struggling to get support. And indeed, the Bloc Québécois, the only other party on the board right now, but we will expect to see a lot more of that to change. At 9:30 Eastern, of course, 266 more polls close, and we will start to see the results of those coming in just a few moments' time. We are getting ready for another important moment, and that's because many more of you are joining us at this hour. It is Monday, April 28th. It is 9 p.m. Eastern Time, and we are live from the atrium of the Toronto Broadcasting Centre. For 36 days, federal leaders did their best to sell their visions of the future to Canadians. It all comes down to this. I'm Rosemary Barton. It is election night, and this is Canada Votes. Tonight, a remarkable race in a remarkable time is brought to a close. Canadians will choose their next government as the country's economic future comes under threat.
My message to President Trump is knock it off.
I think this is the biggest crisis of our lifetime.
Donald Trump's tariffs, a major campaign issue, but not the only one, as voters search for solutions to the housing crisis and cost of living.
We cannot afford a fourth Liberal term.
I'm fighting for a strong economy. We'll lower your bills, build homes you can actually afford.
A record number of people voted in advance polls.
It's an important election.
It feels like it's a bit of a turning point.
More cast their ballots today. Now their choices are revealed. This is Canada Votes 2025. And as we're saying, we've already had a lot of results, but there are a lot more to come. In 30 minutes' time, we will get results from 266 more ridings, a huge amount of data, and a huge amount of votes from Quebec all the way over to Alberta and two territories. That round of votes will come fast and furious, and things will start to look a lot clearer in terms of the direction of this country going forward. You can see there, though, at the bottom of your screen, that is where we are at now, with Atlantic Canada results coming in. 22 leading and elected for the Liberals, Conservatives at 10, and the Bloc Québécois at 1, and that's because only one Quebec riding has closed at this hour, and that's in Gaspésie, Île-de-la-Madeleine. Okay, we do want to show you one person who was re-elected handily tonight, and that is Dominic LeBlanc, re-elected in the riding of Beauséjour. As I said, handily for Dominic LeBlanc, of course, a cabinet minister under Mark Carney right now. And there he is tonight. Dominic LeBlanc, thanks for joining us. Congratulations on your re-election.
Hi, Rosemary. Thank you.
Yeah, good to see you. First of all, I want to ask you about where the Liberal Party is at coming out of Atlantic Canada here. Leading or elected, we've got you at 22, the Conservatives at 10. Those weren't quite the numbers that we understood that the Liberals wanted to see at this stage of the evening.
I think that's fair, but there are a lot of votes still to be counted. I've been looking at some of the results in some of the New Brunswick or Nova Scotia ridings, and there are still a lot of polls to be counted. And my experience tells me often the polls that are slow to come in are the ones where there was a very heavy turnout in some advanced polls or other big turnouts on election day today. So look, sure, I think that we should still be very confident in Mr. Carney's campaign, and I'm confident that there's going to be a Liberal government. It can be a majority government, but we'll see as we get into the heavy numbers in Ontario, Quebec, and provinces like British Columbia, I think, will also be very instructive.
Well, we've been talking a little bit about how the race has shaken out so far, and it does seem as though the one thing the polls were right about is this is a two-party race. The NDP coming out of Atlantic Canada at just over 4%. How difficult is it then, Dominic LeBlanc, to kind of project where that might go across the country, given how the Liberals are performing and the Conservatives are performing?
So that's a question, Rosemary, that I've asked myself for the last number of days when we expected some of the smaller parties, the NDP and the Green Party, not to pick up a lot of support. In Ontario, in British Columbia, even in provinces like Alberta, Manitoba, that could lead to a number of Liberal wins, of Liberal pickups in terms of seats. I'm quite confident, as I say, that we'll do very well at the end of the evening, but I certainly have seen, I saw it in my own riding, Rosemary, Sackville, New Brunswick's in my riding, where Mount Allison University is. There's a traditional New Democratic vote in Sackville, New Brunswick, and some of the communities around Sackville. It hasn't been showing up in the polls that I've seen, in the results I've seen. Didn't show up in the all candidates meeting I went to there 2 weeks ago. So I think you're right. We should ask ourselves what that means in some of the bigger provinces like Ontario or even British Columbia.
I did notice there, Dominic LeBlanc, that you use the M word. You use the word majority. Is that an expectation, a real expectation for you tonight?
It's a hope, Rosemary, expectation. Look, Mr. Carney ran a great campaign. I think that we can absolutely finish with a Liberal majority government. That's certainly what I'm hoping for. I think it's realistic, but we have to wait for the votes to be counted. So I remain very confident. I'm proud of the campaign that Mr. Carney and my colleagues ran, and I'm looking forward to seeing the results.
Okay. Shouldn't you be at a party at this stage of the evening then?
You know what, Rosemary? I stayed here at my residence for an extra 10 minutes to talk to you, and now I'm probably going to drive too quickly to Shediac because I've got people waiting there. So thank you for noting that.
Don't be speeding. You're breaking the law.
Okay, well, we can confirm that you're on your way in just a moment. Dominic LeBlanc, nice to speak with you tonight. Congratulations on your re-election.
Thank you, Rosemary. Hope to see you soon.
Okay, sounds good. That's Dominic LeBlanc, re-elected in Beauséjour tonight, and again, talking quite confidently about how the Liberals' evening is going to unfold. Hopeful, he says, but still possible that he says the Liberals could get to a majority. Let's go back to David Cochrane to give us a sense of what the parties are looking for next. That was hopeful optimism there from Dominic
Nothing's
LeBlanc.
going on here in America.
A few things on that. You see the scoreboard there, 2310.
I see the scoreboard hasn't changed a whole lot.
No, to the Liberals. It's 2210 in Atlantic Canada right now. 25-7 at least is what the Liberals wanted to see. Maybe 10, 11, 12 is what the Conservatives wanted to see. We know the Conservatives have flipped one
popular vote
in
currently is
Newfoundland and Labrador, long-range mountains has
254,000
been
to
projected elected,
203,000.
but we have not yet projected the
The
Terra Nova and the
NDP has
Peninsula's
managed to
riding
get
and the St. John's East
21,000
riding, so
votes, but
those
no
are still in
seats
play. Part of the problem is this. We have more than 70% of the vote counted in Newfoundland and
There's
Labrador.
another LeBlanc that just
We've
went
just
by.
hit the 50% mark in Prince Edward Island, and we're below 50% in New Brunswick, in Nova Scotia, and only just over a third of the vote counted in New Brunswick. So it makes it very difficult to call some of the ridings when you're still under half of the vote there. So here we are. The Liberals wanted to be at 25, the Conservatives above 10. That's the state of play in Atlantic Canada. Let's broaden it out. Let's go into Quebec, because we're going to get in 23 minutes from Quebec to the Rocky Mountains. Those polls are going to close and results are going to start coming in. And we're going to lose track of some of these Atlantic Canadian battles.
It's going to go pretty crazy here in a minute.
Quebec, 78 seats in that riding. This is what it looked like last time, right? It is this blue, that is Bloc Québécois blue, not Conservative blue. But let's go to the greater Montreal area. This is the key battleground for the Liberals.
Easily just choose a different color.
They need to dominate the island, and they need to move into the North Shore ridings. Oops, I just touched the map. Sorry about that, folks. That just shows you how sensitive it is.
See, technical
but they
difficulties.
need to move into the North Shore ridings and the South Shore ridings, where they are in fights with the Bloc Québécois. And this is why Yves-François Blanchette's closing argument is so important in this particular race, by saying that we know Mark Carney is going to win the Mr. Blanchette decision. But you can send more Bloc Québécois members to Ottawa to stand up.
It was just a leading. Now it's not a lead
Who had
anymore.
huddled around the image of Mark Carney.
It was never a check mark, so that's
stages of the election. Jagmeet Singh making a similar argument in English Canada. So watch for that in terms of whether the Liberals, whatever ground they lose in Atlantic Canada, whether they can make it up here. They want their number to start with a 4. They want to be at 40 or above. Then we're going to get into Ontario, which is the key province in this election campaign, because it has 122 seats. That's Newfoundland and Labrador, PEI, the North, BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba combined, all in one. For the Conservatives to win here, they have got to storm the doors of the 905, which, as you can see, all around Toronto is red seat after red seat after red seat, except in Toronto St. Paul's, where Don Stewart won that by-election last year that really started to catalyze a series of movements that got us to an election with Mark Carney as the Liberal leader. You need to see all of this turn blue tonight, or a lot of this turn blue tonight, and a lot of this turn blue tonight. If the Conservatives are going to continue the trend they may be starting in Atlantic Canada, the Liberals need that to hold. And where they were hunting for their majority in the final days was in southwestern Ontario. Not so much these blue Conservative seats, but the orange seat in Hamilton, the green seat in Kitchener, the orange in London, the orange in Windsor. This part of Canada is where the election story and the Trump story intersect at scale, because it is the home of the auto sector and the manufacturing sector. It is the most vulnerable part of the country to the trade threat presented by Donald Trump. So if the Liberals are below the 25 mark in Atlantic Canada, when all of these polls open,
it turns out most of what we're seeing on the screen is wrong.
80 in Quebec, because they need to hit the Manitoba border at around 145.
Yeah, it looks like none of this is saying Trump.
There's going to be
Trump
a
is
fight
leading in
the
Ontario.
Winnipeg area, where you can see St. Boniface should be fine for them. But it's these two NDP seats where the Liberals have ambitions, where the NDP needs to hold in their quest for party status, and they think they can actually take some seats from the Conservatives in Winnipeg West and in Kildonan.
I ain't saying much when you're looking at two seats like that.
They believe they have a shot in Saskatchewan up here. This is a Conservative seat in the House of Commons that was just dissolved, but with the redrawing of the boundaries and the overlaying of the vote from the last election, it projects to go Liberal. Just a projection. That would be where they hope to gain.
But it's new. You can't know anything
Edmonton
about a
and
new
Calgary, NDP, Conservative, and Liberal fights there. But if this continues, Rosie, if the Liberals underperform in the Atlantic, though, as more votes come in, they get back closer to at least status quo. They need to pick up ground here and pick up ground here, because the chances for targets are narrow around the prairies and in the north, and then a whole lot could be riding on British Columbia. But
yeah, I mean, as you're looking at this map, the bottom right is the significant portion
and that
for
is because
the red.
The CBC decision desk has projected
all those to the
elected
left
Joanne
side,
Thompson
the big chunks of
St.
red,
John's
those are
East,
just
the
single
fisheries
seats, right?
minister in the Mark Carney government. And the last
They're not the
Liberal,
swing, it's these here.
incumbent to seek
on the east
re-election
side.
is returning to Ottawa, and the CBC's Carolyn Stokes is standing by at Joanne Thompson's headquarters. Carolyn, take it away.
Hi, David. Yes, I'm hearing that CBC is projecting that Joanne Thompson has held on to her seat, but
sorry
actually,
to hear a bomb
not
in my
many people
background.
here
It's
in the
just
room have
Popeyes.
heard
We're
that
having
yet.
pot pie for dinner,
We've had
which
no
is very
reaction,
American.
to this yet, so
I figure I should
no
be as American as
cheering or
possible,
anything,
so
we're
no one's
just-
confusing me as a Canadian.
They found out.
What are they call-
Okay,
the person in their
this
district.
room, very, very happy people
a
here.
Katie.
We're expecting getting Joanne Thompson to come out now and
okay, this
give
is the one
a
Joanne has
speech,
checkmarked.
lots of
But look
celebration,
at that's
as you
not
can
1,000
see.
vote gift. That's not many votes.
Pretty good
Still halfway
showing,
to
it
go.
looks, for Joanne Thompson
Yeah.
tonight.
But look, celebrate when you
Holding
want.
on to the seat, heading back
It's election night.
to
You get to be happy for a
Ottawa,
moment. And I have to be unhappy after a bit, so just remember that.
I
colleagues
don't know.
from this province as before because of
Ups and
the
downs.
loss in Long Range Mountains, and Clifford Small holding on to his seat. So, yeah,
Or like in a situation like this, like Thompson maybe is holding this seat, but the Liberals lose overall. So like you're cheering that your person won, but then overall it's not enough. Like you might be at the end of the day going, oh wait, it wasn't enough.
But you didn't win the war.
Yeah, there's two things to cheer: your own personal battle.
Joanne Thompson elected yet?
I don't think that's a call to violence. I think you're using an obvious old
That's not why we did it. The numbers.
One election is not the entire national
delay between us saying it
picture.
and it appearing on your TV screen. But that
And it's
also
possible
nice
to win a
see
seat
when
that
people get
doesn't really matter
excited
too much
win.
because your
Adrian
party
is
doesn't
going
get
to,
control.
as we get closer to the polls closing here, in many ridings, you've got a big one, and you're going to give us a sense of what we should watch for beyond the trends there that David was talking about.
Yeah, rolling up the sleeves, 122 seats to keep an eye on. Given what David was just saying, Rosie, about the pressure,
now
definitely
the popular
the Liberals
vote
want
is
to pick up places that they
widening. We
won
need
in
to get that
2015
big
and then
chunk so we
lost
can see how close
subsequently.
it really
Places
is.
like
What's
Peterborough.
That right
They lost it in
280 to
21. The
220.
Conservative candidate, Michelle Ferreri, the incumbent
So it's
former
about
radio show
60,000,
host.
50 to 60,000
Redistribution
margin
is
right now.
a little bit more of a potential
that's
pickup for the
200
Liberals.
given.
But
Yeah,
an
I'm assuming
indication
when we
of
hit
how much at
Ontario,
stake
we're
here.
going to
Both
get
Mark
a
Carney
million
and Pierre
plus
Poilievre
people, right?
have spent important time
for
there.
sure.
Let's look at another one that
Yeah,
David
this
was
is
referring
way too
to.
small numbers to
This
really
is one of
care
those
about yet.
one of the 4 NDP
on the popular scale.
seats that were held in
Brian
Ontario,
Massey?
Windsor West, front line of the trade war. That has had 2 Mark Carney visits, 1 Pierre Poilievre, 2 Jagmeet Singh. Carney was there almost as soon as he became prime minister. He was back
Windsor
a few
West
days
is
ago.
a big one.
This one is one that, boy, the Liberals are counting on picking up
Herb
if they can.
Gill.
One last
Herb
one to look
Gill. I
at
need
that I
him to
think
win.
is really relevant here. This is King Vaughan.
You know anything
Again,
about
the
Herb?
I
Liberals
don't know
won
what the
it
star
in
means. Is that who's favored to win?
2015, then they lost
I'm
it
not sure. They put
in
him on the left
2021
side
by
like
very
that is
few
the
votes,
favored.
but also it had the lowest
Writing
turnout in the
results?
province
What
then.
is writing?
It's been very interesting to see Mark Carney there in the last few days of this race.
Okay,
Rosie?
Adrian, thank you for that. Just wanted to give you a little update on the
I think, yeah,
Elections Canada
the Stars
website.
must have been
It is
their,
all working
their
now.
pick to
So
win
if you
with
are
no
still
info.
waiting to vote, if
Or
you're
it might be
trying
the
to get to
incumbent.
your polling station, you can go to their website and
person
you
who's
can
currently
put in
in
your
office.
postal code and find out where you
Which
need to go.
does
So
add
that
a
problem
thing in your
has
election
been
cycle.
solved.
I mean, the
And
incumbent
if you are
gets an
wondering
added like
what's
2%
happening
or something.
in your riding and the polling
Sorry?
has
Just for
closed
being
you,
incumbent?
you can also
I
find
think
that
the Star
on our
was
website,
incumbent.
Yeah, maybe.
cbc.ca/results. In case we have not mentioned your riding or you're just tuning in, that's a good place to go to find it.
And you could
Catherine,
assume the
you've got a
incumbent
lot
is
coming up
favored,
as
but
well.
not always.
Yeah, that's right. I'm going to be
Especially
looking at
when
results
the
in
populace
Alberta
wants to
and
show
Quebec tonight,
dissatisfaction
Rosie. Why
with
don't
their
we
current
start in
presiding
the West
government.
with a sample of what we
They
might
switch
see.
parties
Edmonton
as a
Centre.
voting.
Now, this was
No
Randy
Star.
Boissonneau's old riding. Former cabinet
No
minister,
Star,
you'll
so
recall,
maybe it's not what I
resigned from
thought.
cabinet in November when there was controversy
Or
involving his
maybe
former
the incumbent's
business
not
partner.
running.
The Liberal fight in this riding gets even harder because with
Bloc does keep
redistribution, the changes in the riding boundaries, this
back on
riding
board
now
with
would have
Bloc.
gone
It's still
conservative
just a
if you
leading
transpose
seat.
the results of the last federal election. Let's move to Quebec with some real high
double check,
drama
it's still just
south
a
of
leading.
Montreal. This is
Real high
Chateauguay,
drama.
Les Jardins, and Napierville. The Bloc
Patrick
candidate in this riding, Patrick
Chateauguay,
O'Hara,
Les
he ran last time.
Jardins de
In 2021, he
Napierville.
thought he had won on election night by more than 280 votes. Started making
Chateauguay?
plans to go to Ottawa.
Chateauguay?
It was a judicial recount. He lost by 12 votes. Now he is
Wow.
back. Redistribution in this instance
12.
favors the Bloc, but the Liberals have a star candidate.
I
Natalie
would run a
Provost,
very strong
known for
candidate
her
here, knowing
fight for
that.
gun control.
Now the question is,
Finally,
are Natalie
the
or
last
David
vestige
or
of the
Anna
orange
a strong
wave
candidate? I have
in
no
Quebec,
idea.
the only NDP MP in Quebec is Alexandre Bouleris in the riding of Rosemont-La Petite Patrie, and that is where we find the CBC's Quabina Oduro. Quabina, it has not been a terrific night for the NDP so far in terms of what we're seeing in the numbers. What is the energy like in Rosemont?
Well,
Catherine, the energy here is starting to pick up. More volunteers and more candidates are coming to join the party over here. I asked them about how they're feeling about how things are going so far. They said that they are optimistic that Alexandre Bouleris will keep his seat here in Rosemont-La Petite Patrie, but they are not liking what they are seeing. As you just mentioned, it's not a really good night for the NDP out east, and they are feeling it here. But they say that in Montreal, they feel like they will keep this seat because when they went out to talk to people in the riding, they say that people have been giving them positive.
And while he might have been saying things that could be, argued as correct, the way he says them is bad. Which is a dumb thing to say about someone, but it's true. When it comes to politics, the way you say and do things matters.
No, he could have done things so much better. Help call an early election. Oh, there it is. He fixed it. Must have been watching. Thank you.
Yeah, things like that would have made people more sympathetic to him and maybe even given him a vote, in certain jurisdictions. You never know what it would be that would turn somebody away from a party.
Yeah, and you need 12
It's kind of an
seats for that,
unpredictable
and that is
thing and not
important,
something you could just
if you want
look
to
at that.
money
They're saying
and
the Liberals
Canadians
now
here in
have
America.
10 seats so
and
far.
get to be
For
part of
sure.
committees and have
Lead in
questions
12.
and all those kinds of things. So we'll talk more about that as the night goes on. Ian, as we mentioned off the top of the show, we talked about that tragedy in British Columbia, how it affected the last day of campaigning at that Filipino street festival. 11 people dead, more than 20 people injured. City just really grappling with such a shocking event, coming at this joyous community event in Vancouver, obviously affecting the campaign as well, and had become kind of a part of the campaign on that last day of campaigning.
Yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. Thinking about what's happening in New Brunswick, where the NDP vote has collapsed, but what impact does it have on seat change? None at all. Like all the parties that won last time are either elected in those same ridings or on their way. In BC, if the NDP vote collapses in the same way, it likely will have a huge impact in terms of changes among the Liberal and Conservative count.
Yeah.
In a riding like Port Moody, Coquitlam, if you look at the redistributed results in that riding, 35% is what the NDP
what's
had in terms of support in what...
Sorry?
What's ML?
ML, what do you mean? Where's that?
The one weird thing on the screen.
ML.
Roland Verrier,
I don't know.
ML.
Are the new boundaries.
Probably
32% for the Conservatives, 29% for the Liberals. So imagine a world where the NDP support dropped by 15 points, for example.
Port Moody, ML, right? I don't know.
Marxist-Leninist Communist Party of Canada.
There it is. So.
And then who picks up the seat on Vancouver
Communist Party. Okay,
yeah, we have a Communist Party in Canada because they're allowed to, right? So.
Island. Take a look at Nanaimo Ladysmith. There, the leading party was the NDP with just over 29% of the vote, the Conservatives at 26.5%, and in third place, not the Liberals, but the Greens with almost 26% of the votes.
23, I think.
Okay. So they've got a few people who are probably defending their seats. Maybe all of those. NDY. 24 seats, my bad. Okay. Luckily, it understood me, NDY.
World where
also, I think I saw that said they might secure 2
does that
to
go
14
to the Conservatives?
of those.
Does it elect even a Green member?
So that could be really bad for them,
it's really intriguing. So, the political observer in all of us finds that intriguing.
Sorry?
That other thing on there, the pre-election projections. You need to turn my volume up.
Yeah, well, I just...
Instead of just, having to mute to hear me.
Well, I did have that lower.
Intriguing, even exciting to see what's going to happen. But there's the other part of the BC story you mentioned, and it's with every time I think about British Columbia.
Well, I've said it 3 times to the audience. It's the other thing you showed there that you're going to scroll down. It's the second thing.
Just feel very close
you're going to the third thing. Pre-election. He's like the second thing. He's like, oh, the third thing then?
2 things. Political excitement.
Yeah, and I already said what I was going to say about it. It's either going to be bad for them or really, really bad for them.
Reflect a little bit what's going on in Vancouver because
this is why I said turn my volume up. I already said all this.
Voting, but they're also voting with all of this weight on them. Lindsay, you're in Vancouver. Give us a sense of how.
So ignoring me wasn't worth it.
Happening there right now.
People are so overwhelmed, Rosie, by the shock of
this,
sadness, the grief, the loss, the anger. I've been standing here since about 7 o'clock this morning, and people just keep coming. And they're laying down flowers, they're lighting candles. It hasn't stopped. I want to just show you what the crowd looks like now. It's after work, after school, and people are lining this memorial, which is taking up much of this corner. And this is the same scene on the other side. There are just as many people there. On the other side of the police tape, there are two more memorials, a little bit smaller than this one, where people have also been gathering. I think there's just a real sense that people want
pretty bad tragedy that happened in Vancouver. Some crazy guy ran over a bunch of people.
About the Filipino community.
Yeah, as of right now, 11 people are ceased. And as of right now, he has 8 charges. They have a suspect, Kaiji Adam Lowe. He has 8 charges of second-degree murder currently. That can also change.
As it should, because he killed 11 people.
Yeah, I know. When you hear 11 and then you hear 8, I did not make a mistake. But also, they still have time. They have to do all the paperwork for each and every victim. So,
Lindsay Duncombe, thank you.
they will probably get there to the full number.
And they count.
But yeah, as of right now, he's in custody.
The count
yeah.
still rise because
again still today.
How many were? Yeah, there's people still in the hospital. It just says dozens of others were injured. I don't know how many are critical, how many are in hospital.
Yeah,
it's hard to know.
They don't tell us all that stuff, but.
So you're right. The number can go up.
A lot less energy, perhaps, in some instances, because people were trying to address two things as they were unfolding. Did want to address something that's happening there on the bottom of your screen, and you can see a couple of block numbers. The polls haven't closed in Quebec yet, so there may be some early returns that have been put in. We're not going to pay too much attention to it yet because the polls are going to close in under 10 minutes. Two party leaders this time are in the nation's capital, both Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre, both running in ridings, neighboring ridings, in fact, in the nation's capital. We're going to start to see the results from their own ridings soon. One has never been elected to public office, and the other trying to get elected for an 8th time. Let's start with the CBC's Ashley Burke at the TD Place. Ashley, how are they feeling so far about things?
Well, Rosie, the doors are about to open here at the Liberal headquarters, and we're expecting supporters and volunteers to start filling this room. The stage has been set for leader Mark Carney to appear here later tonight. On the first week of the campaign, we were at a rally when he said that he was seeking a majority government. Then his language changed, and he talked about in the final week here that he wants a strong mandate. I'm getting texts from sources saying, with the campaign, saying that so far so good based on what they're seeing from the results. One person said that the theme of this campaign has been pragmatic, that they want to over-campaign, they want to be overly cautious and overperform tonight. And they've been targeting, Mr. Carney's been targeting going on the offensive in places like Atlantic Canada, targeting ridings that were held by the Conservatives. And the theme of his campaign really has been trying to remind Canadians and hammer home his message about what's at stake this election. And for him, that's Donald Trump and his threats to Canada's sovereignty and the economy. But tonight, it will be Canadians that are the ones deciding if it will be Carney sitting around the table with Donald Trump at the end of all this or not.
Okay, Ashley Burke, thank you for that. You are in Ottawa. You're finally home after a crazy couple of hours there with the Liberal campaign crisscrossing the country. We'll come back to you through the evening. Of course, Kate McKenna with the Conservatives. She's at the Rogers Centre in Ottawa. Kate, what is the word there? Perhaps a little bit of optimism from the Conservatives, given what's happened in Atlantic Canada.
Yeah, quite a lot of optimism at this headquarters, Rosie. It is open. There are people here. There are a couple hundred people here watching the results as they roll in. And of course, Atlantic Canada is a difficult region for the Conservatives, but what they're seeing on the board is making them extremely happy. I was going out and looking around talking to people, and they were scrolling their phones saying, why are we ahead in this riding, or why are we ahead in that riding? And of course, as you've been saying, these are early returns, but a lot to be excited about if you're the Conservatives, because they're then saying, well, if they're outperforming the polls in Atlantic Canada, then what's going to happen when they hit Ontario with all of those seats in Ontario? And in fact, just a few minutes ago, one of the leaders of this campaign came by and gave me just a big 2 thumbs up. They're very excited about what they're seeing in Atlantic
They're
Canada.
Still showing 2 BQs, but my
they're
site's
not
showing
losing
1.
seats so far in Atlantic Canada, and that's a very positive
even though the 22 and 10, they're on par there.
In the next few minutes.
Of that 22, 11 are checked, and of that 10, 4
see why they would be encouraged by that. Kate McKenna, thank you. So I'll talk to both you and Ashley Burke a little bit later.
Decided so far. Less than 10%
and we'll get
of what's needed to win has even been decided.
Thank you both so much. Appreciate it.
We got a ways to go.
Just a reminder that polls are closing in just under 5 minutes.
But we got
in
5
many
minute
provinces,
countdown
Quebec,
now.
Ontario, and all the way through to the Rockies and a couple of territories. If you are in line, if you are waiting to vote, stay in line, because even after the polls close, you have the right to cast your ballot. If you're watching this on your phone and wondering where things are at, your vote will matter in this election, that's for sure. So stay where you are and make sure it gets counted.
I really
Catherine
hate
Cullen
how
has
we start
a result.
Yeah, well, we got a
the
few interesting stories coming out of Nova
Yeah,
Scotia.
because you have people literally able to see the results
first
before
couple
their
races
vote, which
here.
I
Central
don't like.
Nova, Sean Fraser continuing
I feel like
to be
you
in
should be able
second
to
place.
time
You can
this,
see about a
and
400
maybe America
vote
has the
difference.
same
So
problem,
this
but I feel like you should be able
is,
to time an
certainly
election
one
so
we're going to keep
that's not a
following
thing.
through the night. You want to talk, though, about dramatic races. What is happening
See,
in South
Jessica
Shore St.
Fancy.
Margaret's here right now? The
She's
Liberal
fancy.
challenger in the lead, but an even smaller margin, 354 votes. The incumbent is Conservative Rick Perkins. He picked up the riding in 2021. And if you want a sense of what this has looked like, certainly for the candidates and the teams watching this race closely over the course of the night, check this out. What has been happening. And you can see sort of that big bump at the beginning, but just look at how close those lines are, Rosemary. So this is definitely going to be one that we're going to have to follow closely. And we're going to take a little jaunt back to Halifax.
So they don't even show NDP there?
Where we have the candidate projected, elected, and where the CBC's
Oh,
Tom
okay, that
Murphy
makes sense.
finds himself tonight. Is
Yeah,
in
they
the
don't have a
lovely riding
candidate
of
everywhere.
Halifax. Hey there, Tom. What's going on?
Thank yous that I have time for that you want me to.
Hey, Catherine.
get
Yeah,
up here speaking
another
about.
bar,
I will get to them all in
but a
the
different
coming
mood
days,
in this
one
one for
by
sure.
one.
Shannon Meadema, the Liberal candidate here in Halifax, projected elected, as you say, taking the stage to make her acceptance speech. And boy, is this room boisterous compared to what the NDP camp were. A lot of people wondering where that NDP vote would go, because going into this election campaign,
yeah, but that's
the NDP
what
were
like
thought to be
NDP.
leading. And by the sound of this,
Like I said,
you can tell how much things turned around. Shannon
We still do not see them. I mean, we got 3 minute countdown. Maybe they'll get some from Ontario or Quebec and however many other territories they're talking
She
about.
even wondered if she had to make a speech tonight or not. So, and she got to keep going
yeah,
with
they
that speech
still
because it's what the people in this room want to hear. An impressive
Look at that
thing for
shit-eating
her
grin.
tonight. Obviously, people
Yeah.
that big election.
That is a shit-eating grin. You can put that in the dictionary. Well, yeah, I mean, old people shouldn't even be allowed to vote. Because voting is about the future, and old people don't give a shit about the future.
Yeah, because they got they paid $200,000
as soon as she wraps up her speech here.
And you could try to make the argument that, oh, old people might have kids or kids with kids, but they don't care about their kids or kids with kids. So, like, they still don't care. There should be a voting age cap.
Tom Murphy waltzing from bar to bar in the riding of Halifax. Rosemary,
Where do you think the cap should be, like 75,
Liberal, that sounds
80?
a bit familiar.
Yeah, it does sound very familiar. Okay.
The age cap on
as we
voting.
get ready for this next
For Canada or
large
America,
amount
because
of
you got an
votes
80-year-old
coming in
president.
and polls
Okay.
closing, did want to show you where we are as we leave Atlantic Canada. This is
So
the
75
vote
or
change
80, yeah.
in Atlantic Canada. You
I
can
think
see
80
there
is a
the
good
Liberals
number.
up 8.6.
I
but the
feel like it should be whatever
Conservatives
number we
up
take their
9,
driver's
more
license
than 9%.
away.
The story, though, coming out of Atlantic Canada
If you
is
can't be
really
trusted to
about
drive a
that
vehicle,
NDP
can you be
number.
trusted to
Down
vote for the future of your
12
country?
percentage points, and that tells you that they are not performing well in Atlantic Canada, and this really is confirming what we knew about this race, and that this is a two-party race. Let me
So
show you
look
the
at that,
seat
all those
change in
pluses,
Atlantic
but
Canada, and this
they're
is what
both
has the
taken from
Conservatives
NDP. This is
happy today.
Jag meets
Liberals
having
down
an
2
impact
and
on his whole
Conservatives
party,
up
I think.
2. That's the
Because
kind of
nobody
movement
knows who the hell that
Conservatives are
NDP
happy to see
candidate
coming out
is.
of Atlantic Canada, and would hope to see as the polls begin to close right across the country. But we will see, right? As we've said, this is early times. Now, what we're going to see now is a whole lot more data coming in. I'm going to just go quickly, just like 30 seconds to you, David.
I'll show you one interesting thing where the NDP vote is going a way that common wisdom would suggest it wouldn't. This is way down by about 4 percentage points. By the numbers, it's all gone to Jonathan Rowe, the Conservative, as has the People's Party vote. In this riding, the Bull Arm fabrication
Again, look at
yard,
this
that
one,
built
another
the
no
Hibernian project,
photographs
the oil
candidate.
refinery there. So it's
Yeah, that
trades,
person who
people,
has no
and
photograph
traditional
affected this
offshore
election, I
industrial
think.
base. So the NDP collapse is more that blue-orange.
And that one's almost
rather than
entirely
orange.
done.
So
235 out of
that's how it's
270.
playing out, at least right now.
That's what Jason Kenney was warning us about.
Yeah, for sure.
Telling us about.
But
Okay,
maybe they were
good.
just tired
So
of the little shit,
good thing
though.
to keep in mind as
You know?
we get
Oh,
ready
that's what I'm saying.
to bring
Sometimes
you
people
a
just want a
whole
new
lot
party
more
in power.
information.
And
This
sometimes
is
you just
where
look at the
bulk
incumbent
of
and
your
say,
votes are
I
going
need
to
the
be
other guy
counted
who
now.
can win.
Almost 9:30 Eastern. Polls are going
And
to
the
close
NDP,
between
there's some people who are
Quebec
just
all the way to
literally
the
probably
Rocky
thinking that.
Mountains and 2
The
territories. This is
NDP
when
lost their
your
vote.
say,
Now they're going
will
to give their
start
vote
to
to hopefully the
determine who
winner.
is going to form government. As we come
It's
out of
weird,
Atlantic
but
Canada, you
it's
can see
happening.
where the results are at the bottom of your screen. Polls now close in much
Countdown
of the
clock is in. ended.
Okay.
Start seeing some
Polls have now
stuff.
closed in most of Canada, and that means we're about to get the biggest waves of results we'll get tonight. From Quebec, Ontario,
they were just showing
Manitoba,
a clock there.
Yeah, but why
Alberta,
didn't they
the
Alberta?
Northwest Territories, and Nunavut.
I think Alberta was on the side that said
7
7
will be
or
added to
8:30.
the count.
I guess I was
Many
wrong,
of these are key battlegrounds of this election, ridings you need to win to form
Or
government.
maybe that was just the Northern Territories. I can't tell. I couldn't tell because it went by so quick.
Okay, so that is what is to come. Let's look at where we are right now. Coming out of Atlantic Canada,
Yeah,
the
I
Liberals
mean, they just showed
leading
a
and
huge chunk,
elected in
and this is the important chunk
the
anyways.
Conservatives with 10, and the Bloc
Or
there,
half of it,
we're
I
not going
guess,
to talk
'cause
too much
we
about
need
it.
the
We believe
Quebec
some
chunk
early
too, but-
results were put in for one riding in Quebec, but there is one riding where the Bloc is leading, and that's in Gaspésie, Île-la-Madeleine. But you can see there, this is not exactly the way the Liberals wanted the evening to start. It's an encouraging sign for the Conservatives, but remember, it was just 3 months ago that the Liberals thought
It's not
that
a
they
commanding
were,
start,
kind
but
of
it's
hopeless,
a,
not only
you know,
in forming government, but certainly in losing a lot of
They're-
seats
it's
in
an
Atlantic
outperforming
Canada.
start for the
that is part of the
Conservatives.
story as well. The recovery
And an
of the
outperforming
Liberals that
start
we've
can be
seen
good.
after
It
Mark
could
Carney
be what
took
they
over.
need.
Ian Hannemanson.
Well, I'm making a
There are
coffee,
two
so I gotta
ridings
go
in
get
New
the
Brunswick
cup,
right
I'll be
now
right
where our
back.
decision desk is
I'm gonna
not
tell them
in a
all the
position
secrets while
where
you're
it can
gone.
project a win, and one of them is Miramichi
Alright, now that he's
Grand
gone,
Lake. We
the truth
told you
is
at the
Mike
beginning of the
actually
evening
voted for
that
the
this
NDP.
could
He
be
just doesn't
close.
want to
It
say
is
it
the
on the
one
air.
riding that 4 years ago flipped, in that case, from the Liberals to the
And
Conservatives.
now he's gonna have to
The
go
lead
back and
has
watch
gone
this whole
back
video to see
and
what that
forth, and
secret
as you
was.
can see, just 472 is the lead for Mike Dawson
And
over
unless
Lisa
somebody in
Harris.
chat spoils
And the other one I want to show you, which is still in play, is Madawaska Restigouche. Still a lead here for the Liberals, but the last, one of the interesting things when you look at the numbers here for Madawaska Restigouche is that the Liberal candidate, who's not the incumbent, is
This is the
performing
place where
at
if you
about
have
the
a
same
goosh,
level
you
that
can rest a
Rene
goosh.
Arsenault did the last 3 times. It is the Conservative vote that has really surged compared to last time.
I don't
And so
have a goosh, so I
relatively
probably will
close,
never go to
closer, I think,
Madawaska Restigouche.
Rosemary, than a lot of people expected. So these are the 2 ridings in New Brunswick, which are still, at this point in the evening, in play.
Okay, thank you for that. Ian, polls now closed in an additional 266 ridings, meaning that we are going to get a lot of information very quickly about where Canadians are at. Want to bring in at issue, if I can, just for a moment, to get a sense, Chantal, of what you're going to watch for now, as so many more polls have now closed.
Well, obviously, what happens to the Bloc Québécois vote, whether it's going to be down, as was predicted, or whether the Bloc will hold its ground. The only riding that we actually have numbers for, Gaspésie, les Îles de la Madeleine, and I'm not even sure that we're getting the entire numbers, because a section of the riding is actually on the same time zone, in the same time zone as the rest of Quebec.
I see.
So, but
Yeah.
this
We're
riding,
over 40
which
total
we will
now.
get a result,
44 total.
a more definitive result early, is significant. It's actually 2 ridings because of
Now,
redistribution.
checkmark-wise,
a
still
former Bloc
like
riding and a
15 and
Liberal
5,
held
but-
riding. So someone is going to lose a seat here. And if the Bloc keeps the seat, as opposed to the Liberals, it may be that they'll have a better night than they would have otherwise. But the big area to watch, obviously, for the Liberals is in and around Montreal.
Okay.
And that is also true of the Bloc, with some battles in Quebec City,
Yeah, there's all
mostly
so
against
early
Conservatives.
numbers, like.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you, Andrew, in just
Mhm.
a minute. But Ian's got some results because you can see the numbers on your
Yeah,
screen.
like look at that one, Alexis and Diane.
Counting
Like,
super
it's
quickly in
a
Battleford,
Bloc
Zoid,
Québécois, but
Minster,
it's less than
Meadow
100
Lake
lead.
in Saskatchewan. We already have a few of the
They went
votes
by too
counted,
quickly,
and there are
but-
a couple of things that are notable about the results to this point. First of all, this is a riding where you'd expect Rosemary Falk to win. She has already, and her vote share in 2019 was 78%, in 2021 69%, and it's even greater at this point. It's in the 80%
Come on, Bloc,
range.
take those
And
libs
one of
away.
the reasons for that may be
I was gonna say, I
that
think she's
Meadow
got
Lake in
Battleford
Saskatchewan
locked.
is now part of this riding. A lot of Conservative
I think she's
supporters
gonna
there.
take this one
And I
for sure.
mentioned Meadow Lake because it used to be part of the Desnethé, Missinippi, Churchill River riding. The fact that it's now moved
These
in
numbers are about to get
redistribution,
so
Rosemary,
wonky,
is
it's not
good
even gonna be
news
funny.
potentially for the Liberals.
might be
It
funny.
makes that more likely.
Not
of
for me,
things
who's
where
gonna
the
be
Liberals
stressing
pick
the whole
up.
goddamn
And,
time.
the Liberals have not won a seat in Saskatchewan
We're at 51
since,
seats right now.
2015. The Conservatives have won all of the Saskatchewan ridings in 2019 and 2021.
Okay, Catherine Cullen, I believe, has some early results.
We've got some early results coming in from Quebec. Let's start with a new riding, Les Pays d'en Haut, where you can see, Rosemary, this is an area, now, again, only 2 polls reporting, but based on redistribution, this is an area we'd expect to go block, but the Liberals have a candidate, a local mayor in the riding, who is going to have a little bit of name recognition. Let's move on to Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. This is a bloc conservative fight, so interesting to see the Liberals in the middle of that mix, but again, only 1 poll reporting. We will move on to Terrebonne, where the Bloc incumbent, Nathalie Sinclair-Gagné, is in the lead. And another really exciting riding to watch in this province, a 3-way race in 3 rivers, Trois-Rivières. Now, the Liberal candidate in this case was actually something of a parachuted-in candidate from the Outaouais. Yves Levesque, former mayor in the area.
1 out of 269 is literally
the Bloc
nothing.
candidate, who is the incumbent here, actually had to have surgery for cancer in the middle of the race. It is a riding that we've seen a lot of the leaders visit. Very dynamic. It's going to be interesting to see what happens there tonight.
Yeah, I was talking to our colleague Louis Blouin today, who says that none of the parties knew what was going to happen here. And to be fair, it is a riding that I have visited several times covering federal elections. Always a little bit hard to read. Andrew, what are you watching for now as more polls are reporting? What are the things that you're going to keep an eye on?
Well, there's been 2 things happening. We've been focusing on how the race has been tightening between the Conservatives and the Liberals.
Right.
There's also been a bit of a bump up in the Bloc support in Quebec in the last couple of weeks of the campaign. And why that's important, you know, in a first past the post, everything's on such a knife edge. Small little differences in the popular vote can lead to major changes in the seats. What was really working for the Liberals when they were projecting 45 seats in Quebec was the Bloc and the Conservative vote was almost perfectly equally divided. And that's an ideal thing for a front runner. If the Bloc starts getting ahead of the Conservatives, then that, you know, a lot of seats can move on that. Similarly, in Ontario, you know, it's easy. We often say the national numbers don't mean that much. It's regional. Well, the race had been tightening in Ontario as well. And Ontario votes, the seats have traditionally been so closely fought
Total number of seats is getting higher and
small
higher.
tightening in the popular vote, again, can mean quite a few swings in seats. So we'll have to see how much of that tightening was real and how much of it turns out on not to have been.
Okay, great. Althea, I'm going to come back to you, but first I want to get to Adrian, who's got some results.
Yeah, absolutely, Rosie. Thank you. What everyone is looking for in a province like Ontario is a flip. And in some very early results, we're starting to see one. Let's begin with Algonquin, Renfrew, Pembroke. Now, 1 poll of 262, a lead of only 5.
Maybe this is
Cheryl
1
Glant
poll.
has held on to the Conservative Party has held on to this riding since 2000. Cheryl Glant, a long-time MP there, just a lead of 5, but
since 2000, this is
everyone
25 years
always
Conservative
looks for
stronghold.
flips.
I'd wait for
You're
a
not
few
seeing
more
a lot
polls.
though in the early results. Let's look at Haldimand, Norfolk, Leslyn Lewis
that's
there.
a big lead.
That's a sizable lead already, 737.
And it's still not enough
only
polls.
5 of 266 polls reporting, counting very fast there. One more to look at, if we can. David McGinty. One poll, but already a lead of
and again,
1,000
1 out of 233 polls.
That is,
but that's a pretty huge
not
lead.
Surprising.
No, I was
David
about to say
it is.
it's been a Liberal riding since 1988. So,
and he got
geez, that one's been 37 years Liberal.
Why would you have to go into
something
like
Justin
that?
Trudeau that put him in cabinet?
1988
Justin
was
Trudeau.
that long ago.
Yeah, and then he stayed there with
It was
Mark
like 20
Carney,
years
so
ago,
he would like
okay?
to hold on to that and stay
Sure.
in his cabinet job. Ian, you have some results.
Yeah, we have 2 results in Manitoba so far, Winnipeg West, and at this point, it's really early. I show you this, though, not so much because of
Marty
the count,
Morantz.
but that this is a riding that both the Conservatives and the Liberals feel really good about, and it is a rematch between Marty Morantz, the incumbent MP, and Doug Elson, who used to be the MP for this riding. So we're going to keep a close eye on this through the evening. The other result we're getting right now from Manitoba is riding Mountain. Huge lead for Dan Mazur. He is the incumbent MP there. He's won the last 2 elections with huge margins. So even though it's early there, this is probably an indication of how Riding Mountain will go, Rosemary.
Okay, thank you for that, Ian. Let's just take a look and take a pause for a moment in terms of where we are tonight. As we've said, most of the polls in this country have now closed. British Columbia, of course, and Yukon still to come. But as we see those results start to come in, take a look at where they're at. Liberals leading or elected in 37.
So we might see some Alberta stuff soon.
26, and the Bloc at 9. Nothing yet for, look, the NDP's just popped up, of course, as I said that. Leading in 1. If you want to see who has been confirmed elected, you should head to our website or have it open as you're listening to us. cbc.ca/results is where you can find that. A lot of people also asking me about advanced polls. Yes, there was a huge number of you that voted on those advance poll weekend.
They're on the
It
board.
is up to every polling station to decide when
of
they
course,
count
that
those.
is
You
not
can
a
count them
check
as
mark on
early
the
as
board.
2 hours before, or you can count them right at the end. So you're right. Sometimes that will impact the results. Lots of you are watching for that, but we simply don't know when they're getting counted in each polling station, but they will get counted. So not to worry about that. I'm going to go back to the panel now. Althea, you haven't had a chance to weigh in so far on what you're watching for now, as so many
look
other
at this. Here's a new
polls
updated map.
close. And you've also been joined by a fellow you know well, Jason Kenney, former Alberta Premier and Conservative Cabinet Minister. We'll get to him first. But what are you watching for now?
Orange,
I'm actually not watching the results coming in because one poll doesn't really tell you a ton.
You said it.
But I still find the results out east really interesting. The fact that Sean Fraser is struggling to hold on to his riding. This is a seat that Pierre Poilievre actually visited just last week and had a big rally with Elmer MacKay and Peter MacKay. This is, of course, the seat that they held. And what you see in Atlantic Canada, what you hear from candidates at the door is that the pitch is Pierre Poilievre's party is not the party of progressive conservatives anymore. So come and vote or lend your vote to the Liberals and Mark Carney, who probably is more aligned with your values. At least that's the Liberals' pitch. And you're seeing that that pitch clearly is not working in Central Nova, and that coming out with those two huge figures in that riding may have made a difference. At the same time, you're seeing South Shore St. Margaret's, which is traditionally a very conservative seat, possibly flipping Liberal.
We're well over 70. We're over 80 total now.
It's like there's bad news for both parties because
40, 30, and tennis.
the Cape Breton-Canso Antigonish seat, there with the candidate that was running,
nowhere
the
close.
Conservative
The
candidate,
does have a second one
is the
now.
former provincial finance minister. And that is the kind of riding the Conservatives
Now I'm looking
needed
at the
to win
popular
if they were to
vote.
form government. So there's not
It's about
a ton of great
100,000
news,
difference
frankly,
between
for both
Liberal and
parties,
Conservative.
and the Liberals are underperforming their own, but so, frankly, are the Conservatives. Their own desires.
Need to see
Okay,
more
and
votes.
obviously you can see the numbers.
The New
moving on
Democrats
your
have
screen fast and
38,000.
furious. They're going to go up and down because we don't have actually that many people projected elected at this stage. It's really just leading. And
We've got about 800 to 900,000 total popular votes that have come in so
Jason
far.
Kenney, you're
So
here
38,000.
talking
up with
to
the Liberals,
people,
though. They're only
watching
10 seats
things.
behind,
What do you make?
Pretty good.
Yes, I think.
Well, yeah,
that,
I mean,
most
and the
conservatives
popular
are
vote stayed
hoping
pretty close
that
with them
this
too.
trend continues. Now, look, in the pre-election polls, one of the toughest regions for the Conservatives was Atlantic Canada. So to see them being competitive, I think is
mine
very
just
encouraging.
updated to 35.
There were some
Conservative now.
polls going into this.
So that
week
might jump up again in a
indicating
second.
that things were narrowing
that's
quite
crazy.
a bit in Ontario. I think the last Abacus poll had 44-42.
Of course, it's different
Let me tell
sources.
you,
I'm looking at
if
Global News, and
Conservatives
this is
get a
CBC,
significant
so you're going to
turnout
see
advantage
variation
on that kind
based on the
of number,
information that they've got and
you could
aggregated.
see very
at that news
significant
source.
close races
they're there.
all through what I referred to earlier as the GTA Metro Belt, that 905 swath of like nearly 50
Did he just say GTA?
constituencies,
Look at
that have a tendency to vote
GTA thing,
monolithic.
Grand
But if you
Toronto
get
area.
if the NDP collapses
Yeah,
that
sure.
bad, and these,
Sure, that's
and
what
if these
GTA
soft
means.
NDP voters
We'll
don't
just
actually show up for
change
Mr. Carney,
GTA.
or many of them actually go to Mr. Poilievre on that appeal to blue collar trades and working people.
Yeah,
you
sometimes
can
look at
actually see
NDP lost it over
Conservatives,
here.
I think
Boom, it's gone.
splitting the 905,
I don't
or
see it.
winning a plurality of seats
Obviously.
in that region,
yeah,
and that
that's just
would
one.
make for a very long
There's
night.
two there.
Would
but it'll
you
change
all
the
agree, though,
there's
that
no
we are
update in a
not
moment,
seeing an election of a wave? Or are we? Is it too soon to
way
even
too
say that?
early.
Well, okay, too soon. Okay,
soon.
okay, all right.
Now on my
well,
side,
that's
I'm
my
over here
opinion.
saying Conservatives
I
should
don't
keep
know.
crawling up. 'Cause I'm saying
Okay.
38.
The Liberals have done worse so far in Atlantic Canada than they did last time when they got a minority.
Yeah.
So if Atlantic Canada is any kind of indication,
Sure.
And of course, the Liberals are also a little lower than this.
Don't
this
give my hopes
show,
up, Mike.
47.
My hopes up.
Okay. Catherine Cullen's got some results from Quebec.
Some early results. Let's just
Early.
emphasize
Yeah,
that,
got it,
Rosemary.
got it.
We're going to check in on some exciting races.
As bad as
starting
it is,
with
I'd take a
Châteauguay,
minority
Desjardins,
with
Denis-Pierreville. We were
Quebec
telling you earlier
and
that this was the
being
riding that was
the-
decided by 12 votes in a
Enough to
judicial
be the
recount
difference.
last time around. Patrick O'Hara is back. He told my excellent colleague on the House, Emma
I
Godmere,
mean, if you
that
have
he's been
enough
thinking about
minority
this
party
race
seats
every
and you
single
can do
day
a
since
coalition
last time
with
around.
another
He's up against a
minority
Liberal
party
Star
that
candidate in Nathalie
together
Provost.
has enough
Let's
seats to
check
actually have enough
in
voting power,
Berthier
you can get work
Masquinongé.
done.
The interesting
even without the
name
PM
there that Canadians
slot.
are going to remember is the NDP candidate Ruth Ellen Brosseau,
And put you in a place
known
to
to much of
demand
the
things
country
of
as
the PM.
Vegas Girl, because in the time of the Orange
Kids
Wave in
NDP just dropped
2011,
down there.
she went to Vegas during the campaign,
Yep,
but things
there
have
went.
changed a lot for Ruth
And the
Ellen
Conservatives
Brosseau.
went
She
up even
lives in
higher
the
than I
riding
was saying.
now.
It's up to
She is a
39 now.
farmer. They, in fact,
I mean,
raise
that's look
boar
at
and
46,
bison,
39.
despite the fact that she is a vegetarian.
Super close.
But it does appear that it is going to be
now, for some reason, my website I'm looking at, Global News, is saying 52 to 38.
And we want to take a look
quite different than what we're seeing on the screen.
EU. The Liberals have a candidate here that they're pretty excited about, Mandy Gull-Masty. She was,
like I said, it's just different news sources aggregating the information as they receive it, and they may not receive it at the same time as each other.
In order to run for the
They better. Otherwise, somebody was doing some BS, you know?
François Blanchet went all the way. This is a northern riding. He went up to visit it to try to give Sylvie Bérubé a bit of a boost. So again, this is another riding folks are going to be watching closely tonight. It'll be interesting to see how that race shakes out.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for that, Catherine Collin. Just a couple of numbers to keep in your mind as well. David's going to give us a few more, but in order for the Liberals to reach majority tonight, they needed to gain 18 seats. They are not on that path so far. The Conservatives, though, needed to gain 44. So I don't think anyone is on that path so far, but it's early.
And
it's early.
There's a chance that neither of them have a majority.
Let's face it, we still don't have some seats called in Atlantic Canada. So look, right now there's a couple of seats in Atlantic Canada that are very close, and within
in America there's going to be a majority.
There's only 5 of the advanced polls, and there's still like 20.
I mean, there is a chance of a split Senate type of thing.
Aren't being called. So we've been talking about the Atlantic
split
for a while.
Congress is
Let's look at
possible.
where we're getting.
And if you have a split Senate, you don't really have a split Senate. It goes to who the president is because the vice president does the split.
Right now, it's a hodgepodge.
And or it goes to the spoilers within a party.
Look, this is the island of Montreal. The battleground is the North Shore and the Shore Riding.
Who, by the way, did not run for re-election. Big shock that she didn't care about her re-election.
A lot of the storyline tonight.
Turns out getting millions of dollars on the side makes you not care about keeping the job.
The big ridings where a lot of people live in Quebec have still not come in yet. Let's go to Ontario, and let me give you a pretty good example of that. You're seeing some red in the north and different things like that. But let's go to the Greater Toronto area. Very few results.
They just blew it up finally.
Early, right? So this is that belt that Jason Kenney was talking about, Mississauga and Brampton and up in the York region.
It's starting to fill in. It's starting to look like a map.
Between the Liberals and the Conservatives in Ontario for first place. We have almost nothing from there at this point in the night. Similar thing, I believe, in southwestern Ontario when we go there. This is where the Conservatives are very strong in some of the rural areas, but we've got Windsor, we've got London, we've got
basically,
Kitchener.
I mean, look how far
they're right on America. They're in America.
Southwestern Ontario.
You live next to Americans.
We still have nothing.
If you turn down the wrong street, you'll be in America.
Okay, you go into Manitoba.
What does the border look like there?
But look, Winnipeg, we have one riding.
Well, there's one house
the bulk of the population of Winnipeg, there is no reporting
half of it was in America, half of it was in Canada.
So it's still very early in terms
I mean, and also it's like we've always been kind of friendly neighbors, so we don't kind of do the same
nothing from Regina.
Yeah, we went security crazy
from
after
Saskatoon.
that. So I'm sure it's
something. You go
something.
into Alberta, right? You see orange right there, but look at where this is. It's Leduc Wetaskiwin. Cars cost less in Wetaskiwin. New Democrats don't often win in Wetaskiwin. That is a conservative riding historically, and so you got to keep that in mind. Here in Calgary, where it's expected to be a battleground, where the Liberals hope to gain, you've only got 2 Conservative seats reporting at this point in time. Similar thing in Edmonton. You do not have results yet from the bulk of the ridings in the big cities of Canada at this point of the night. So while it's 57, 43, 10, and 1, that one, Rosie, is in Leduc Wetaskiwin. I believe that's where Pierre Poilievre had that massive Edmonton rally because that's the riding where the airport is. If the New Democrats win that, nobody knows anything about this election, and everyone has been wrong.
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, I'm willing to accept that. Let's.
But so far, the New Democrats aren't performing.
Early results
that's
and
one
lots
bad
of
thing about having so many
in.
parties.
And as you can see
people
there
get
at the bottom of your screen, 11 minutes
now
before
like,
votes.
Just like,
polls close in British Columbia and Yukon. But let's look at the
I don't know.
share
I think
of
more
the
parties
votes
is good. I can't fault
get a
it.
sense of the story so far. This
Even though it does make for
51.2%
coalition politics.
for the Liberals,
and then like there's 91 candidates on one
for the
ticket.
Conservatives. The
yeah.
NDP and the Bloc still in very, very low numbers.
You're not going to let that go, are you?
Let me show you what that looks like in terms of seat change so far.
Why don't you do
and this
something
is
about
meeting
it?
and elected. This is not the full picture yet, but look, the Liberals are up 13. And it looks like, at least at this stage of the evening, that it is at to the expense of the Bloc Québécois down 12 and the Conservatives 1. If that
I'm not surprised about that either.
Continue,
the Québécois guy came out there and basically just said,
"Fuck
y'all.
Come out of Quebec.
We should have completely different laws for us, and I don't care what happens to the rest of you."
And
that's literally what the guy said. We watched the debate.
Then they perhaps need it.
Yeah, but this Bloc Party doesn't care.
What that is pushing towards, and we'll
now
keep our
I think
eye
the
on
voters
Quebec
cared
to see
because
how
we're
many
seeing
of
that
those things turn
that's
into
where the votes are
actual
going.
flips
They're taken
for the
from
Liberal Party. Let's look
BQ.
now at Mark Carney,
Burger
the
Queen.
Liberal leader, watching results as they come in there with his wife, Diana.
So we're now well over
Fox
100
Carney.
seats.
He's
that they've
just
got
well, he was
leading
watching us.
marks
That's
on. Of
also
course,
good.
I'm looking at the actual
He's
check
also
mark
waiting,
list
of
is
course,
more
to
like
see the result
20s.
of his own riding. He is
So
putting himself up for public office for the very first time in the riding of Nepean. We'll keep our eye on how he's doing in his own riding. Okay, let's go to Adrian now, who's got some results from Ontario.
We do, yeah, we do, Rosie. Really interesting. I'd really like to start with Kapuskasing, Timmins, Mishkegwak. This was Charlie Angus's riding, right? This is the one where people wondered, I wonder what will happen in the north. Could it be that we're looking at an orange-blue transition? So far, no. Steve Black, who's the former mayor and the city councillor in Timmins, has a lead of 79. Just 3 of 206 polls reporting. This is one you have to keep an eye on. This will matter for a whole bunch of people, including the NDP, of course. So let's move on to Markham-Stouffville. Again, Helena Jazik was the incumbent there. With
of course she wants to talk about the 1 and 2 poll kind of numbers
for the
that she's
police
seeing.
officer, the Conservative candidate, a lead of 65 there. That is the sort of flip that the Conservatives will really want to hang on to. One more.
But it's a flip you can't rely on right now. That's not close to enough to even start to rely on anything
Chris
there.
Lewis, this was held by the Conservatives I guess it's been a Conservative NDP race, basically, in the past with Liberals in third. But look at what is happening here with
I think the
Chris
popular
Sutton,
vote
who's
is nearing a million.
Affairs for a mill rate council. He's got a lead of 42.
500,000 to the Liberals, almost 400,000 to the Conservatives,
but that whole area,
almost 30,000 to the Bloc,
relations, it wraps itself
40,000
around
NDP,
Windsor.
10,000 to
You can
Green.
imagine the tariff conversations that have been happening there. No one knows that better than Chris Ensing, who is joining us now. Chris, what are people saying?
They're up by 20. The Liberals comes at 50. Okay.
Adrian, the tariffs.
Nice even numbers. We're over 130 now.
Today in Windsor West, the riding I'm in right now, where the NDP
It was 70-50-10 there for a moment.
Massey's seat as the longtime incumbent. Voters were
That's
telling
an
me
incredible
that
beard.
who is going to battle Donald Trump in these conversations and negotiations for the new NAFTA is top of mind.
He needs either some hair ties for it or some oil.
Also something that they're taking very seriously. And when we think about what's happened here in Windsor, Essex, just in the past, you mentioned in Essex how the NDP.
Also, it's kind of odd because I'd probably not wear a suit. I'd be wearing like a camo cap,
fight going
camo
on
hat
in Windsor to come
that
see
beard.
Lakeshore, where the Liberals have eked out wins with slim majorities or slim wins there in that riding. And so what we see in Windsor, Essex is an area that is trying to decide what it will do next in the face of this trade war. Just very quickly here, Trump
it would be nice
because
we're
we win or we lose, whatever. I just want to figure it out.
Well, we watched this with Biden as well. That administration throwing credits at battery plants that want to build in one of these countries. Well, the battery plant that came here that is promising more than 2,500 jobs for vehicles built in Windsor, well, people are starting to wonder what is going to happen there once this election finishes and once these negotiations finish up. When we're talking about that new NAFTA, it's something where that deal was renegotiated with the IRA credits to make sure that that plant stayed here under the Trudeau government. And now people are wondering what its future holds as well. That's what's in the mind of voters as they try and decide who they're going to pick to lead them moving forward here, Adrian.
Okay, Chris, you might be in for a long night. Thanks very much, eh? Rosie?
Thanks, Adrian. Thanks, Chris. And I'm going to go to Ian now.
Let's take a look at Desnethe, Mississippi, Churchill River in Saskatchewan. Redistribution suggested that the Liberals had a chance to pick this seat up, have a chance to pick this seat up, still obviously really early in the counting. And Jim Lemaigre is a former Saskatchewan Party MLA. Buckley Belanger is a former NDP MLA, both high profile, both considered strong candidates by their parties. And we are going to be watching this riding very closely because if the Liberals were able to win this riding, it would be their first win, as I mentioned before, since Ralph Goodale won in Regina, Wascana back in 2015.
Okay, thank you for that, Ian. I can tell you that at this hour, more than 1 million votes have been counted, and obviously the counting continues. Of course, there were also more than 7.3 million of you that voted in the advance polls, but lots of counting going on right now to bring you some of these results that you're seeing here at the bottom of your screen. Take a look.
According to Global News Canada, we're over 1 million.
So the Liberals are leading and elected in 80 ridings at this stage. Conservatives
But
56.
they're also
Bloc on
saying
the board with
5,000
11.
out of
NDP was just
75,000
one
polls
where they are leading
so far.
and
Yeah, yeah.
elected. And remember, we gave you those
So there's
numbers before.
75,000
If the
total
Liberals were
polls. Every time we're
trying
seeing
to
each of these
form a
individual
majority
poll
government,
numbers
they needed to
for a
pick up
seat,
18 seats.
Yeah.
The Conservatives needed to pick
in
up
total,
44.
it's even crazier.
The
We're
Liberals
not
have
even at
picked up 15 so
10%.
far. So those
Really?
not all confirmed, but that is the trend that we are seeing so far, and we'll keep
Less
watching
than 10% of
as
polls are
more
in.
polls about to close in British Columbia and the Yukon. Catherine Cullen.
Yes, let's talk
5
about
minutes and
Alberta.
polls are
Rosemary, we're
closed.
going to start with the first projected elected in the province of Alberta by the CBC Decision Desk, Michelle Rempel-Garner, a Conservative who is certainly well-known,
15, but
vocal
it's only
member of that
15.
caucus.
I feel like we
Yeah,
gotta wait
Put
a
a
little
smile on her
been
face
conservative
because she
forever.
is the first Conservative
Oh, it's a
that the
conservative
CBC Decision
stronghold
Desk
he's
says
maintaining.
has been
Just
re-elected
like
to her
Stephanie
seat.
Kuthi, who they can
Let's
announce
take a
next.
look, though, at some other interesting races.
Oh.
Edmonton Southeast. Part of what makes this interesting, Amarjeet Sohi, former Liberal cabinet minister under Justin Trudeau, he was defeated. He ran for mayor of Edmonton. He won. He has stepped away from his mayoral duties to run in this seat, but it is worth noting it is a new riding, and if you look at what the numbers say from the 2021 election results, this is a riding that should go Conservative right now with the first poll reporting. The Conservative is in the lead in that riding. Let's move on to Edmonton Northwest. Billy Morin, this is a candidate the Conservatives are certainly excited about. Former chief of the Enoch Cree Nation, very enthusiastic about
1 out
resource
of
development, and
206
somebody that the Conservatives
polls.
would really like to have in their caucus. Finally, in Lethbridge, Rachel Thomas.
Double the
now,
votes
what
of
makes this riding
0.5%
so
of the votes.
interesting? Certainly, it is traditional.
So he has more than
Conservative
0.25% of the
Chris
votes so far.
Spearman, the Liberal candidate, the former
100%
mayor
more
of
votes, too.
Lethbridge, he was endorsed
Yeah,
by
he's
the
got 0.35
provincial
and the other guy's
NDP
got
former cabinet minister
0.15.
Shannon Phillips. So note NDP, provincial cabinet minister, endorsing a Liberal candidate. Also, Rosie, provincially, Lethbridge is 2 ridings. Lethbridge West, that went NDP. So perhaps some movement here, but Rachel Thomas definitely has some reason for enthusiasm as well. This is serious Conservative territory.
Another strong member of the Conservative caucus. Jason Kenney, want to weigh in there on Michelle Rempel-Garner winning re-election, the first Conservative re-elected in Alberta?
Yeah, well,
not surprising.
Not surprising that any of those folks would be well in the lead, and I think it's confirmation at early stage that the strong Conservative support in Alberta is holding. There are some phenomenal new candidates as well. You just saw Billy Morin on the screen. I've worked very closely with him as Premier. He was chief of the Enoch Cree First Nation and really a significant leader in economic development for First Nations in Western Canada. He, together with Ellis Ross, a former chief councillor of the Haisla First Nation out in the BC West Coast Kitimat, if those two are elected, you will see 2 very strong voices for reconciliation for First Nations to not just exercise the right to say no in consultation, but to say yes to responsible resource development. So one of the interesting aspects of this campaign has been energy has not been a dominant, but a significant issue, perhaps for the first time ever. And you may end up with some very strong pro-resource development First Nations leaders in the next parliament.
And that may be because of Donald Trump. Really, that's why we're talking about it in a different way than we had before. Okay, thank you for that, Jason Kenney. Polls closing in British Columbia in just over 2 minutes, which will add another 44, British Columbia and the Yukon, another 44 polls to our count, and which will mean that all polls are closed right across the country. That happens at 10 p.m. Eastern. 343 seats, remember, because there has been a map that has been redistributed. 172 is the magic number to get you to a majority government. We are not able to get anywhere near calling any of those things yet because results are still coming in.
We have over 160 seats.
Boy, you're not kidding about them coming in fast.
I told you.
We're almost to the halfway mark
let's look at some
of the
important
number of
ridings
meetings
that we've been talking about all night. Let's start with Peterborough.
It's obviously not the halfway mark
has
to the
always
end.
been a riding to watch. Historically, a bellwether, bucked the trend in 2021 when Michelle Ferrari.
Yeah, because I'm looking at this other site, and the actual elected numbers are still in the 20s.
436 for Emma Harrison, the small business owner, with just 6 of 308 polls reporting.
Right.
The
So
Liberals
it's still
will want
like
to hang on to that
not
one.
even close to the
Let's look
180
at the next one here. This
that
is
we're
important.
seeing leading.
Newmarket Aurora.
Of that 180,
Okay,
like 20
this
something
was
are
the
decided.
second slimmest margin
Or
of
far
victory
enough
for the
that
Liberals
it
in the
is
GTA
decided.
in 2021. But look at what is happening.
There's another one with 2 out of 200. So of course they love pulling these because if you're going to see an outlier, you'll see an outlier early, and then that outlier will either disappear or won't.
That is on trend, certainly for what the Conservatives want to see. They poured a lot into that riding. One last one to look at. This is important. This is Niagara Falls, Niagara on the Lake.
Sorry if you hear
So
shouting
this
in
has
my
gone
background.
back and forth a little bit between the Liberal and the
I mean,
Conservative.
even I can hear her through my
evening.
headphones, so I
Only
know
3
she's
of
shouting
200
something right
polls
now.
reporting just a lead of
They should
8.
make something like a microphone.
But this is a riding that's been conservative for the last
I didn't
25
think mine
years.
was that sensitive, but you know.
Definitely smaller in redistribution. The Liberals were
Oh,
hoping
it's
that would help
over.
them out.
22
Rosie?
seconds, and then
But a
it's
very,
over.
very small lead of 8 votes. So we'll
20
see. Mark Carney
seconds.
was down there
Count
pretty
it down.
recently as
Also,
well,
look at
making his
seats to
case about
come.
Canada, the U.S.
172.
and taking on Donald Trump.
That's the halfway.
Another area
We're
where, of
halfway
course,
there.
that argument resonates very strongly.
there.
Okay, polls closing in British
we
Columbia
didn't pay
and
enough
the
to keep
Yukon.
going
In
with
just
the
moments,
song.
if you're in line to vote, stay there because you still get to do it even after.
We're
the
legally
polls are
fine with how much I did there, by the way, Mike.
It is 7 p.m. Pacific. Polls are now closing
Yep.
in the
7 p.m.
westernmost parts of this
PYT.
country. There
Oh,
are
yeah, oh, white.
43 ridings in beautiful British Columbia and 1 in the Yukon.
But those 44 seats
That
may
means
not
that polls
matter
have
a
closed
huge amount.
right across
Right
the
at the
country.
end.
343
Right.
polls
Might.
reporting. And British Columbia, aren't you
Or
excited?
the
We
numbers may
haven't
be in a
called
place
government
where
yet.
it
That
just
rarely happens to you. So
unless
guess what?
something
Your
hugely
votes are going to
changes,
matter here
they
as we
just
get
don't
ready
matter.
to decide where this is going to go. Let's give you an indication of what we're noticing already, and that is the change in the share of vote. Liberals taking off
Yeah,
now
the
at this
popular
stage,
vote has started to
over
widen quite a
50%,
bit.
and the Conservatives at 38.8, which, to be clear, is a very good score for Conservatives on any other normal election. But this election has been unusual, and you can see the NDP and the Bloc not performing where they normally would be. That, too, has been the story of this election. Let me show you now what seats change looks like. Okay. Let's go through this. Liberals seem to be at this stage leading or elected in 17 seats. Conservatives down 5, Bloc down 11. That would be a devastating amount of losses for the Bloc Québécois in Quebec.
All right,
NDP
just got more
down
from our
1. Of
American
course, that
intel
was going to change
source.
as British Columbia starts to
It looks like,
report.
yep,
But
they're
remember,
showing
that
exactly what I
number
just
to
heard.
keep in your
Everything
head
is
here
coming
about
from everyone
whether
except
we can
liberals.
get to a majority government
Liberals are just
is for
taking
the
from
Liberals
everyone
to
else.
gain 18
And
seats.
who would
They are
expect
one away
otherwise, you
right
know?
now in
You're always
our
going to have that one
projections.
kid on the
Not
playground
everything
who's like, I
confirmed,
want to
but
take
they are
this.
tracking
And then you have those
towards that
other
at
3
this
kids on the
hour,
playground
and
who
a
are like,
lot of
why are
it
you
coming
taking
at
my
the
toys?
expense of the
And Bloc
Bloc
Québécois is the
Québécois.
kid that like
Let's go
is getting
now
beat
to
up the
Catherine.
worst at
Yeah,
school.
let's try to look a little bit closer at what
Welcome
that
back,
story
Mike.
is.
I was
the
just filling them
Liberals
in
and
with my
the
new
Bloc
American
Québécois.
intel I
Let's start
just
with
got.
looking a bit at the big picture in the province of Quebec. The seat change, the Liberals up 14 seats.
I mean,
the
is it
Bloc
really
down
Bloc
11, the
losing all their
Conservatives
shit? Like, this
losing
is
3
barely
seats
a
in Quebec.
liberal
But
conservative
again,
fight
these are
here. This
still
is like a
relatively
liberal
early numbers. Let's
Bloc
dig
fight.
into some of what we're seeing in the province. Here is a riding.
I
that
really
folks
think
are
this
gonna
reflects
remember the
that
name
French
of,
guy going out there
LaSalle
and
and
saying,
Marc
I don't
Verdun.
care about
That
Canada.
consequential
That's what he
by-election
said.
in the fall. This
He
it's
said,
on the
if you
island of
pass a law,
Montreal. This is
it doesn't
part
work
of the
here,
Liberal
and I don't care about the rest
Chateau
of you.
right?
If you're going to do something,
And yet,
if
the
you're
Bloc
going to do
Québécois
something, we're going to
Andrew
separate.
Sauvé, a former Bloc
They've been
Québécois
saying
staffer,
that that's been Quebec since the 90s.
won in that
Look,
by-election.
I
Now,
watched the debate. The
Liberals
guy
have,
said it in a way
star
that I
candidate
think
Why do
is
you
being
think the
reflected
name's
in
called
the
former
American
Quebecois?
president of IBM
Bloc,
Canada.
whatever.
Okay,
Right now,
if
in
you're
polls
going to say
reporting,
no
is
to
the
what I'm
lead
saying,
by
then
almost
why?
300 votes. Let's move
Because
over
give me a
to
reason why we're saying
Shefford,
what we're
where
saying.
again, the Bloc
Brainwashed?
Québécois
I don't know.
incumbent Andréane LaRouche
So we're
in
going to go with
second,
brainwashing?
and in the lead, the Liberal
Really?
candidate
I don't agree
Felix
with
Dion. I
brainwashing.
believe he's
Because
a
you have
councillor
no,
in
like, who's
Grimrandy.
doing the brainwashing?
And finally, Rimouski.
Who's doing the
Alexandre Rayford,
brainwashing?
again, a name
Mark
that would be
Carney,
known
of
well
course.
in that area. The
Also,
former
how does
director
this
of
brainwashing
the
work?
Métis
Because these
Gardens,
were
in the area,
Bloc
English
people who
Gardens,
are no
and
longer
the Bloc
Bloc people. So
Québécois,
if anything, they've been
incumbent Maxime
anti-brainwashed or
Blanchet-Jonca
fixed from their
in second. So
brainwashing,
all, again,
right?
Rosie, you know, these are
Because these are
just
people who are no
some of the
longer
polls
voting
that
for
are
the
coming
Bloc.
in. Now,
Okay,
interesting to see
we're
how
trying to
those
explain
numbers
why
are
the Bloc
Yeah,
is losing
Métis Gardens
voters.
also just a
And your
lovely
reason is
place.
brainwashing? So the
We have
conservatives
just 2 ads of
brainwash
places
people?
to vacation. Chantal, I want to
Liberals
get your
just
take
passed
before I
100
get
seats.
some more results because
Did
if
the
these, if
conservatives
this poll
brainwash people.
And the bloc is trending or looking projected
Well,
to
that's
lose
no
as
way to
many
win,
as 11
okay?
seats.
Because brainwash
people.
They're not going to be reliable constituents for future elections. You can't win in this way and expect to have a real future. It's short-sighted.
But
brainwashing may work in the short term, but it's not a good long term.
The Liberals in Quebec that I have seen in decades.
I can't tell. This is all like really light colors. How do you know?
Oh, I don't think I was around.
Reddish.
Jean Chrétien never won a majority of Quebec seats. So you go back all the way to Jean
The darker
Chrétien,
red, the more is counted.
Brian Mulroney wiped them off the map. So I think you'd have to go back to Pierre Trudeau to this, but it's early.
It's early. It's early. But that's still it's early. But it's still fascinating that someone who
I mean,
at the beginning of the campaign was not speaking
but like
French as well as he was at the end.
It's because they need so many seats and they're not going to get
to Quebec.
enough.
If this is where things go.
But I'm also wondering, and the numbers are still coming, whether the Conservatives are also having a difficult night in Quebec.
Okay.
Because at this point, they are under what is called the paying zone. In percentage points, they're below 20%. That's not when you get votes but not seats. You need to get over that. And at this point, who knows? Because we're still missing a lot of seats and a lot of posts. But
just so you
for the
know,
Liberals
during
who
one
want
of your
40
breaks,
seats,
I told a big
they're
secret about
ahead
you.
in 33.
And then I said the only way you'll find out is
not
if you
too
go back
bad.
and watch the whole video.
And if that is true, that the Conservatives are going to suffer in Quebec, that
The audience
I
is
think
shocked
speaks
about what
to
I
some of the
revealed
choices that Pierre Poilievre
because it's
made.
contradictory to what they've been thinking all
We
night.
will talk more about that as results firm up. Ian has some results though now.
Yeah, let's look at your home
Yep.
province,
But I left the truth
Manitoba,
out,
in
Mike.
particular, 3 ridings in Winnipeg.
I couldn't sit
that
here
are
and let the
reporting
truth just
results
swallow.
right now. This one would be, if the Liberals were able
Why
to
didn't
keep it
Deborah
through
take a
the night,
picture?
a
And what's
pickup.
the
I'm
APP
laughing
party?
because, of course, I can read the numbers just as well as you can. It's really
Well, they're
early.
showing right
What's
now.
interesting about this, besides the fact that it's an NDP incumbent is in second place, is that Raul Walia, 23 years old,
Aboriginal
got
People's
the
Party of
nomination
Canada.
here in the old days.
So that's one of
December
those First Nations,
2024. Remember then? Remember the
candidates, right?
prospects for the Liberals at that point? So I don't think when he became the candidate, he expected to be possible that he could go to Ottawa. We'll see what happens in Winnipeg Centre as the evening unfolds. Let's go now to Winnipeg West and see what's happening there. And Marty Morantz, the Conservative incumbent, is in a lead, not a huge lead. Doug Elson has been the MP here before. This is the third time, I
picture
think,
NDP
these
candidate.
two very well-known
Yeah, it's kinda
politicians,
weird.
and Doug Elson, also an ER doc, so well-known for that as well, are facing off in Winnipeg West. So another one we're going to be looking at
Look at
very
all these
closely.
places,
And in
though. Like,
Winnipeg
none of
North,
that's
no
been
surprise
counted
to
yet.
see Kevin Lamoureux, the incumbent, in the lead. But I'll tell you what is interesting is that if you look at the percentages last time around, the NDP was in second place with 28% of the vote.
Yeah,
Their
looks like
support right
Mark
now
Carney's gonna be
has
the next prime
plummeted
minister.
to 8%, and almost all of that has been picked up, and this is early, I know, not by the Liberals, but by the Conservatives.
Right.
So just kind of interesting. That's
Yeah, Conservatives
you
are
would
picking up the
expect
New
Kevin
Democrats
Lamoureux
voters,
to
and
prevail in that
Liberals are
riding. I
picking
mean,
up
we'll
the
see what
Bloc
happens.
voters.
But it's fascinating to me to see the change in support between the NDP and the Conservatives.
Yeah, Kevin Lamoureux hugely popular in that riding, so we'll see what whether
It
that
speaks to
continues.
the
Just want to tell you
dissatisfaction
that the
with
Liberals continue
Jagmeet
to
and
do well
dissatisfaction
here
with Trudeau.
tonight, but also want to tell you that there are
Had
85
Jagmeet held Trudeau
ridings
more
where
accountable,
it
they'd
is
probably stay
very
with him
close still.
and vote
And
with
so
him
we
still, but
might
he-
well be in for a long night.
You know, we
as,
did stories on it.
Get through all of these results.
Jagmeet was
and-
kissing
and track towards being able to
Justin, and then
project a government
Jagmeet was
capital.
We're
slapping
going to
Justin,
go back to
and then
Nova Scotia
Jagmeet
for
was
just
kissing
one
Justin,
riding,
and then
Rosie,
Jagmeet
one
was
that we
slapping
knew was
Justin.
going to be a real scrap tonight.
It's
but
like,
we've got
pick what your opinion of
elected
the guy
in
is.
South Shore, St. Margaret's. Let's
You
take a
know?
look. The Liberal, Jessica Fancy Landry, projected elected in that riding. Rick Perkins took this riding from the Liberals in the last election, but it was not
Damn,
to be
that's
for him
looking like
this
a flip.
time out.
That's
He
a
had
lot
an
of polls
additional
there.
challenge because, of course, the NDP did not run an official candidate
Well-
in this riding, so there will be questions, I think, about what happened to that vote. Although when you look at the NDP vote across the board, you know, it hasn't been all that substantial across the country, Rosemary, so perhaps that won't have been that much of a factor. But nonetheless, Jessica Fancy Landry projected elected in South Shore St. Margaret's.
That's a
117 seats.
significant
I
flip.
mean, we are just cooking through
Okay.
them. Last time I
Thank
paid
you
attention to
for
the numbers,
that.
it was
I'm gonna
170
show
to
you
come.
a board right now to try and explain where we're
Another
at
50
and
or
what you
60
should
have
be
been added to
watching
the
for
board.
as the results continue to tick in from polls right across the country at this stage. This is where the Liberals are right now. They are leading or elected in 123 ridings. Let me show you the next piece of that. That is the pink seats that you're seeing there. Those are incumbents. Those are the seats that they would have to now win. 51 more if they want to track towards a majority. And if they were to win those 51 incumbents, incumbency, as we've been talking about, does give you an advantage, but if they were to win that, they would surpass the 172 they need to get to a majority. So they need to hold those leading and elected in 123 that you see on your screen.
So there's a
They need
path.
to hold the
It's a
51
narrow path,
incumbents
and
that
it
are
could get
there,
very,
and
very
then they're
narrow
on-
with 2 or 3
and
flips.
then
It could
they're on their
disappear.
way, and things are
So it may be a
tracking
minority
in this
party.
direction so far tonight. But again, many close races,
And
we're
are we going to do the same
watching
with
some
the
of those. I
conservative
think
numbers?
David,
I'm curious how many
wants to talk
incumbents
to
they
us
have
now.
left.
Yeah,
No,
so
we
just
don't
to give
care.
you an idea of how close this is, when we
Okay.
were talking about Atlantic Canada earlier, it was 22 to
Feel
10,
like we should have
right?
done the
22
conservative
Liberals,
numbers.
10 Conservatives. Well, there are 2 ridings, Terra Nova, where Anthony Germain is running for the Liberals, where the advanced polls offer the hope of them getting over the top there. And in Central Nova, the advanced polls have put Sean Fraser back in the lead, as that has now gone to red. So we're to a 23-9 count in Atlantic Canada now. You move into Quebec. Chantal was saying this is the best early results you've seen I'm in Ontario. My apologies to the people of Quebec. It was the best night she's seen for Liberals in a long time at the start of an election. Well, look at this, what we're still waiting for. You know, Rosie was saying the Liberals are up seats. We still don't have a lot of seats in from the island of Montreal, where the Liberals are going to be strong, and in some of these battlegrounds on the South Shore in particular, where the Liberals and the Bloc are in a fight that really could determine whether the Liberals can get to this majority government that the polls have been suggesting was available for them in this election. And it's a similar situation in Ontario. We're starting to get things populated. You're seeing a lot more red getting there in the GTA, but still not out in sort of the Halton region and the Peel region. We're still waiting on a lot of seats there. And when you go into southwestern Ontario, look, we are seeing red in Windsor, red in London, and we're still waiting on some of southwestern Ontario where Liberals are hoping to gain. I'll show you one last thing before I send it back to Rosie, and that's in Manitoba. Because the urban centers are where the Liberals are this majority is going to live and die tonight. There's only 2 ridings in from Winnipeg, so still a lot to come in the big cities of Canada. Rosie?
Thank you very much for that, David Cochran. And some news for all of you. Canada, get ready. Our CBC News decision desk is ready to make a call.
Here it is. Rejecting minority.
Canada's next government will be a Liberal government. It is not yet clear at this hour whether it will be a minority or majority. Because of some of those close races we were talking about, this marks a 4th Liberal mandate. Very rare in Canadian politics. But the Liberal Party, led by Mark Carney, has pulled it off. A stunning reversal, a Liberal comeback with a first-time politician as leader. You're looking live there at the Liberal Party headquarters right now.
Yeah, they could be wrong still. Lots of time, but yeah, I believe it's over. Whether majority or minority, I'm not sure.
Okay, remarkable, as we said, reversal in political fortunes for the Liberal Party that was thought perhaps to be left for dead just months ago, has now made this incredible comeback, remarkable comeback, and is going to form government yet again with someone who has never been elected to public office before. We're waiting on results from his riding tonight. Mark Carney, the 24th Prime Minister, will now be the 25th Prime Minister as well. Let me show you how it happened. Here is the vote share, the share of vote that we've been showing you through the night. The Liberals over 50%, the Conservatives at 38.6%, which again, we've been saying in a regular election would have been a remarkable share of the vote for them. But the story really in what's happening with the other parties on the board there, the Bloc and the NDP, not even reaching 5% at this stage. Let me show you the seat change that allows us to call for a Liberal government. 23 seats are leading and elected in. The Liberals are up. The Conservatives down 5. The Bloc down 12 at this stage.
Yeah, this is what I was saying. Like, they're literally taking from everyone on the playground.
Out of the realm
But most of all, the
even
Bloc
for people
is getting
inside the
pummeled.
Bloc, but would be very disappointing for them. And the NDP now down 6. The NDP right now on your screen only leading or elected in 2 ridings.
Like,
remember, you need 12 to get
have
official
caused the
party
fucking
status.
problem we're
I'm going to go over to David to give us a sense of how we got here.
Well, look, it's a bit of what we were, at the risk of repeating myself, but that's going to happen a lot on election night. There are 32 seats in Atlantic Canada. We said the path to majority for the Liberals is 25. Right now they sit at 23, and I can tell you, this riding in Terra Nova, my buddy Terry Roberts is at the...
I'll tell you, Mark Carney almost certainly didn't cause a recession in Canada.
The air has gone out of the place because the
Any recession in Canada would likely just be a reverberation of something that happened in America. And the cause is actually going to need to be looked at from that perspective.
But that gets them a little bit closer. We go into Quebec, you see a lot of red in a lot of places, and you're going to see even more red.
Well, and even what I'm saying right now is basically saying, no, you fucking didn't, Carney. You don't even have the pull to do
in
that.
Quebec to be on a path to a majority. They're sitting at 42.
Canada
And Montreal
it's just a
and the North
reflection
Shore
of
and the
America.
South Shore haven't populated. Down to 40.
The vast
I'm told.
majority
It's
of the
changing
time,
in real time.
economically.
But still, the areas where they're strong is still needs to come in. And
If we're having
that
a
is
hard
sign
time,
of hope for them.
you're
This
going to
is
be
why
having
you
a hard
see
time.
a minority government is
Yeah,
almost
but
certain
he
at this
just
point,
said,
or is certain at this point,
yeah,
and a
And
majority
he
government
didn't
is still
fix it.
very
He
much
didn't
in
fix
play.
anything.
Let's go into Ontario and let's go to that key fortress, one of the 4 big pillars for the Liberal governments that have been elected since 2015. You still see a tremendous amount of red, certainly in the city of Toronto and in the areas around it, punctuated with a little bit of blue right now. The latest numbers I had is that the Liberals were at
thinks
56
that leading
seats
the
and they're up
bank
2 seats in
is
Ontario. They're
doing
now at
something. But
63 seats
no.
in Ontario.
Sorry, go look at what
They
America
said
did
they
between
needed to
2008 and
be at
2013
80,
to get out
so
of the
they're
recession.
tracking towards
But
that
that we
because a
never
lot
wanted
of
to
these
admit was a
seats that will
recession.
fill in over
The
the course of the
housing
night,
bubble.
history
Go
and
back and look at what
polling
we
tells
did.
us that these will go Liberal.
And then
Now,
see how that ended
let's
up
go into
basically happening in
Manitoba.
Canada right
The Liberals
afterwards.
are currently sitting at 4 seats. We had suggested they would want to get 6 here to build up to a total of 10 on the prairies to be at a majority level. They have 1, obviously, in the north right now where they're leading in the NDP-held riding of Churchill. And they've got a couple of 3 seats right now in Winnipeg, and these are also seats where the Liberals will be competitive once we get more results throughout the night. So there is still upward
Yeah, I mean, this guy,
potential for the
Carney, was
Liberals
part of Justin
as they
Trudeau's
try to get to that
cabinet.
magic number
He was,
of 172.
yeah, he was a part of his cabinet.
And
He
this
was
helps
part of the
right
Economic
here.
Growth
This is
Task
Desnethne,
Force.
Mississippi, Churchill River. That's a
That is.
Liberal.
Either way, he
leading
was
in Saskatchewan.
with
Do not
Trudeau.
adjust
It's not
your
like we
set.
got a
That's
new
real
government.
thing. It's
This
not
is similar
officially
to
projected
how we had
elected yet,
Biden and then
but this
Kamala
is a
was
chance
running.
for the
Well,
Liberals
Kamala
to
wasn't
break
running
through in
anything different than
Saskatchewan.
Biden.
For the first
It
time
would have been another
since Ralph
Biden for
Goodale
years.
was a member of Parliament.
Had Kamala
And here
won.
in Alberta, you see a lot of blue. This is where a lot
And
of
she
the
made that
Conservative
clear,
seats are
like,
coming from.
I'm
But
not
you
even
got to
making that up.
zoom
She
in
said
on
that.
Calgary, where the Liberals are leading right now in Calgary Centre, and you got to zoom in on Edmonton. These are going to be the areas where the Liberals and the New Democrats are going to be in a battle. Those 2 seats that I just showed, those will be pickups right now for the Liberals if those results hold. So, Rosie, you can see a roughly even performance in the Atlantic with the potential of it to get back to where it was and maybe grow a little bit. A good early start in Quebec, decent numbers in Ontario, presence in the prairies. Still too early to say exactly what's going to happen in British Columbia. But, you know, BC often complains about being the empty net goal on election night. They might be the winner tonight when the results come in there.
Okay, and one of the reasons we have yet to call what kind of government Canada will have is because there are 100 ridings where the vote margin is about 100 votes. And that is simply too close to call for us and for the decision desk. And so we're going to wait to be sure before we get to that point. And that's partly why, as David said, British Columbia could be awfully important here tonight. You're always important, British Columbia, but even more important in terms of forming government for Mark Carney to become now, who is Prime Minister right now, but stays Prime Minister, the 24th Prime Minister, and now for sure won't have any problems beating Charles Tupper's record of being Prime Minister for only 68 days. He's going to hang in there a little bit longer, apparently. Ashley Burke is at Liberal headquarters where they are dealing with the news and waiting for more news in terms of what kind of government they're going to have for this 4th mandate, Ashley.
You heard the reaction here in the room, Rosie. People erupted. They were cheering. They are excited. Just moments before that, we were talking about how they were feeling. People are still cautiously optimistic. People in the campaign, they want a majority government. And as you just mentioned, they're thinking, could it come down to BC? They're hoping that as the results come in, it'll become a bit clearer, but that's what they're waiting for. This, as you mentioned, is one of the most dramatic reversals in political fortune that we've seen in recent Canadian history. Just last year, the Liberals were tanking in the polls. Justin Trudeau, after he left, Mark Carney came in and turned things around. But we've really been watching him on the spot during this campaign learn how to be a politician. You know, we've seen him have to try to figure out how to navigate photo ops. And over the campaign, we've seen him get more comfortable with that, including being in crowds and talking to people. But as you mentioned, there were questions about if he would be the shortest serving Prime Minister or not. 45 days he's been Prime Minister, and now Canadians tonight have decided that they want him to stay on and lead this country. After he's really been hammering home his message about during this campaign about who is best to deal with Donald Trump. Rosie?
Okay, Ashley Burke coming from Liberal headquarters where there are a lot of happy people there tonight, but we'll see how happy they are because we still have to call what kind of government Mark Carney is going to lead, a minority or a majority, but we should remind you that a fourth mandate like this, incredibly rare in Canadian politics. The last time was from 1993 to 2006 under 2 leaders. That was Jean Chrétien and Paul Martin. Some similarities here, again, because this is happening with 2 different leaders. Chantal, your thoughts?
but it is also that Mark Carney has succeeded in doing what John Turner and Kim Campbell could not.
You are
That
right.
is, become the new leader of a very unpopular government, get a boost in the poll. That's all par for the course. But to hold that lead long enough to not go in that portrait gallery as someone about whom the kids ask, who's that
guy? Yeah.
Right. That is quite an achievement when you go back 4 months to where we were. This is not the election night that anyone imagined we would have. And I'm guessing it's not the election night, looking at those numbers, that the NDP imagined either, or the Bloc.
No, pretty devastating numbers, and we'll come back to them. But I want to get Arif Virani in because you are a former Liberal cabinet minister. Still happy with that decision not to run, are you?
I'm very happy with that decision, as is my family. But, but I'm also equally delighted with what's transpiring. I mean, what we've seen is something that is truly quite remarkable.
Yes.
And I think what I'm really proud about tonight is Canadians, how strongly they
wake up and somehow the Liberals or the
them,
Conservatives like
but also just
win
really
overnight.
discerning.
And we all wake up and we're all
making
like, yeah, why'd you count it so early?
What's on offer? An individual with a business background who had
How many
navigated
total things are in
world
right now?
economies through difficult crises.
8,000.
Another politician who is frankly still
8,000
offering
out of
catchword phrases
75,000.
and
We are just
running
above
an election
10%.
as if we were back in November or December. Things changed.
90% of the votes have not been considered in the numbers we are seeing
and Donald Trump entered in a
Does that
big way.
alarm you that
And we saw
90%
other
of the numbers aren't being
conservative politicians in
involved?
this country pivot, like provincially, Doug Ford in this province. We saw an inability for a pivot on the part of Pierre Poilievre, and I think you're seeing the results. People have decided they want mature, professional leadership, and that's what they're getting with Mark Carney. And I think it's a really important time for Canada.
Their
because
confidence
there's a lot of
level
hard
is
work to be done.
Yeah, it'll be
alarming
interesting
as
to
the
see what
confidence
kind of
level is here in
government we end up
America
with here,
when
Andrew,
newscasters
because,
just start saying, you
know,
win
that
this, you
also
win that. It's like,
sends a message. If
you're too
Canadians
confident.
opt for
You may be
minority
right, but you
government,
shouldn't be
that
confident
also
about
is
it.
a message to the Liberals and to Conservatives. But what do you make of the fact that this has happened? Because it is right. It is a remarkable thing.
Yeah, it would not have happened without Donald Trump, I don't think.
Yeah.
If Mark Carney had simply come in and said, well, I'm change, I'm a new prime minister, I'm not sure that would have been enough to carry the day. I'm not sure if Trump alone would be enough to carry the day, though. I think it's the combination of, so far as the first part of the campaign in particular, focused on Trump as the issue and therefore focused on leadership and the relative qualities of the two-party leaders. That was clearly to Carney's advantage, but I think probably what put him over the top was he was also enough change for enough people.
Right, right.
He wasn't, on its own, it wouldn't be enough change, but the two things together, I think, was enough to put him over the top.
Althea, what do you make of the win?
I agree with everything Andrew said, but I would add, basically, it's New Democrats that have handed Mark Carney the ability to become prime minister, remain prime minister. And for them, the fear was, Donald Trump, but also Pierre Poilievre. They decided that they really feared Pierre Poilievre more than they feared another Liberal government. And so they've basically abandoned their party in droves and possibly handing Mark Carney a majority government. So it's not... you guys should send the NDP a thank you note.
I think progressive voters in my riding of
The Green Party has 1% of the vote.
The team there, but I think progressive voters really had to make a difficult decision, and that was simply that in the face of what the country is facing, we need to select a prime minister and a government. That's more important than anything else. That relates to the CBC.
New Democrats are under 5%.
Linguistic rights. That relates to
like
protecting
they dropped
rights.
hard.
And you had a choice between somebody who would empower Donald Trump and somebody who would confront Donald Trump. That's the choice that Canadians have made tonight, and I think they made the right choice.
Okay, and the NDP sitting right now at 7, leading our elected. Let's get some more information about how we got here, how we were able to call a Liberal win tonight. Catherine Cullen's got some of those results.
Yeah, and obviously, Rosie, part of this picture has to do with Quebec and what has happened with the Bloc Québécois. So let's take a look. The Liberals up 12 seats. Yes, one of them coming from the Conservatives, but most of that, the vast majority, at the expense of the Bloc, again, based on the numbers that we're seeing early. Let's see where it's happening. We're going to take a quick zip around the suburbs of the island of Montreal.
It's the leaders of the party saying they don't give a fuck
and you can see here
about the
Liberal
tariffs.
candidate in the lead. Let's go to Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. We're going to stay on the North Shore. And again, the Liberal candidate with the Bloc Québécois incumbent in second. We'll head down to the South Shore, Longueuil, Saint-Hubert, and again, yes, the Liberal candidate in the lead with the Bloc incumbent in second. That pattern being repeated both north and south of the island of Montreal. Liberals looking like they're going to gain at the expense of the Bloc. That's a big part of what's happening tonight.
And we'll look at more of those results as they firm up, and we can project elected. Ian Hannah-Mansing's got some of those right now, some results anyway.
Yeah, so not projected elected, but still interesting trend lines. And let's start with Churchill. Kiwanatuk-Aski. Nikki Ashton has been the MP here for the NDP since 2008. In 2015, she almost lost to Rebecca Chartrand. There was a difference of 3 percentage points. And right now, early, but still, when you look at those numbers, fairly significant lead at this point for the Liberal candidate. This is Kildonan St. Paul, one of the Winnipeg ridings, and Raquel Dancho is the incumbent for the Conservatives. She's won 2 elections in a row. Thomas Nakin's a relative newcomer. Hard to find information about him, but he was acclaimed as a candidate when the polls suggested there was little chance of winning, and right now he's in the lead there. And let's just look at Regina Wascana. This is interesting. It's super close. When I started speaking a few minutes ago, Jeffrey Walters was in the lead. The big question in Regina Wascana for a lot of people is the number of times the Liberals won there. Was it Ralph Goodale that was the factor, or was it Liberal support? And a lot of people wondering what's going to happen there tonight. As you can see, it is close, but the Conservatives are in the lead.
Oh, they definitely could. Because that's the most
Adrian, you've got
unusual result we're seeing, and it could easily be the most undone result we're seeing.
Vote changes in Ontario.
But I have a feeling this is the reality.
Liberals up 9.5
As an American, I can say this is the reality.
points. Conservatives also
based on
up
having watched the debate.
9.0, but look at the NDP down 12.7. That is where the votes are largely coming from. So what does that look like? Let's start with Sault Ste. Marie, Algoma. This is a riding that Terry Sheehan is ahead by 428. Interesting, because the Liberals only picked it up by 247 last time. Still just 35 of 287 polls reporting. If we move on to the Bay of Quinte, this is a riding we've been keeping an eye on. The Liberals picked it up in 2015. They wanted it desperately because this is the sort of riding they need if they want to get a majority. They've got a lead of 193 with just 15 polls reporting. And the last one, which is a big one for Fortress Toronto, if you will, is Leslie Church and Toronto St. Paul's with a lead of 701. She lost that to Dawn Stewart in July by just 600 some votes. So they're counting on that lead.
And remember, that is part of the story. Thank you, Adrian. That is part of the story here, is that a lot of these ridings are still close, and that's why we cannot yet tell you what kind of government Mark Carney will lead. But yes, in case you missed the big moment, the Liberals have secured a 4th mandate led by Mark Carney, who is at this stage waiting to see whether he will be elected in his own riding in Nepean. Ferrani, what are you hearing from your Liberal friends? Are you getting lots of texts? Are they thinking that a majority is still within reach here? What are they saying?
I think obviously a majority government is aspirational. That's what we would like to have. You heard Dominic talk about that earlier, but I think people are elated. I mean, we know where the party was prior to Christmas. We know where we were in early January. The fact that it's been such a remarkable swing is a testament to optimism. It's a testament to Mark Carney's leadership. But again, it's a testament to Canadian voters. And I think, when I think back about what's really changed in the last little while, I think if you're looking at somebody who need to stand up to an American threat that is as clear and demonstrative as Donald Trump, and you have somebody who's posturing themselves that they want to be that person, Pierre Poilievre, who shows an inability to stand up to Preston Manning and Danielle Smith, I think you don't have the right individual. When you have somebody who still continues to speak in 3-word slogans as opposed to presenting an accurate plan, an outlined plan, a professionalized plan, you don't have the right person. Canadians have realized this. And as I said earlier on the show, I think Quebecers have realized this, notwithstanding linguistic limitations, notwithstanding concerns about Francophone rights. Those are all very valid concerns. But when you're facing a threat of that size from the American neighbor, you need to put that aside and vote in terms of selecting a leader. And that's what Canadians have done. And my colleagues are all keen on securing a majority. A majority government would allow us to have that strong mandate that Prime Minister Carney is seeking to effectuate the change that we need to see, to grow the economy, to build the collaboration, to diversify our trade partners, and to continue to make progress.
Althea made a little bit of a squint there, winced a little bit as you spoke, so I'm going to let her talk before I get some more results.
Well, I was going to say on the whole, who we should give a testament to is all the Liberal backbenchers who tried to get Justin Trudeau to leave.
Y'all have silly
Freeland,
ass
who
names.
finally,
Which
frankly,
silly ass name in
knifed him.
Ottawa
If
is
Justin
it?
Trudeau had not left, there is no way we would see the
Is
results
it just
that we are
East
seeing
Ottawa,
right now,
West Ottawa,
even
Lower
with Donald Trump
Ottawa?
in the White House.
What do we?
So
I mean,
there's other people
There's lots of
who
things going
helped
on. Yeah.
create
it's
the
insanely
scenario that we
impossible to
find
Google
ourselves in at the
what
moment.
is your
And also,
freaking result
pretty
right
soon
now,
people
Carney.
won't be able to vote, so you don't need to convince them to vote for
Yes, you've already won. You've already won.
The votes have already been cast.
We're just waiting to see. Yes, we're just waiting to see how it goes. But it's hard to shake it off. I understand. I think Ian has some early results.
Yeah, in British Columbia, as we've said, the Conservatives, Liberals, and NDP have done well there. They certainly did well there in 2021, and so there's a lot of potential, particularly for the Liberals and the Conservatives, to pick up seats. Let's look at some early results with some potential changes. North Island, Powell River, this has been a stronghold for the NDP, and right now in the lead there. So we'll keep an eye on that. Let's take a look at in the interior, Silkameen, South Okanagan, West Kootenay. Again, relatively close, but this is would be a pickup for the Conservatives that they could hang on to this. Helena Conans is a former professional tennis player.
Now instead of looking for
and
Carney, I can look for
competed in
Nepean
Wimbledon
riding
and
results.
at the U.S. Open. I did not know that, and I find that really interesting. And
That's so
South
freaking
Surrey,
hard. They,
White
like,
Rock,
bury it.
obviously really low numbers. We just wanted to show this to you because it would be a change if this were to hold. And interesting, Ernie Klassen was acclaimed as the candidate.
The first
I
result
think
would
we're
be
seeing a
good
lot of that
because it said
across the
live
country,
federal
right? Where
election results.
candidates who were acclaimed when maybe nobody else
You
really
can find
wanted the
Nepean on the
nomination. I'm not
map.
sure if that's what happened there, but you know, some of those people are going to end up
Might be able to
going
see it on one of
to
the
the
live
House of
result
Commons.
maps.
Okay. All right. Let's have a look at someone who is having a difficult night, but at least his own riding is secure. That's Yves-François Blanchet in the riding of Belleuil-Chambly. He has won handily in that riding, but he is probably not enjoying the evening so far, given where things are tracking for the Bloc. Remember, at last vote, the Bloc Québécois had 35 seats, and right now they're tracking towards 23. We'll continue to watch some of those numbers because, as we've told you, the vote is changing. It is close still in many, many ridings across the country, and that is why we are waiting to tell you whether you have a minority or majority government. Rafi Boudjikanian, I can see you there. Yves-François Blanchet has been elected. We have Decision Desk has projected him elected, but not a strong evening so far for the Bloc Québécois. What are you hearing?
What about Pierre? What about?
It is not, and you'll forgive me. I was just turning around to try to figure out who they were cheering there. There have been a lot of cheers for people you'd expect to get reelected, like Yves-François Blanchet and a couple of others like Alexis Brunel-Duceppe, you know, like a stalwart of the party. But this is not the results they're looking for. 23 seats, I mean, that's kind of a number where if the Liberals get a majority, that's not a great night for the Bloc Québécois. They're trying to cheer up here. They're trying to be, you know, enthusiastic. They did have one major win. We were talking about Gaspésie earlier. Well, they won that riding. Radio-Canada announced that they project a win for Alexis Deschênes, that star candidate, who would be taking that riding from Diane Le Boutillier, a Liberal who has been there for a while. And the crowd erupted into enthusiastic cheers here when that happened. So that was one that's a take from the Liberals. So that's
no
a
idea
real
how
reason
he's
for
doing
them
his
to be
own
happy.
thing.
But
And
for
no
the
one
rest of it,
cares
I mean, they're
at
really
all.
just sort of trying to hold on.
Even though that would be
Got a little
hilarious
bit of a
and
show
important if
here.
he lost it, right?
They keep inviting
Like, if he
incumbents
loses it,
or
what
candidates
happens?
to come up and talk to the crowd.
Is he still the
There's an
PM?
MC asking them all sorts of questions about, you know, how did your campaign go and what do you think of Yves-François Blanchet's messages, and they're just sort of trying to hold on to hope at this point.
Okay, Rafi Boudjikanian, thank you so much from Montreal. We will be back to you, of course. Perhaps we can show a bit of how the vote share in Quebec changed. Let me know when we can go to that. But I'll go to Chantal, I think, if I can. Yves-François Blanchet, this is his third election, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah.
Yes, and he probably is feeling better when he compares his fate to what could be happening to the NDP. Yeah. I don't think anyone at this point is looking to challenge the leadership of Yves-François Blanchet. A lot of people in Quebec over the campaign were saying, well, we're going to lend our vote to the Liberals because of special circumstances. But it wasn't a judgment on the Bloc Québécois that they were making. Now, that being said, what also created this dynamics, in Quebec in particular, the only province where Pierre Poilievre never led the pack, was always in third place, was this notion at some point the Bloc surged, not because the Bloc was doing so well, but because a lot of Quebec voters looked at the numbers outside Quebec and thought to themselves, the rest of Canada is about to elect Pierre Poilievre. We don't want him. So we were going to build a wall by voting for the Bloc. And of course, that wall crumbled the second that Justin Trudeau left and the polls showed that Mark Carney had a shot at winning.
Well, then they built a wall around the Liberals in Quebec is really what happened to keep out Pierre Poilievre.
I mean, they're looking at 440 seats and it looks at this point in the evening like they're going to get better than that.
Okay, some other good news for the Liberals at this hour. Let me show you who has just been elected as a member of Parliament for the very first time, and that is Mark Carney, Canada's Prime Minister. This is his first time running for public office. He was tempted many times, but never decided to go for it. And this time he has, and he has won handily in his riding of Nepean.
He probably just got the lead on 12.
I can't remember what I have this trivia somewhere.
Now,
but
I'm
the
looking
last
at the
time that a
previous
Prime
one,
Minister's riding was
2021
in the
election for
nation's
this
capital.
particular seat between
I'll go find
Sean
that for you. But
Jamaria
Mark
and
Carney
Matt
winning
Sinistra.
his own riding tonight.
She only
That is
beat
the
him
first
by
time
7,000
that he has
votes.
won public office, the first time he has sought
was
public office, and
29,000
now
to
he can also
22,000.
not only
So
be
do we
Prime
really
Minister,
want to call this
but
with
be elected
3,000
as
votes?
Prime Minister, something that he wasn't
Knowing that it was
before.
the
That is
margin
Liberal
was
headquarters where they are
7,000,
waiting for
and the
more
total voters
information,
is
obviously, about how
60,000.
this evening is going to unfold and what kind of
I just feel like
government
the
they will
margin's too
celebrate
big for the total we
tonight. David
have
Cochrane.
for you to
You know, Rosie, I'm
calculate
beginning to
a
think Mark
check
Carney's never going to be the
Just
finance
saying, I think
minister
that
at
check
this
mark's
rate, because
because
that was
it's-
always the rumor and his entry into Canadian politics.
For no other reason.
I want to go through sort of where the Liberals are at this stage, you know, to support the reason why we have projected a Liberal government and to show why a majority is still very much in play. And I'm going to go all the way back to Newfoundland and Labrador just to show you something here. This is Terra Nova and the Peninsulas. This has been a Conservative seat throughout the night, but just have a look at this. It's now down to a 28-vote lead. This has been happening in a lot of the ridings in Atlantic Canada where the advance vote is being counted late and where the Liberals did a really good job of getting their vote in early over that Easter weekend. So with 12 polls reporting, you can see Anthony Germain, the Liberal candidate there, chewing up that Conservative lead and getting now within less than 30 votes. There's been similar stories. We saw that happen in Central Nova, in Nova Scotia, where Sean Fraser was way down for a period of time, but as more and more advanced polls have come in, he's moved into the lead, and also in New Brunswick, in Miramichi, Grand Lake, where the advanced polls have put the Liberals into the lead there. So the Liberals started the night with 24 seats that they held as the 32 in Atlantic Canada. They're back at 24 with a chance, if Terra Nova flips, to get it to that 25 that we talked about on the path to majority earlier. So still a chance for them to hit the threshold here. We'll go into Quebec, where the last I checked, because the numbers are changing soon, they were at 42 seats. They're now at 44 seats in Quebec, 13 of them pickups. And look at this. We're still waiting for a little bit of data on the island of Montreal, only really in one riding. There is a Conservative leading on the island of Montreal right now in the riding of Mount Royal, so we'll have to see where that goes. But either way, the Liberals at this point in the night, with still a lot of votes to be counted, are ahead of the 40-vote threshold they needed to be at in Quebec. Now, Ontario, a lot of votes being counted, slightly different story. They are at 69 seats of the 122. They are down 6 right now. You're seeing some movement here in the GTA seats that have been the stronghold of the Liberals. Oops, I didn't mean to click on Kitchener, but they're doing well in Kitchener. But there's only about 11% of the vote
election
counted
results for Carleton are not
and
yet
again,
available.
this is going to
and
be a
that means
pattern
about
throughout the
2
night
minutes
with
the
the
TV will
Liberal
just
vote.
check mark
They
him as
are
a winner.
believed, widely believed by all the campaigns, we've heard this from Conservatives as well, to have outperformed their opponents in the advance vote, and in a lot of cases, that comes in last. So while they're at 150 seats there right now, the last time I checked, there were still about a dozen seats that we were waiting on results for that all the campaigns believe are going to go Liberal. So you can bear that in mind as a reason why we have not yet ruled out the possibility of a Liberal majority government. In Manitoba, we had set the threshold at 6 for them to be on the path for majority. They're right at 6 right now. They've got 2 pickups. They're leading right now in Winnipeg West, which was a Conservative seat. They are not leading in Winnipeg Centre, but they have picked up, or at least leading in the Northern Manitoba riding right now. In Saskatchewan, we said 1. All they needed was 1. Well, guess what? It looks like they have 1. They're up there. They're leading right now in Desnethe. That's Buckley Boulanger, as Ian was telling us. They're nowhere right now in the Saskatoon ridings, though Mark Carney did go there, and Saskatoon University was a riding that the Liberals had talked about as a potential gain for them. They've held right now 2 of their 3 in the north. Nunavut is still trending NDP. I don't want to ruin the NDP's night, but they are no longer ahead in Wetaskiwin, as we predicted earlier. But right now, the Liberals do have 2 seats in Alberta, and they're both in Calgary right now. So Calgary McKnight, where George Chahal was the incumbent, and Calgary Centre, which was on their target list. They're leading there now. They are not ahead in Edmonton. That is where they had 1 seat. That was Randy Boissonneau's seat in Edmonton Centre. That is blue right now in Edmonton Strathcona, maybe the safest NDP seat around. We don't have results from that yet. So with a lot still to come, Rosie, in Vancouver area in particular, the Liberals right now, they only have 8 in BC, but look at this, right? We got a lot to come, but of the 8 that are reporting, the Liberals have 3 pickups, and we're still not fully in to the Vancouver core and the suburbs there, and that is the Liberal stronghold of British Columbia. So they're at 155 right now at this point in time. There's still upside growth there for them. You can see a path to the delta of 17 that they need, and it might actually include Delta, which is a seat they hold on the lower.
You're in denial right now.
Okay,
and
so let me tell you part of the reason why that is there too. Was there a joke there that I missed that I was supposed to?
Yeah, I was talking about deltas and deltas, you know, like sort of thing. Don't worry,
I got a lot of people talking to me. That was a funny one.
In a few minutes, you'll hear it.
There are 47 ridings still where the vote is under 100. So that gives you a sense of why we are still holding off in determining what kind of government this is. But as David rightly points out, it is still possible, and we'll show you more about that in a moment. And just because I have a lot of good colleagues who heard me, the only other Prime Minister to hold a seat in the Ottawa area was John A. Macdonald. So Mark Carney becomes number 2. Ian, over to you.
So interesting things happening in British Columbia in terms of the vote. And let's look at the vote change so far in the province of British Columbia. And you see both the Conservatives and the Liberals up. Liberals up by 15 percentage points. And who is down? Well, no surprise. The NDP, almost 16 percentage points. And in some of the ridings, you can see the impact of that. Let's take a look at Kelowna. Kelowna is really interesting because if you look at what happened to the NDP support there, at least as of right now, it was 18% in 2021. It's down to 2.7%. And it seems to be going to both the Conservatives and the Liberals. The Liberals right now in the lead, the incumbent in second place. Let's take a look at Okanagan Lake West, South Kelowna. There, the NDP support has gone from 18.9 percentage points to 5.5. Now, super early, but still interesting to note and keep an eye on. And now Richmond East, Steveston, this is another riding that kind of shows what's happened to the NDP support. It's gone from 19% in 2021 to 3.7%. Both the Liberals and Conservatives up. It looks like the Conservatives in Richmond East, Steveston might be benefiting more from that drop in NDP support than the Liberals are. But throughout British Columbia, we said this hours ago. I mean, maybe it was yesterday, I'm not sure. But anyway, hours ago.
We haven't been here since yesterday, to be fair.
That way,
I know.
Anyway, what would happen to NDP support? Would it drop? It seems to be doing that in British Columbia and in a province where the Liberals and Conservatives are so competitive in so many ridings. Who will benefit the most from that? Still very much in flux, but they both seem to be benefiting.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, so let's get another part of that story, and that's to look at whether a majority is still possible here as we wait to make a firm call on what kind of government Canada has chosen. So here you go again. This is back to the House of Commons. All those red seats there, leading and elected. So that gets you up to 157.
And these 157 aren't even guaranteed. Only 22 of those
are the pink
actually
seats.
done.
That is 9. So they need to hold the 157 they have.
9 more incumbents to come.
9,
so they
and they are still under 6, not quite reaching a majority so far with those numbers.
They're under.
But let me give you another little piece of information that is relevant as we think about whether this is going to be a majority government. And that is that there are 44 ridings where the margin is 100 votes or less. And in 24 of those, the Liberals are in second place, meaning that there is still a possibility that they could flip some of those ridings and indeed get over that threshold of 172. And that also tells you
There's
why
20 plus
we're not
liberal
saying anything
possible
just yet,
flips
because
left.
there's a lot
So there's enough possible
still in
flips
flux
left.
here.
As
It's
those get
possible,
eliminated,
but it's getting a
they'll be able
little
to
bit harder
hone in
for
on
the
what kind of
Liberals to get
government
there,
it'll be.
and they're going to have to work a lot harder
I have
in
a feeling
these
this looks like a
other
majority
ridings and
Liberal
these counts
government.
in order to make it. Let's go to Adrian now, who has some results.
You
I
bet. You're
just
talking
can't,
about tiny
I can't make
margins.
any
You're
other
talking about
prediction with how I'm
areas.
seeing
Liberals want to
everything
flip. Let's look at
disappear
some of
from the
those. Let's
block
start
and
with
the New
Kitchener Center.
Democrats.
You are not seeing green on the map
If everyone
on the
coagulates
bar
around
at the
two
bottom
parties, I think the
because Mike
Liberals get
Morris
majority.
is trailing by 33. Just 3 out of 213 polls reporting, but it's the very thing Rosie's been talking about. Let's look at another one, Hamilton Center. Again,
55.
the NDP wanted to hang on to that. Liberals are leading with
that's crazy.
55,
They're all right
just
around
55.
500 right
One
there.
last, another one that's tiny margin. That is Niagara South, and that is a riding that would have flipped to the Conservatives in redistribution. The Liberals are holding it with just 22. Only one poll reporting there, Rosie.
Okay, so some of those early results we're seeing, some of those tight places. Oh, I think you've got one more
Oh, I
elected
do.
here.
Well,
Yeah,
look
off
at
you
that.
go.
And
Yeah.
that's a big one to miss. That is Leslie Church, projected elected in Toronto St. Paul's. That was a rematch against Don Stewart. That lead, 1,840. She lost that by 647 votes in that by-election that started everything that's happening right now. You can draw a direct line between that and this.
Yeah, that loss, that by-election loss,
Why didn't we
was
vote
part
then?
of
If you
what
could've called
got
before,
Liberals
you know?
upset with Justin Trudeau and starting to speak more
called that
openly
one.
about how he needed
Did
to
they?
leave
Or
a
no, they
lot of
did checkmark
Conservatives
that one,
thought
didn't
that
they?
by-election win
How
was
can they
an
checkmark when it's at
anomaly.
45 out of
And
180
indeed,
or
the Liberals have taken back that riding tonight with Leslie Church. Let's have a look at Conservative headquarters now and see what's shaking over there. Also in Ottawa. Okay. Yeah. That is what it looks like when you know you're not going to form government, and it looked like you were back in January, 25 points ahead. They are waiting to see whether they can hold the Liberals to a minority, which would be something to celebrate for them, but we are waiting to see more. I should also tell you that we are waiting for results to come in from Pierre Poilievre's riding. They've started to come in. Remember, he and his riding was up against 91, I believe, other candidates. But as you can see there, this is only one poll reporting. The Liberals slightly ahead. The expectation would be that Pierre Poilievre would win, but there was some concern expressed about how that long ballot initiative, which is a protest movement to try and protest the first past the post system that we have, would affect this.
His ballot?
Obviously,
Why not
Elections
Carney?
Canada
Why
has
not
been
Jamie?
counting
Nope, let's
those
go for the
ballots for a
Conservative.
very long time. They got special
Protest my
dispensation to
ass.
start much earlier in the day. Oh, David's got a long ballot with him.
Rosie,
of course you have a prop.
Because we have an arts and craft division at Power and Politics, we had a replica. This is the ballot you're dealing with in Carleton, right? This is what the longest ballot, this is what 91 names look like, right? And you gotta do this to kind of find Pierre Poilievre. He's right there, by the way, on the ballot. Bruce Fanjoy, the Liberal, is right there on the ballot. But just look at the sheer girth of this thing. Right? Just look at this, 91 names. So you got to get this, you got to write it, you got to fold it up, they got to stuff it into, I don't know, a mail box as opposed to a ballot box. And there were 43,000 of these cast in the advance vote, right? So that's already in there in the system. That's why they got that special dispensation to go early. So while we may know that the Liberals are going to form government, we don't yet know whether it's going to be a majority government or not. Those by-elections that we were talking about, this happened in Toronto St. Paul. We hosted a by-election special there and with LaSalle and Marivera. It was 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning before you got results. Now, with a leader and a seat on the line, may go faster, but they had to count tens of thousands of these. Yeah, that's the challenge we're up against.
I do have to say that those numbers that we saw there with a Liberal advantage, it's because the advance polls were counted first for that riding. So let's not, no one's going to suggest here that that's the direction this is going to take. Arif, you wanted to say something there?
Well, I think it's interesting. You showed that photo of the folks in the conservative conservative room, and the concern that I have is actually what it's going to look like that first Conservative caucus meeting. What I'm getting at, Rosemary, is that in terms of expectations, the expectations were quite large on the part of Pierre Poilievre's caucus, that he would deliver them into government, minority or majority, but he would deliver them into government. They have this legislation that we deal with all the time as parliamentarians. First act of a caucus is to decide on the
Americans are calling it.
The private members bill about what we're going to do.
If you want to Get going. Andrew Coyne's ready for this conversation.
But it's an interesting conversation because I just think what we've seen after consecutive elections is Andrew Scheer turf, Bruno Toole turf. So Pierre Poilievre is concerned with his caucus and the expectations. And I would hear about that on the floor
We'll have to maybe do a
committees,
follow-up
Rosemary.
tomorrow.
I would hear about it on the floor of
with
the House of Commons.
full
People measuring the
results,
drapes on their
since
future
obviously we're still
ministerial
seeing.
offices. That has not happened tonight. There's going to be unhappy conservatives.
Sure. But let's see. You know, if he improves the
17,000
Conservatives' results from the last vote, which was 128.
That's still
with
alarmingly small in number.
He's at
if you think about
133,
it.
134 here. I don't know. It's possible that some people will want to let him.
Yep, there's Canada.
He could say this is a partial victory if he holds him to a minority. I don't know. I'm just saying. Andrew, you went in, and then I got to go to Catherine here.
It's one thing to measure the drapes. It's another thing to measure the coffin. You know, it's
Yep.
maybe a little. I think it will depend in part on whether it's a majority or minority.
Totally.
I think you absolutely are right. That if he comes out of this with 40% of the vote, he would have bettered Stephen Harper. The other question is, you know, he's got such a lock on the base of the party. Can you really take him out even if the caucus decides?
Yes,
the caucus might turf it. I mean, the base might vote him back in.
Okay,
but Rosemary, in terms of the base of the party, it's the inability to stand up to that base in Alberta that has cost him this election.
Okay,
if he could have stood up to Daniel Smith, I think that's what's happened.
Let's talk about it after. I do want to spend time. We're not going to write off anyone because we're not at that stage in the evening at all. Catherine Cullen, apparently you have a guest.
Yes, and first we're going to just talk a little bit about what is going on in Quebec before we get to Vanessa Lee, our colleague on the island of Montreal. Let's start by taking a look at what is going on in LaSalle. Emard Verdun.
Well.
Oh, perhaps. In fact, we are going to go to Vanessa Lee right away. Let's just get to the good stuff. And there you are, Vanessa Lee, on the island of Montreal. I believe you are with some prominent Liberals. Tell us what's going on.
Well, Catherine, we are at the Society of Arts and Technology in the heart of downtown Montreal, and this is a very happy place because this is where more than a dozen Liberal candidates in the greater Montreal area are gathering and celebrating tonight. And joining me now is Stephen Guilbeault, the Quebec Lieutenant, most recently responsible for Parks Canada as well as Canadian culture and identity.
Well,
Mr. Guilbeault, congratulations on your party's win. How are you? What's going through your mind right now? Because your riding is still too close to call.
Yes, I think things are looking very well in the riding, but as you rightly say, it's too close to call yet. Or it's very early. I think our numbers are very good, but are very early. We're very grateful that Canadians have decided to give us another mandate, and we feel honored, and we will work hard for Canadians. We're asking for a strong government because we know we have tough days ahead, certainly with the U.S. administration and President Trump. We know it's going to be complicated, so the stronger the Canadian government can be, the more united we are, the easiest it's going to be to face President Trump.
What do you think made the difference in this election that Canadians have voted for another Liberal government? And how confident are you that it will be a majority government?
Well, clearly the numerous attacks by President Trump on the Canadian economy, but not just the economy, on our sovereignty and our very identity, I think have really mobilized Canadians. And I think they saw in Prime Minister Carney someone who has experience on the world stage, someone who has experience with the economy, with finance, who has managed crisis, versus Pierre Poilievre, who's never done anything else than work on Parliament Hill in Ottawa. And they felt he was the right person for what's coming ahead and the difficult times we have ahead of us.
We appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Back to you, Catherine.
Vanessa Lee in Montreal, and Rosie, worth noting, Stephen Guilbeault's riding, it was Gilles Ducep's old riding. It's gone Bloc in the past. It went NDP. Even in 2015, Hélène Laverdière kept that riding.
That's right.
Right now, though, Stephen Guilbeault, about 46% of the vote. Still early numbers, though.
Okay. And you can see there at the bottom of your screen, we have still not made a call about what kind of government Mark Carney will be leading as the 24th Prime Minister. 162 seats leading and elected for the Liberals, 138 for the Conservatives, 24 for the Bloc, 10 leading or elected for, I think they're just leading, but maybe leading and elected for the NDP. You need 12 to form official party status. The Greens, oh, look, they just popped up. It seems like every time I mention them, they just appear. Leading and elected in 1. Remember that the number that the Liberals are still hoping to get to tonight is 172. That would give them a majority government. and of course the ability, the mandate to implement their agenda much, much easier than if they're going to have to work with another party. But what we're seeing tonight is really the story of what this election has been. Largely a two-party race and the collapse of the Bloc and the NDP's vote right now. I want to talk maybe a little bit about popular vote and whether it matters here. I'm just looking at our dashboard. The Liberals are at 44.7%, the Conservatives at 40.6%. And I would just note that these numbers are so big, right? They are so big compared to what you would normally see in an election. 2015, for instance, Justin Trudeau won his majority with 39.47% of the popular vote. That is, I guess, just because we're in this two-party race. Is that how I should read that, Chantal?
Yeah, you should also wait to have the full score.
Yes, of course.
What you're getting is a lot of those Alberta Conservative votes that are kind of
pushing theirs up,
raising the numbers for the Conservatives. But having said that, yes, it is both numbers are way too high for the kind, and that's why when you look at the seats and the possibility of a majority government, it's really hard to have a minority government if you do not have a strong third-party presence. And at this point, yes, the Bloc looks like it's going to get 23, 24 seats, but still, we're used to parliaments where minority rule means many parties that have an official party status.
Yes.
And at this point, that's not where we're going tonight. So I'm curious to see how the night unfolds. Yeah. I notice there are still loads of places where the vote is barely being counted.
Yes, there are probably 24 places where, no, 24 places where it has barely been counted. Worth remembering here that I think it's 6 of the last 8 federal elections have produced minority governments, right? The last majority government we had, of course, was Liberal in 2015.
And with 4 parties with official party status, we look like we're going down to 3. I don't really believe there are loads of new Democrat votes hidden in those uncounted votes.
No, we might get to 4. Does that concern anyone that there is fewer? Less representation of parties inside the House of Commons in terms of what that means for democracy, Andrew?
I don't think it's a good thing or bad thing on its own. I mean, again, you get into the issue of how representative is the popular vote in that regard. How well represented is it in terms of the number of seats?
Yeah.
But ultimately, the electorate is going to decide whether they want to have a multiplicity of parties or maybe in the present circumstances. That's the question is this a one-off? Or does this represent a greater degree of change? We've seen the NDP written off before they came back. We've seen the Liberals written off before.
The Bloc too, yeah.
We've seen the Bloc.
Yeah.
So these are enduring brands, and the wheel goes full circle, and they may come back.
Chantal, then Althea.
On the NDP, they went from no official party status in '93 to decade or two later, I admit, but still, at some point, they had presence across the country, from Atlantic Canada to BC, including Quebec. So that possibility is still there. Do not assume that a victory for the Liberals tonight is necessarily a Liberal reign for all times.
No.
At some point, the seeds of change will come back, and they might have a better chance to bloom.
Yeah, and Liberals probably shouldn't assume that either. Andrew, and then Althea.
One thing I think we should be looking for is not just, will they get over the majority, will BC put them over the top, but also how will the Liberals do in Western Canada? One of the things people have been very worried about, some people, is will another Liberal victory cause Westerners, and some Westerners anyway, to give up on Canada? I should note that the numbers coming in BC and Alberta are looking pretty close to what the polling numbers were suggesting, and the polling numbers are saying the Liberals are going to do better, at least in the popular vote in those provinces, better than they have since 1968. So that should hopefully dampen down some of the sort of attempts to portray this as the West being shut out yet again.
We'll see. Last word to you, Althea.
Just a few things. So on that is something that the Liberals were quite concerned about, which is why Mr. Carney spent the last day going to Saskatchewan, going to Alberta to make that case, hoping to grab to grab seats that they otherwise did not have. I think it's not a thing about democracy if there are no parties, smaller parties in the House. I think it's just, if the balance of power is the Bloc Québécois, it is an opening for the Conservatives to say that it's an illegitimate coalition, much like they did in 2008, which basically means that we will have another election.
But it's not a coalition. It's just one party helps another, right?
Right. But how, I mean, they framed the last supply and confidence agreement as a coalition.
The Bloc isn't about to sign a supply and confidence agreement with anyone.
Of course not. They will do issue by issue as they always have, as they have always communicated. But that will not stop the Conservative Party from framing it in that way.
Right.
And I think it will make it very difficult, especially if Mr. Poilievre remains the Conservative leader, because I don't see areas where, although there actually are lots of policy areas where they could get together, I don't see the personalities leading to cooperation in the House of Commons, which basically just means that we will have an election, if it is a minority government and the Bloc has a balance of power, either later this year or next year.
But at that level, if the NDP doesn't even need official party status, it can have a share of the balance of power. Let's agree that we are not yet in those scenarios where the Bloc was going to become the official opposition. And then I was going to hold a knife to the throat of the government. That's not what's happening.
No, there's
I got to get to David Cochrane here. He's got some stuff from the 905.
Well, look, this is part of the reason why we are where we are. You see the Liberal number actually retreating a little bit. Right now, they are only at 65 seats in Ontario. They are down 10, down 11. And I'm going to look at the Greater Toronto area, and this gives you a sense of where we are right now. So you can see here, Mississauga is blue, Brampton is blue, another Brampton is blue. So Peel region has been breached by the Conservatives at this point in time. As we were saying earlier, this is the gate that they need to break down and get closer to the downtown part of Toronto if they're going to make it more of a game at the top line numbers, but certainly in Ontario. And the Liberals are having a little bit of a struggle, at least at this hour of the night. Similar story, there we go, in Vaughan Woodbridge. This is a Conservative-held seat. Thornhill, that's Melissa Lansman. But York Centre, this is another Liberal seat that is blue at the moment. And in Richmond Hill, Aurora, Oak Ridge is a Newmarket, Aurora. York region and Peel region. The Liberals felt pretty good about Peel region. There was some top-line polling suggesting that it was tightening up there as you got towards Election Day. And you are seeing that also up in the York region, which is what the Liberals were the most worried about in their seats in Ontario. But an interesting thing developing as well here in southwestern Ontario, because look, the Conservative number is 144. Like, that's way up for Pierre Poilievre. Like, that is a big increase in the seats, at least at this point in the night. In the NDP, from Hamilton to London to Windsor right now, those are blue. The conventional wisdom was the collapse of the NDP vote would elect Liberals. But if the Liberals and the NDP both are strong second and third, the Conservatives could come up the middle. That may be what is happening in those areas. And just going back to the GTA, I know this was a concern up in the York region here, was that the NDP vote dropping would help the Liberals run up the score in the downtown Toronto core, where they're going to win just by larger margins. But there were not really any NDP vote to be gained in a lot of these 905 outer areas. And that would just, you would have a false sense of how viable you were in those ridings, and you would see Conservatives flip those blue. So the Liberals, still early yet in Ontario, but vote inefficiency not playing in their favor as they are down double-digit seats in a province that pollsters from start to finish had them up double-digit points, right?
But that, again, speaks to what we're talking about around the popular vote and the seat efficiency. Nothing is working as it normally would in an election. That's what's happening, right?
Yes, and Donald Trump obviously disrupted this entire election. I mean, the U.S. president makes about $400,000 U.S. a year. The Liberals should probably book that as a campaign expense, given the way that it's helped them throughout this thing. But, until we get sort of the urban votes in mass number to know exactly how the cities of Canada are going to vote, and the suburbs of Canada are going to finally vote, and of course British Columbia, it's hard to know if they're going to get there. But the vote efficiency that has helped the Liberals win the 2019 federal election and win the 2021 federal election, despite losing the popular vote, at this stage, we're not yet seeing that. Now, they're starting to tick back up. They're in 161 right now. Them and the New Democrats and the Greens, Rosie, That's a majority. You got a bingo right there. But, you know, that's a whole lot of work that still needs to be sorted out at this point of the night.
Okay, thank you so much for that, David Cochrane. If you're just tuning in, we have, in fact, called a Liberal government with Mark Carney as Canada's 24th Prime Minister. He also has been elected for the very first time in his life in the riding of Nepean. We are waiting to see whether it's a minority or a majority, so we're going to go to Adrian now, who's got some results, projected results, maybe that will help us get there.
Indeed. So we're looking at a projected elected, the only one that is a flip in Ontario so far. That is Toronto St. Paul's with Leslie Church. Again, the only projected elected flip for the Liberals so far in Ontario. Wouldn't it be interesting to talk to Leslie Church? Well, why don't we do that? Let's talk to Eli Glaster, who is in Toronto St. Paul's with Leslie Church. Hello, Eli.
Yeah, Adrian, so we are here in our room crammed with volunteers, and here she is, Leslie Church. Congratulations. I want to know from you that very close loss to Don Stewart back in June, and then to pick up the campaign and start again. How was it different when you started knocking on doors for now a second time?
Well, the difference was really Trump and Mark Carney. Donald Trump, I think, has really set the stakes for this election in a way that people understood at the doors. And the change of leadership. Mark Carney came in as a fresh, new, experienced leader for the Liberal Party, and I think people were looking for that too. So that really changed the playing field. And also it was more time to do the outreach that we needed, to hear from people heading into a general election as opposed to a by-election. And I think that was really important. So I'm deeply, deeply grateful for the result tonight.
You lost in the by-election to the Conservative Don Stewart, a small margin of votes of just over 600. Now here you are. How are you feeling this evening?
I feel very good. I feel so grateful for the trust that the community of St. Paul's has put in me. I'm so grateful for the team. We've had just people coming out in this election in ways that I've never seen before, getting involved because of what's at stake. And so I really hope to continue that engagement as we go forward.
I understand people were coming to your campaign manager when he was out putting out signs, something like 4 times the amount of requests for signs. So there really was, this time, as opposed to the previous